A chilling winter wind howls through the silent village. Inside a warm tavern, travelers huddle together, whispering about a reckless man tearing through the ongoing war. They call him a crazy mercenary, a warrior who fights as if he doesn't care whether he lives or dies. Once a battle ends, he simply vanishes like a ghost, only to hunt down the next war zone. A mercenary with no regard for his own life? It's a strange and terrifying tale to hear. But what chills them to the bone is the phrase he mutters after every bloodbath. Damn it, I live again. The rumors say if the Empire is fighting a war, this man is guaranteed to be there soaking the snow in blood. It doesn't look like he's fighting for gold. Every swing of his blade screams of pure, unadulterated revenge. Who is this monster? Some say he's no mere mercenary. They say he used to be a prince of a fallen, forgotten kingdom. A broken man wandering the frozen wastelands, desperately searching for a place to die. Driven by agonizing self-torture, he throws himself into the jaws of death. His true name? The third prince of Briol, Yuri Briol. It's a dishonorable name, belonging to the very man who dragged his own kingdom into complete ruin. 10 years ago, long before the snow and the bloodshed, things were very different. Inside a lavish, bustling casino, the air is thick with greed and excitement. A young Yuri laughs arrogantly, raking in a massive pile of chips. I'm lucky today, he cheers, entirely unbothered by the glares of the older gamblers. He is just 18, but the title of Third Prince of Briol gives him an aura of untouchable confidence. Court Major Nando watches nervously as Yuri continues his winning streak. The older men across the table are furious. They demand one more game. Without a second thought, Yuri casually doubles the stake. Hernando leans in, urgently whispering that they need to leave before things get ugly. But it's too late. The losing gamblers slam their fists on the table. You should leave while we're letting you walk out on your own 2 feet, one of them snarls. They accuse the young prince of scamming them with dirty little tricks. Yuri's arrogant smile vanishes in an instant. Dirty little tricks? He scoffs, standing up with a dangerous glint in his eye. Do you even know who I am? The thugs laugh it off. Based on his reckless behavior, they assume he's just some cocky commoner. What, are you the king or something? They mock him. They boast that even if he were the king, they wouldn't back down. Tension fills the air as they insult his lineage, mocking the household that only knows how to play with swords. That's the breaking point for Yuri. In a flash of motion, he kicks the table away, sending cards and chips flying into the air. He grabs the loudest thug and slams him brutally. The entire casino falls completely silent in shock. Yuri steps forward, his boots crunching over the scattered playing cards. Listen closely, you trio of fools, he says, his voice dripping with venom. He proudly declares his true identity as the third prince of Briol. The thugs pale in absolute terror, realizing the massive mistake they've just made. Yuri smirks, enjoying the fear in their eyes. Moments later, he leaves the thugs groaning in a bloody heap on the floor. But his night is far from over. He slips out into the cool night air. He rushes to a secret meeting spot, apologizing for being late due to his father's sudden call. Standing in the shadows is a breathtakingly beautiful woman. She is Yekaterina Ivarna Grandzine, the princess of the rival empire. She glares at him coldly, annoyed that she had to sneak past her guards just to see him. Yuri nervously tries to calm her down, begging for her understanding. With his father leaving the kingdom soon, he has to be incredibly careful. He leans in, about to share a massive state secret that he shouldn't tell anyone. Yekaterina feigns hurt, asking if she is just anyone to him. Flustered, Yuri quickly backpedals, desperate to keep her happy. He hands her a brilliant, glowing sapphire necklace. Yekaterina turns away, pretending to be deeply offended. Why give this to me if you don't trust me? She asks, manipulation lacing her voice. She drops the necklace onto the stone path, a sharp crack echoing in the quiet night. She orders him not to contact her again until she reaches out first. Yuri is left standing alone in the dark, completely oblivious to the trap he just walked into. He sighs, wondering how he's going to win her forgiveness. A menacing silhouette watches from the shadows, a sinister smile spreading across its face. After that fateful night, everything goes horribly wrong. The already fragile peace between Briol and the Empire shatters completely. The Empire stops making empty threats and launches a full-scale invasion. Explosions rock the capital as fire rains down from the sky. It's an invasion, the guards scream, panic tearing through the street. Yuri frantically orders the immediate evacuation of the castle. But the roaring flames quickly consume everything he once knew. The majestic Briol castle turns into a blazing inferno. Despair washes over the kingdom as the war heavily favors the relentless empire. An eternity seems to pass in the bloody trenches of the battlefield. Countless lives are sacrificed, and the war shows absolutely no sign of ending. A bloodied knight collapses, screaming for the young prince to evacuate. Yuri desperately searches the chaotic battlefield for reinforcements, but there is no one coming to save them. In his darkest moment, a horrifying realization strikes him. At first, he tried to deny the ugly truth, calling it a mere coincidence. But as he reflects on the life-or-death battles, all the pieces fall into place. Yekaterina had betrayed him. She was the only one who knew his father was leaving. The very moment the king left Briol, the empire's invasion began. He had foolishly handed his kingdom's greatest weakness right to the enemy. A crumpled note bearing the word sorry is the only thing he has left of her. Enemy soldiers surround him, their blades reflecting the raging fires. He's the prince. Kill him and Briol is done for, they shout. Yuri fights desperately, parrying a flurry of deadly strikes. But there are too many of them. He is overwhelmed, pushed to the absolute brink. Suddenly, a familiar figure jumps in front of him. A loyal knight intercepts a fatal blow meant for Yuri. "Make it out of here, your highness," the knight gasps, blood spilling from his lip. He falls, sacrificing his own life to buy the prince a few precious seconds. Yuri stares in absolute horror as his men die one by one just to protect him. "Hurry, your highness, there is no future for Briol without you." The enemy forces surge forward, eager to claim the royal bounty. The prince is running away, get him. Yuri sprints blindly through the burning ruins of his home. His lungs burn, his legs scream in agony, but he forces himself to keep moving. He ducks into a dark alleyway trying to catch his breath. He realizes his father hasn't returned. He must have been killed by the Empire. If Yuri dies here, Briol will completely lose the will to fight. He thinks of the knights who just gave their lives for his escape. The Empire will pay for their sins one day, he vows to himself. He can hear the heavy footsteps of the Empire's soldiers drawing closer. He tells himself he needs to survive, to rebuild his kingdom, to get revenge. But deep down, he knows that was just a childish, impossible dream. Reality is far more brutal than his naive hopes. Everyone is dead, his kingdom is gone. What was all that spilled blood even for? He doesn't know, his mind is completely blank. Now he just punishes himself by fighting in endless, meaningless wars. He wanders the continent, a broken ghost looking for a place to finally rest. Always taking on the most dangerous missions, using suicidal tactics. Hoping that one day an enemy blade will finally give him peace. A voice suddenly echoes in the darkness, snapping him back to reality. So the solution you came to is self-torture. Yuri freezes, he knows that voice. Your selfishness knows no bounds, you do not even deserve death. A figure steps out of the shadows, clad in heavy armor. Yuri stares in disbelief. Everyone who knew his past should be dead. "It was all your fault," the ghostly figure snarls. The voice is filled with an agonizing, ancient fury. "It's your fault the Briol kingdom fell to ash." Yuri's eyes widen as he recognizes the man standing before him. "It's your fault my family's honor and my faith were destroyed in a single moment." "Yuri Briol!" the knight roars, unleashing a suffocating bloodlust. A man who should have died years ago is standing right in front of him. He has returned from hell itself to accuse the prince of his monstrous sins. Yuri grips his sword, his hands trembling. "Damn it," he mutters, the crushing weight of his guilt returning. He thought dying on the battlefield would finally erase his pain. But this relentless guilt is tearing him apart, even in his final moments. The knight raises his massive blade, ready to execute the traitorous prince. Briol's successors do not abandon their honor. The ghost of his past lunges forward with terrifying speed. No matter what, the clash of steel rings out, echoing through the desolate ruins. Yuri blocks the heavy strike, but the sheer force brings him to his knees. His body screams in pain as the knight ruthlessly beats him down. Every strike is fueled by a decade of pure hatred and betrayal. Yuri coughs up blood, unable to defend against the overwhelming assault. The knight grabs him by the collar, lifting him effortlessly. Yuri looks into the furious eyes of his former comrade, ready to accept his execution. But death will not come so easily to the man who ruined the world. Waking up in a cold sweat, Yuri Briol finds himself staring into the eyes of a man he thought was long gone, as seen in collage_1.jpg. Shock turns to pure disbelief as he questions how his father, who should be dead, is standing right before him. The bitterness of the past resurfaces, and Yuri can't help but lash out, accusing his father of living a life of hollow honor while failing those around him. His father remains unfazed, leaving Yuri to grapple with the surreal haunting sensation that he is somehow trapped in the afterlife. The sharp sting of an insult ignites a familiar explosive reaction between them, proving that old habits truly die hard. Yuri scoffs at the absurdity, desperate to wake up from what he assumes is a cruel, mocking vision. The accusations continue, with Yuri demanding his father repent for a lifetime of vanity, even as the world around them remains stubbornly solid. But as the tension reaches a breaking point, a single violent strike silences the room, leaving Yuri reeling. He desperately searches for the traditional signs of damnation, yet the familiar comforts of his reality refuse to fade, as shown in collage_2 JPEG. With a creeping realization, he wonders if this is truly the hell he deserves, or if something far more impossible has occurred. He scans his surroundings, searching for the torment he expects, but finds only the silence of a place that is not hell. The truth begins to dawn on him, and he questions the very nature of his existence in this moment. The servants move with a haunting familiarity, oblivious to the storm raging inside his mind. He watches them closely, desperately hoping they are not real, yet the world continues to churn on without him. He searches the darkness of his own mind for answers, but the familiar terrors of hell are nowhere to be found. The depth of his confusion deepens as he realizes he is not being punished by demons, but by the memories of his own past. A blinding light pierces through his uncertainty, signaling that he has been pulled back to a time he thought he had left behind forever. The reality of his situation sets in. He is no longer in hell, but trapped in the body of his younger self. Surrounded by his attendants, he realizes he has been thrust back to when he was merely 13 years old, as depicted in collage_3.jpg. The realization hits him like a tidal wave. He is being forced to relive the days that led to his ultimate ruin. He struggles to comprehend the return to his youth, clutching onto the fading remnants of his old self. This was the beginning of his end, a path he had walked once before and never wished to tread again. But despite the crushing weight of his memories, a sliver of hope emerges, realizing this is a second chance he never expected. The cycle of the past begins to repeat, with every event unfolding with chilling precision. He watches as the world forces him back into the rhythm of his tragic history, powerless to stop the hands of time. He refuses to accept his fate lying down, knowing he has been granted a rare, singular opportunity to change the outcome. He realizes that no matter how much he wishes to rewrite his history, the world is anchored to the events of his youth. Accepting the heavy burden of his return, he prepares to face the future he once knew, as seen in collage_4.jpg. He sits on his throne, fully aware that this spring holds both his greatest tragedy and his only hope for salvation. The return is absolute, and he is back at the exact moment his life began to spiral out of control. The dawn breaks over the kingdom, and he knows he must act immediately to break the cycle. His exhaustion is palpable, yet he knows he cannot afford a moment of rest if he intends to survive this time around. He retreats into the comfort of his covers, trying to gather his thoughts before the nightmare begins anew. The call for his training echoes through the room, a stark reminder of the weakness he once possessed. He springs into action, his mind sharp with the tactical awareness of a man who has lived through war. His movements are frantic, desperate to shed his old lazy habits and become someone capable of protecting his future. He realizes that he cannot stand still, for his past mistakes are already waiting for him just outside the door. The maid enters, unaware that the boy she serves is no longer the sheltered prince she once knew. He demands that she help him prepare, signaling a shift in their dynamic that leaves her utterly baffled. The trauma of the past manifests in his request, a desperate attempt to feel something real, as shown in collage_5.jpg. He looks at his hands, remembering the blood and death that defined his previous life, and knows he must become stronger. He commands the maid to strike him, shocking her into a state of frozen disbelief. He is not looking for pain, but for a wake-up call to prove that he is truly alive and back in the past. His order is absolute, and even the confusion in her eyes cannot stop him from seeking the edge he needs. The absurdity of this situation hangs in the air, yet he remains resolute, refusing to back down from his own demand. He smiles to himself, knowing that this small act of insanity is the first step toward breaking his old mold. The world outside his window looks peaceful, a stark contrast to the internal battle he is fighting to change his destiny. Birds take flight, mirroring the freedom he is desperately trying to seize for his own future. He watches the courtyard from above, recognizing the place where his failures first took root. He steps into the yard, his eyes focused on the wooden dummy that once represented the limit of his potential, as seen in collage_6.jpg. He takes up the sword, the weight of the wood feeling foreign yet oddly nostalgic in his experienced hands. The training begins with a strike that echoes with the force of his newfound resolve. He remembers the strength of his own past mistakes, realizing that his own incompetence was his greatest enemy. The clash of steel, or in this case wood, is the only language he knows how to speak to his instructor. His cheek still stings, but he doesn't care. His focus is entirely on correcting his stance and his life. He realizes that even his instructor has stopped bothering to correct him, a testament to how far he had fallen. The instructor moves with a practiced ease, expecting the same lazy, uncooperative student from before. He stands his ground, ready to push through the exhaustion and show the world that the prince has changed. Every spar is a test, not just of his skill, but of his will to defy the history he already knows. The instructor notes his lack of progress, oblivious to the fact that a war-hardened mind now guides the boy's body, as shown in collage_7.jpg. He reflects on the long, stagnant years of his youth where he chose ease over true growth. He knows that if he doesn't change now, the tragedy of his past will be his only future. He grips his weapon, determined to push beyond the limits that previously confined him. The challenge is set, and he prepares to face the one man who could either break him or forge him into something greater. He stands ready, eyes locked on his opponent, waiting for the signal to begin. His movements are deliberate, a far cry from the careless swings of his previous life. He launches into the fight, his eyes cold and focused, surprising his instructor with his sudden intensity. The instructor moves to retaliate, but finds that his student is no longer the easy target he once was. He realizes that this will not be a typical sparring match, but a trial by fire. The air crackles with the tension of his ambition as he prepares to show his worth, as seen in collage_8 JPEG. His resolve is like an iron blade, forged in the fires of a life that he has already lived. He stares down his opponent, his mind racing with calculations and memories of past duels. The clash is immediate and fierce, a storm of movement that catches everyone by surprise. His instructor's blade strikes with precision, but he finds himself blocked at every turn. He pushes forward, his movements fluid and efficient, shedding the rust of his youthful negligence. The realization hits his instructor that this is not a game anymore, and he must treat the prince as a genuine threat. He is overwhelmed by the sudden shift in his student's prowess, struggling to keep up with the unexpected rhythm. He is pushed to his absolute limit, his lungs burning and his body screaming for relief. He knows that every strike he lands is a blow against his past self, a victory he desperately needs. The instructor realizes that he is facing a boy with the heart of a mercenary, a terrifying transformation that makes him tremble, as shown in collage_9.jpg. The aura of the sword demon is no longer a legend, but a reality he must confront head-on. He is pushed back by the sheer force of his own effort, panting as the world blurs around him. His opponent is relentless, every move a masterclass in efficiency that the prince never should have known. He continues to strike, ignoring the pain in his limbs as he channels his past experience into this single moment. The exhaustion hits him hard, but he refuses to collapse, knowing he has only just begun to change. He reaches out, his hand shaking but steady, a symbol of the fragile hope he carries. He pauses for a moment, looking at his hand as if seeing the potential for the first time. The instructor stares at him in disbelief, unable to process the sudden improvement in his student. The spar concludes, leaving both in a stunned silence that speaks volumes about the change that has taken place. He lies on the ground, sweat dripping from his face, aware that the eyes of his kingdom are finally starting to turn his way, as shown in collage_10.jpg. His instructor approaches, the weapon in his hand feeling heavier than ever before. The realization of his student's newfound skill begins to sink in, turning the dynamic of their relationship on its head. The intrusion comes at the worst possible moment, shattering the focus he had worked so hard to maintain. He is summoned, the authority of the king's request cutting through the air like a blade. He stares blankly, his mind still reeling from the exhaustion of his training and the news he just received. The past invades his present, and the name of the man who betrayed his kingdom echoes in his mind. He remembers the fire, the betrayal, and the face of the man who opened the gates to his ruin. The enemy is here, and he knows that the person standing in front of him is the harbinger of his previous life's destruction. He struggles to keep his composure, knowing that the man he hates more than anyone is now within his reach. His name is a curse on his lips, a reminder that the war he escaped is coming for him once again. He looks toward the door, dread and determination colliding in his chest, ready to face the man who destroyed his life. The table is set with a meal that feels far more important than just sustenance. He sits at the head of the table, his presence commanding the room as he observes the others with a sharp, calculating gaze. Every movement is precise, his newfound physique suggesting a level of discipline he never previously possessed. The subtle observations from those around him highlight just how much he has shifted. It is as if a completely different person now occupies his seat. The casual remark about his change is met with a quiet intensity, as if the secret to his transformation is far more complex than simple nourishment. He remains acutely aware of the whispers circling the table, his composure barely masking the heavy thoughts running through his mind. The weight of his past life continues to press down on him, turning even a simple meal into a battlefield of hidden agendas. He feels the irritation prickling beneath his skin, an old familiar sensation that refuses to be ignored. He struggles to keep his focus, knowing that one misstep could unravel the fragile foundation he has begun to build. The tension between them is palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the history they share and the deep-seated mistrust that remains. He watches his rival, noting that beneath the polished, dignified exterior, the person he once knew hasn't changed in the slightest. There is no room for complacency. He knows exactly what this individual is capable of, having felt the sting of betrayal once before. The bitterness of that memory threatens to surface, but he forces himself to remain grounded, determined to keep his composure. Every calculated move he makes is designed to ensure he never falls into the same traps that destroyed him in his previous life. He stares at the other man, recognizing that the grudge they once held could very well have been the spark for the kingdom's eventual downfall. The realization is sobering. His past actions, however small they felt at the time, might have had catastrophic consequences. He decides to take the initiative, directly challenging the man with a question that immediately strips away the pretense of the conversation. The offer to test his skills with a sword is not just an invitation to spar, it is a calculated provocation to see exactly what he is working with. He stands his ground, refusing to be intimidated by the sudden shift in the environment or the eyes watching him. The kingdom demands more than just blind loyalty. It demands knights with a vision, something this man clearly lacks. He pushes further, exposing the cracks in the other's armor, refusing to let him hide behind his title or his father's reputation. The challenge isn't just about swordsmanship, it's about character, and he is determined to expose the weakness hiding beneath the surface. The sudden surge of tension signals the start of something far more intense than a polite discussion. Caught off guard by the audacity of the move, the atmosphere shifts, turning a routine exchange into an immediate confrontation. He moves with a precision that speaks of years of experience, forcing his opponent to realize he has vastly underestimated his rival. The clash of weapons echoes, a brutal reminder that he is no longer the person who can be easily manipulated or ignored. He presses the advantage, his movements fluid and decisive, leaving no room for his opponent to find a rhythm. With a swift, calculated strike, he dismantles the other man's defense, proving that his words carry the weight of his actions. The fight spills across the ground, the reality of the situation dawning on his opponent as he finds himself completely outmatched. Every blow is a lesson, a harsh reminder that the hierarchy he relied on is meaningless in the face of true skill. He doesn't stop forcing his opponent to face the reality of his own lack of conviction. He ends the struggle decisively, not just winning the spar, but mentally dominating the space around him. He looks down, his presence imposing and his eyes cold, making it clear that he will not tolerate anything less than absolute excellence. He turns his back on the weapon, showing that his dominance doesn't require the blade, but rather an unshakable mindset. He forces his opponent to confront the harsh reality of his own failure. He isn't just fighting for the sake of it, he is purging the rot that threatens the future of the kingdom. He reminds him of his past sins, ensuring that the burden of those choices is felt in this moment. He stands tall, embodying the standard he demands from everyone who wishes to follow him. The lesson is simple: survive, but do so with a purpose that goes beyond basic survival instincts. His words strike harder than any sword, forcing an uncomfortable introspection that cannot be easily dismissed. He demands the truth, cutting through the layers of lies that have defined his opponent's life. He challenges the legitimacy of the power that has kept his opponent comfortable for so long. He offers a final piece of advice, a directive to look deeper and understand the true meaning of the struggle he is part of. He leaves him with the weight of that reflection, knowing that the seeds of doubt have been firmly planted. The interaction is over, but the change in his opponent has already begun, whether he realizes it yet or not. He walks away, the conversation having served its purpose in reshaping the dynamics of their relationship. He meets up with his ally, the lingering adrenaline from the duel slowly fading as they shift their focus to the future. They share a moment of understanding, both aware of the high stakes and the path that lies ahead. He reflects on his own reputation, acknowledging the rumors that have trailed him and the man he is choosing to become. He dismisses the past with a simple wave, his eyes firmly set on the goals that truly matter. He is done playing the fool, and he expects those around him to adjust to this new reality. He turns his attention to something more vital, the training required to survive in a world that is inherently hostile. He asks the crucial question, knowing that he needs a guide to unlock the potential within. The laugh is genuine, a rare moment of levity before he prepares to delve back into the hardships of his training. He is ready to face whatever exhaustion awaits him, knowing that the end result is worth every drop of sweat. The sun sets on another grueling day of training, a testament to his relentless drive. He collapses, the physical toll of his efforts finally catching up to him after pushing himself to the absolute limit. Even in his moment of recovery, his mind is already working, analyzing the next steps to ensure he succeeds. He finds a moment of stillness, the silence of the evening allowing him to collect his thoughts. He realizes that time is his most precious resource, and he has none to waste on mediocrity. He commits to the path, knowing that the journey he has chosen is one he must walk alone. He contemplates the mastery of his past, the techniques that once defined his existence as a mercenary. He remembers the peak of his power, a level of efficiency that he is now determined to reclaim and surpass. He focuses on the present, knowing that the foundation is already there if he is willing to do the work. He considers the alternative, wondering if there is a better path to follow than the one he already knows. The question lingers, prompting him to think critically about his next move. He is looking for someone with potential, someone who, with the right guidance, can become a force to be reckoned with. He weighs the options, carefully selecting the person he believes can be molded into greatness. He reflects on the past, knowing exactly who has the hidden talent that he needs to harness. He identifies the person, recalling a face from a memory that is still raw and painful. He speaks the name, his voice steady as he considers the history attached to it. He closes his eyes, bracing himself for the memories of a life that ended in smoke and fire. He visualizes the battlefield, the chaos, and the mediocre soldiers who were simply cannon fodder in a war they didn't understand. He sees the destruction, a visceral reminder of what happens when potential is left to wither and die. He recalls the image of that pathetic soldier, someone who barely survived the carnage because he didn't know how to fight. He feels the frustration, knowing that the talent was there but was never nurtured properly. He reflects on the tragedy of that missed opportunity, the potential wasted in the flames of conflict. He is adamant about the necessity of training, refusing to let that history repeat itself again. He is haunted by the past, but motivated to ensure that in this life things will be different. He steps into the light, ready to make his move and find the individual who needs his guidance. He is determined to find this person and mold them, no matter how much resistance he encounters along the way. He walks with confidence, his resolve stronger than ever as he heads toward his objective. He observes the training yard, his keen eyes scanning for the target he has chosen. He watches his potential knight, already planning how he will dismantle his weaknesses. He smirks, the challenge ahead only fueling his drive. It is finally time to knock some sense into the person who will stand by his side. The sun begins to set over the training grounds as the third prince arrives to inspect the progress of his soldier. He walks through the corridors, his eyes scanning the facility with a calm, observant gaze. Approaching the training area, he greets the men, curious to see how everyone is faring under the current regimen. The soldiers acknowledge his presence with respect, noting that while they work hard, they still have a long way to go to reach his level. Looking out over the yard, it is clear that morale is high and the knights are truly giving it their all. The prince's attention shifts, however, as he notices a specific recruit standing apart from the others. He turns to his companion, asking for the name of the rookie who seems to be holding back. Bernard leans in to explain the situation, his expression serious as he describes the recruit's lack of intensity. Even while training, the young man seems to be doing the absolute bare minimum, barely breaking a sweat while others push themselves to the limit. The prince watches closely, noting that simply going through the motions is not how one truly masters the blade. He decides to intervene, walking down to the training floor to address the situation personally. Pointing to the rookie, he demands that the slacker step forward and show him what he is truly made of. The tension in the room spikes as the prince challenges the rookie to a direct spar, forcing him to drop his lackadaisical attitude. The surrounding knights look on, whispering about the encounter and urging the rookie to stay sharp against royalty. The rookie picks up his practice sword, his hands tightening around the hilt as he prepares to face the prince. The atmosphere grows heavy, the air thick with anticipation as they stare each other down. With a firm step forward, the prince prepares to engage, warning the rookie not to disappoint him. The clash begins instantly, both combatants closing the distance in a blur of motion. The prince maneuvers with practiced ease, his movements precise and sharp enough to command respect. Nearby spectators can't help but be impressed by the prince's skill, noting that he is far from a typical royal. But something feels off. Even as they trade blows, the prince realizes his opponent is holding his own in a strange, calculated way. The rookie isn't just defending, he is reading the rhythm, syncing his every move to match the prince's pace. The prince senses the danger in this mimicry, realizing that this sparring match has become something far more intense than he planned. He continues to press the attack, his strikes landing with a rhythmic thud that echoes through the hall. The rookie dances away, a flicker of a smile appearing on his face as he realizes the game being played. He recognizes the pattern, understanding clearly that this is no longer just training, it is a performance of power. The wooden swords meet with a loud crack, the vibration traveling up their arms as they struggle for dominance. The prince goes on the offensive, delivering a heavy strike that forces the rookie to reveal his true speed. Surprised by the rookie's capability, the prince can only mutter in acknowledgement of the challenge. The rookie deflects the blow, his reflexes proving to be as sharp and instinctive as those of a beast. They separate for a brief moment, the intensity of the spar growing with every passing second. Frustration begins to boil over for the prince, who admits he was trying to take it easy, only to find it impossible. He lunges again, desperate to land a clean hit, but the rookie remains just out of reach. The swords collide again, a shower of sparks seemingly flying from the wood as they push against each other. The rookie grits his teeth, realizing that even with his past life's memories, his opponent is still a seasoned, formidable knight. He accepts the reality of the situation. He isn't going to win, but he refuses to give up without a fight. Suddenly, the rookie's eyes widen as he spots an opening, a flicker of opportunity in the prince's defense. The prince falters for a split second, surprised by the sudden shift in the rookie's intensity. With a burst of speed, the rookie drives his sword forward, finally finding the gap he has been hunting for. A smile tugs at his lips. He was right. He could land at least one hit if he timed it perfectly. The impact lands, the force of the strike sending the prince reeling back across the floor. The momentum of the fight shifts entirely, the prince losing his balance as the strike connects. The rookie stands in the center of the room, looking down at his blade in disbelief that he actually succeeded. The onlookers are stunned, whispering in amazement at the rookie who just landed a blow on the third prince. The prince catches his breath, looking at his opponent with a mix of shock and growing curiosity. He wonders how he, someone with superior skill, could feel so cornered by a simple trainee. He steps forward again, the heavy thud of his boots echoing in the quiet hall. His expression hardens as he wipes away his frustration, refusing to be outdone by his own recruit. The prince grips his sword tighter, his knuckles white as he prepares to retaliate with full force. The air around him seems to chill, the situation escalating from a simple spar into something much more dangerous. He stands his ground, a silhouette of determination, ready to prove his dominance once more. The other soldiers watch in growing alarm, realizing the prince has completely lost his cool. He unleashes a flurry of strikes, the speed and power behind them forcing the rookie into a desperate defense. The blue aura of his intent crackles, turning the sparring match into a blur of raw, unfiltered aggression. He moves to strike again, his focus narrowing down to the boy who dared to challenge him. The pressure is immense, threatening to break the rookie's guard with every passing strike. A realization hits the prince, his eyes flashing with a dangerous, sudden clarity. Tiny droplets of sweat and broken splinters of wood hit the ground, marking the intensity of their exchange. The rookie stands there, his breathing heavy as he processes the sudden escalation. The surrounding knights shout in panic, realizing the prince is no longer holding back in the slightest. Wiping his face, the rookie realizes it is time to get serious, as he slowly removes his gear. He reaches for the fabric, tying back his hair to get it out of his eyes before re-entering the fray. The prince prepares for another assault, his posture screaming that he is not done yet. They clash with renewed vigor, the sound of wood echoing like thunder throughout the training ground. The battle continues, and for the first time, it feels like the true test is just beginning. The prince lunges forward, his eyes locked on the rookie with an intensity that borders on obsession. They collide with a deafening sound, the pressure forcing them both to strain against each other. Sparks fly as their wooden blades grind together, a testament to the immense force being exerted. The rookie's grin widens. He knows this prince is different, a challenge unlike anything he has faced before. The prince grinds his teeth, his frustration and determination warring within him as he refuses to yield. Both men push their bodies to the absolute limit, ignoring the exhaustion seeping into their limbs. The intensity of the exchange leaves no room for mistakes, each strike more lethal than the last. They move in a rhythmic dance of combat, their blades cutting through the air with terrifying precision. The prince continues to drive himself harder, his movements becoming more aggressive by the heartbeat. Every strike serves to push the boundaries of what both are capable of, testing their endurance to the breaking point. The rookie meets every attack with a counter, refusing to back down as they spiral deeper into the fight. The prince's face is a mask of focus, his eyes burning with the singular goal of overwhelming his opponent. They engage once more, their swords clashing as if they were made of steel rather than wood. The exertion is clear, sweat dripping down their faces as the match reaches a fever pitch. There is no sign of slowing down. They are both locked in a cycle of relentless combat, driving themselves even further beyond the limit. As shown in collage_1.jpg, the young prince stands locked in a fierce, high-stakes sparring match. His blood is boiling with an intensity that he has never felt before. Every muscle in his arm strains, gripped by a newfound relentless drive. Even against someone far stronger, he refuses to back down, finding a surge of power deep within. The collision of their steel rings out, echoing the raw ambition fueling his every move. He pushes forward, his eyes sharp and focused, refusing to let fatigue dampen his resolve. The weight of the training is heavy, but his will remains unshaken. With a swift, calculated movement, he finds his opening. He lunges with everything he has, testing the limits of his own potential. The clash reaches its peak as he puts his entire being into a single decisive strike. His opponent is pushed to the limit, visibly struggling under the pressure of the prince's relentless assault. Every grip on the sword tightens as the power imbalance shifts. The air crackles with energy, the sheer force of their exchange shaking the room. It is a brutal display of technique and stamina, leaving no room for error. The intensity is overwhelming, forcing the opponent to acknowledge the danger in front of them. The final strike is devastating, shattering the composure of the fight entirely. With a sudden explosive impact, the training blade is forced into submission. The exchange concludes in a flash of power, ending as quickly as it began. Exhausted but triumphant, the young prince catches his breath. As seen in collage_2.jpg, he stands tall, knowing the battle is finally over. His sparring partner, now fully unleashed, is left reeling from the encounter. A hand is extended in a gesture of begrudging respect. The two figures bridge the gap, the tension of the fight replaced by a strange, newfound understanding. The weight of what just happened hangs in the air as they share a moment of connection. The prince is left wondering how his own spirit could have shocked someone so seasoned. The realization of his own growth settles in, but he still wonders what truly changed. His partner turns away, perhaps still reeling from the shock of the training. The interaction is awkward, filled with the remnants of the exhaustion they just shared. His partner flees the scene, unable to mask the unease left by the prince's display. Collapsed on the floor, the prince finally lets out a long, weary sigh. As shown in collage_3.jpg, he is completely spent, yet a flicker of excitement remains. From the balcony above, the onlookers observe his collapse with a mixture of confusion and intrigue. The higher-ups are watching closely, questioning the nature of this change in the boy. They contemplate the implications, their expressions unreadable as they watch him from afar. He remains on the ground, a solitary figure amidst the grand and different architecture of the palace. His vulnerability is clear, yet the shadow of his potential looms over him. The captain of the royal guard, Sened, observes the situation with a calculated, thoughtful gaze. A few days pass, and the grand halls of the kingdom remain as silent as ever. The kingdom basks in a deceptive sense of peace under the sprawling bright sky. The castle stands tall, a silent witness to the quiet movements of its inhabitants. In the gardens, the prince, now revitalized, prepares for his next move. He approaches his guard, his demeanor completely shifted into something more cunning. He calls out, his command echoing with a newfound authority that catches the knight off guard. He is ready to set his plan into motion no matter the cost. The knight is hesitant, questioning the sudden urgency in the prince's request. He pauses, sensing that the prince is no longer the boy he once was. There is an undeniable strength in the prince's posture now, something that demands to be taken seriously. The prince begins to walk away, fully expecting to be followed. He knows the risks, but the path forward is already set in his mind. As seen in collage_4.jpg, he seeks out an unlikely ally for his dangerous endeavor. He confronts the court mage Hernando, who is clearly not expecting this visit. Hernando turns, his presence commanding, yet clearly bothered by the interruption. The prince wastes no time, immediately pulling the mage into his scheme. He makes it clear that his intentions are anything but trivial. The proposition is bold, catching the mage entirely off guard. The mage is skeptical, but there is an undeniable curiosity in his eyes. The prince lays out the stakes, showing that he has done his homework. He stands with confidence, his expression radiating a strange, infectious energy. The mage finds himself drawn in, unable to ignore the opportunity placed before him. The decision is made, and the alliance is strong. The prince maintains his confident front, though he knows the path ahead is filled with uncertainty. He promises to handle the mage's gambling debt, a price he is more than willing to pay. His posture is loose and calculated, showing the weight he carries is becoming lighter. Hernando signs the contract, sealing their fate with a flourish. The prince is prepared to leverage whatever power he has, even if he feels like a shark among minnows. The weight of his royal title is a tool he is finally learning how to use. He demands that the others stand by his side, cementing their roles as witnesses. The pressure is on them now to follow his lead into the unknown. The mage, now fully on board, cannot help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. The prince surveys his group, feeling the gears of his master plan begin to turn. The destination is decided, a place that will test them in ways they cannot imagine. He has a dark, knowing smile that suggests he is finally in control. The journey toward the Sword Mountain is no longer just a thought, it is a reality. The prospect of looting the Ancestors' dungeon is the catalyst for everything he has been building toward. With his ally secured, he stares ahead, ready to claim the power that was once lost to the ages. Hidden deep beneath the palace, a forgotten path winds into the darkness, revealing secrets that were meant to stay buried. He never even imagined that such a passage could exist right under their feet. The torchlight flickers against the damp stone walls, guiding the way forward into the unknown. Questions weigh heavily on the air as the true destination of this mysterious cave finally comes to light. At the end of this journey lies the legendary Sword Mountain, a name whispered in hushed tones of awe and fear. It's a place steeped in myth, centered around the fabled progenitor who left an indelible mark on history. In a past life, once the Empire seized control of Betrayal, they stumbled upon a hidden dungeon tucked away inside that mountain. The discovery of the progenitor's lost legacy triggered an absolute frenzy of power-hungry ambition back then. But in that previous timeline, this path was nothing more than a desperate escape route used to flee from danger. That fatal hesitation meant the priceless legacy was handed over to the Empire before it could ever be utilized. This time, however, everything is different, and there will be no more running away from his destiny. Instead of retreating, he is fully committed to advancing, carving out a new future with every step he takes. He is determined to see with his own eyes the true legacy his ancestor left behind for the Betrayal bloodline. As shown in collage_1.jpg, his resolve is unshakable. He is no longer the victim of circumstance. Yet a lingering question remains: where did he manage to secure the key to such a forbidden door? The answer is simple yet haunting. It was tucked away in the corner of his study, just as it had been in his former life. He carries the heavy burden of regret for not understanding its true value when he had the chance before. With a dismissive wave, he brushes aside the inquiry, signaling that some secrets are not meant for others to know. Caution becomes the priority as they navigate the treacherous terrain, where even the plants bite with razor-sharp leaves. He watches over his companions, demanding they stay close to avoid unnecessary injuries in this hostile environment. Suspicion grows among the ranks as they wonder if their leader has been acting strangely, perhaps consumed by some bizarre influence. Despite the erratic changes, his sharp temperament remains as cold and demanding as ever. As seen in collage_2.jpg, the journey through the wilderness is far from peaceful. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the presence of a deadly pack of direwolves stalking them from the shadow. These beasts move with coordinated precision, making it impossible to tell how many more are lurking nearby. He claims he read about their behavior in a book, a casual remark that barely hides the severity of the threat. The monsters haven't detected their presence yet, creating a fleeting opportunity to slip away unnoticed. Choosing the path of stealth, they prepare to move past the pack with absolute silence. A stray step creates a sound that echoes like a thunderclap, instantly shattering their carefully maintained cover. The danger is immediate and tangible, with the predators locking eyes on their prey. A flicker of regret crosses his face, but he knows they have no choice but to face the consequences. With a swift and brutal display of power, the threat is neutralized in an instant. He pauses, reflecting on the grim reality of the battle they just survived. However, the path ahead is still perilous, and the threat of more monsters remains a constant worry. As depicted in collage_3.jpg, they are forced into a confrontation they desperately tried to avoid. The alpha wolf lets out a bone-chilling howl, signaling the rest of the pack to descend upon them. Realizing the alpha is fully aware of their location, the tension reaches a breaking point. The sheer number of wolves closing in creates an overwhelming sense of dread. The direwolves strike with savage intensity, leaving no room for error. His companion draws a blade glowing with lethal mana, standing firm against the onslaught. The wolves lunge with snapping jaws, testing the limits of their defenses. Chaos erupts as the battle for survival turns into a frantic struggle against the encroaching pack. The fighter pushes his limits, barely holding back the tide of beasts with every strike. He showcases a level of skill that proves he is worthy of his position, yet the pressure continues to mount. Even in the heat of battle, there is a clear divide in expectation and raw power. He observes the struggle with a critical eye, acknowledging that his guard is skilled, but still lacking something fundamental. The moment of truth arrives, and it is time for his companion to step into his true potential. A challenge is issued, testing if he is truly prepared to harness the full power of a battle mage. Fire begins to gather in his palms, a warning that the fight is about to escalate into something far more dangerous. As captured in collage_4.jpg, the clash between steel and magic is about to ignite the forest. With a command that drips with expectation, he demands the absolute mastery of the battle mage's arts. Flames erupt into a swirling vortex, casting long, dancing shadows across the battlefield. The direwolves are caught off guard by the sudden eruption of devastating magical power. Each movement is precise, turning the forest floor into a chaotic scene of fire and fury. He unleashes a torrent of heat, forcing the beasts into a defensive retreat. The air screams with the intensity of the flames as the battle mage pushes his limits to the breaking point. With a final explosive strike, the immediate threat is reduced to cinders. As seen in collage_5.jpg, the path to the peak is finally clear, though the cost of the journey is beginning to mount. Standing at the summit, the realization hits them that the hardest part is over, or so they hope. The view from the peak of Sword Mountain is breathtaking, offering a glimpse of the kingdom far below. Exhausted but determined, they survey the land, searching for any sign of the legendary relic. Confusion begins to settle in. The site is barren, offering no immediate proof of the treasure they sought. A sharp gaze locks onto a singular strange point in the earth, sensing something hidden from plain sight. He calls out, his voice cutting through the wind, signaling that he has finally found it. The discovery is small and unassuming, a mere glimpse of something buried beneath the dirt. The realization of what lies before them creates an electric atmosphere of anticipation. He drops to his knees, his fingers scraping away the loose rocks and soil with frantic urgency. A rusted hilt emerges from the ground, looking as if it has been waiting for centuries to be touched. He grips the relic, feeling a strange resonance that sends a shiver down his spine. With a powerful heave, he pulls the blade free, revealing its true form to the open sky. As shown in collage_6.jpg, the legendary sword, once lost to time, now rests in his hand. He stares at the blade in disbelief, stunned by the sheer gravity of what he has uncovered. The reflection on the polished surface seems to hold secrets of the past that are finally coming to light. His eyes widen, struck by an unexpected detail engraved on the metal. The word guilty is etched into the steel, a chilling message from the past that he never expected to see. The implications of that single word are overwhelming, threatening to upend everything he thought he knew. He turns to his companion, his expression a mix of triumph and deep, unsettling realization. The ground beneath them begins to tremble, a violent protest from the mountain itself. Cracks spiderweb across the rock, turning their moment of victory into a desperate fight for stability. As seen in collage_7.jpg, the very earth is reclaiming its secrets, leaving them no time to celebrate. The mountain begins to collapse, with boulders tumbling down into the abyss below. They scramble for footing, but the ledge beneath them gives way completely. A cry of alarm breaks the silence as they are sent plummeting into the dark expanse. Everything becomes a blur of motion and debris, their lives hanging by a thread as they fall. Even as they descend toward what looks like certain disaster, he keeps his focus sharp. The chaos of the fall is absolute, with stone and dust choking the air around them. He reaches out, his mind racing to find a solution to the deadly drop. The sheer height of the mountain makes the fall feel eternal, testing their courage against the inevitable. He grips the hilt of the sword, hoping it holds the power to save them from their fate. There is no room for hesitation, only the instinct to survive as the ground rushes toward them. He braces himself, preparing for the impact or the miracle that might just keep them alive. As seen in collage_8.jpg, the descent is terrifying, and the true test of their journey has only just begun. The sudden, devastating strike tears through the air with overwhelming force, leaving destruction in its wake as shown in collage_1.jpg. A massive surge of energy erupts, shaking the very foundations of the dungeon as the aftermath of the impact resonates through the stone walls. The path ahead is illuminated by a chilling, ethereal blue glow emanating from deep within the dark, silent corridor. Despite the overwhelming pressure, he barely manages to maintain his composure, clutching his side as the toll of the encounter starts to set in. He collapses to the ground, gasping for air, the weight of the situation beginning to crush his spirit as his strength fades rapidly. He looks on, his analytical mind already racing, observing that the situation is far more intense and dangerous than he had ever anticipated. The mysterious light pulses with an ancient golden hue, casting long shadows as he steps forward into the unknown, driven by an insatiable curiosity. He is questioned about his reckless actions, his companion demanding to know why he would gamble with their safety so carelessly. He shrugs off the criticism with a calm, almost mocking smile, brushing away the concern as if the danger were merely a trivial inconvenience. With a subtle movement, he prepares himself, his focus sharpening as he realizes that the atmosphere in this place is shifting, becoming heavy with something far more ancient. He stands his ground, staring into the dark with a calm intensity that suggests he knows far more than he is willing to reveal. Suddenly, a dark, menacing aura begins to bleed from the shadows, warning them that something unnatural is watching from the darkness as seen in collage_2.jpg. The air turns freezing, a suffocating presence forcing them to realize that their perception of this place was entirely wrong. His eyes widen in sheer terror, his voice trembling as he realizes the horrifying nature of the entity that has just emerged. From the depths of the abyss, a towering, armored figure clad in dark plate slowly marches forward, its presence alone radiating a lethal intent. The figure steps into the light, its eyes glowing with a malevolent red flame, confirming the absolute dread that has just gripped them. He whispers the name in absolute disbelief, his heart pounding in his chest as he recognizes the legendary undead terror standing before them. Struck by the sheer magnitude of the threat, his composure shatters, leaving him frozen in place while the reality of their situation sets in. He struggles to find his footing, his mind reeling as the terrifying reality of the Death Knight's appearance forces him to confront his own fragility. The realization hits him like a physical blow, leaving him gasping as he tries to process the impossible sight of a dead man walking. Panic surges through him, his instincts screaming for him to flee as the encounter turns into a desperate struggle for survival. With a primal shout, he forces himself back to his feet, refusing to let fear claim him as he braces for the coming confrontation as seen in collage_3.jpg. The Death Knight's heavy boots strike the floor with a rhythmic, bone-chilling thud, closing the distance between them with relentless mechanical precision. His eyes lock onto the spectral glow, his mind racing to recall everything he knows about the creatures that defy the natural order of life and death. The skeletal face stares back, a hollow void that speaks of centuries of bloodshed and a curse that refuses to let it rest. The horrifying truth is laid bare, a warrior who fell in battle only to be chained to this world, stronger and more relentless than they ever were in life. He grits his teeth, trying to push past the encroaching terror, searching for any weakness in the armor of his eternal foe. His blade is drawn, the metal ringing out in the cavern, though his hands shake from the sheer overwhelming pressure emanating from the Death Knight. His companion watches on, frozen in genuine fear, the realization dawning that their previous training has not prepared them for this nightmare. The Death Knight pauses, its eyes fixed upon them, creating a suffocating silence where the only sound is their own ragged, fearful breathing. The entity stands tall, an unyielding sentinel that seems to wait for the perfect moment to strike them down without mercy. With blinding speed, the Death Knight swings, the force of the blade cleaving through the air and forcing in desperate, frantic reaction, as seen in collage_4.jpg. He lunges forward, his movements desperate as he tries to intercept the strike, his eyes wide with the sudden realization of their imminent doom. A warning scream tears from his throat, the sound echoing through the dungeon as he realizes the devastating power behind the incoming blow. His face reflects the pure, unadulterated shock of witnessing a strike that defies all logic, a testament to the Death Knight's monstrous strength. The atmosphere is thick with dust and tension, the aftermath of the collision leaving everyone stunned and breathless. The emblem of the kingdom flickers, a symbol of their crumbling pride, now caught in the wake of a battle they were never meant to survive. The blade slams into the stone, the impact vibrating through the entire chamber, shattering the ground beneath their feet with explosive force. The sword sticks firmly into the earth, a monument to the power that could have ended them all in a single devastating heartbeat. He stands there, shaken to his very core, struggling to come to terms with the fact that he is still standing despite the lethal display of force. His voice is barely a whisper, trembling with a mix of shock and disbelief as he contemplates the absolute terror he just narrowly escaped. He gazes upward, the shock still vivid on his face, as the weight of the Death Knight's power finally sinks into his mind as seen in collage_5.jpg. The Death Knight towers above them, its gaze cold and judgmental. As it speaks, its voice resonating with a terrifying ancient authority. He is brought to his knees by the overwhelming pressure of the entity, forced to endure the scrutiny of the creature that guards these halls. They stand together in the dark, two individuals caught in the presence of something far greater, their confidence completely stripped away. He remains resolute, his eyes wide as he looks toward the figure, sensing that this meeting is far more significant than a mere battle for survival. A vision of the past flashes, showing the grandeur of a king who built a dynasty on the strength of his own steel. The image of the founder burns bright, a legendary figure whose shadow still looms over the lands of the continent. His armor clanks, a steady rhythmic sound that echoes the strength of the first king, the man who started it all. The dust settles, the silence returning to the dungeon, heavy with the weight of history and the presence of the eternal guardian. He bows his head, acknowledging the gravity of the situation, a newfound respect overriding his initial fear in the presence of the legend. The Death Knight remains a silent, looming presence, its red eyes glowing as it acknowledges the title he holds, as seen in collage_6.jpg. He points to the sword, his tone shifting as he recognizes the significance of the weapon resting in his hand. He looks down at the blade, his expression one of awe as the realization of what he is actually holding begins to dawn on him. He grips the hilt, feeling a connection that shouldn't exist, a spark of the past reigniting as he holds the founder's own weapon. The Death Knight watches him, its expression unreadable, though a sense of curiosity seems to emanate from the ancient hollow sockets. He looks up, confused by the strange demeanor of the knight, wondering what secrets are hidden behind that skull-like mask. The Death Knight looms over him, its presence commanding, as it demands the truth regarding his purpose for invading these sacred grounds. He clutches the sword tightly, its weight suddenly feeling like a responsibility he is not yet prepared to carry. He stands tall, declaring his identity with a voice that rings with sincerity, hoping that his royal blood will be enough to earn him the right to pass. He extends his hand, a gesture of surrender and respect, pleading for the knight to acknowledge his right to claim the legacy. The Death Knight's eyes burn with a deep crimson intensity, studying his soul as it weighs the sincerity of his words. The group begins to retreat, the Death Knight leading them deeper into the heart of the dungeon as seen in collage_7.jpg. He follows close behind, his mind racing with the realization that he is walking in the footsteps of the legend himself. Every step he takes is heavy, filled with the weight of duty and the immense pressure of living up to a name that shaped the world. They march through the dark, the echoes of their footsteps the only sound in the oppressive silence of the subterranean ruins. He can barely comprehend the situation, his worldview shattered as he finds himself in an alliance with the very monster he feared. The absurdity of their current predicament weighs heavily on his mind, a constant reminder of how far his journey has strayed from the expected path. He cries out in frustration, the confusion of the past few minutes pushing him to his absolute limit as he tries to make sense of the nonsense. He looks at the surroundings, his eyes darting back and forth, desperate to understand how a royal guard's mission turned into this bizarre reality. He stops in his tracks, the reality of the situation finally becoming too much to bear as the gravity of his mission crashes down on him. He gazes into the distance, his eyes wide as he sees something that defies explanation, a sight that forces him to question his own sanity as seen in collage_8jpg. He turns around, his face a mask of disbelief, as he tries to shout, but no sound comes out, his frustration mounting by the second. The armor glimmers in the dim light, a reminder of the martial prowess that was once the pride of the entire kingdom. He waves his hand, demanding to know if the others are following, his voice cutting through the tense, quiet atmosphere. He runs a hand through his hair, his composure crumbling as the sheer insanity of the situation continues to mount without any sign of stopping. He walks toward the light, his steps heavy with exhaustion, yet he is driven by an unrelenting need to reach his goal. The light pulses with a rhythmic intensity, a beacon in the darkness that draws them closer to the heart of the mystery. The Death Knight stands before the energy, its form silhouetted against the brilliant, mystical glow of the dungeon. His armor clinks as he moves, each piece reflecting the light, a stark contrast to the surrounding gloom of the ruins. The air around them vibrates, the ambient energy reacting to their presence as they approach the center of the chamber. They gather around, their eyes fixed on the brilliant display, completely captivated by the raw power pulsating before them, as seen in collage_9.jpg. He stares ahead, his mind completely focused, preparing himself for the revelation that is about to change everything he knows. He whispers a soft prayer, his hand trembling as he hopes that he is truly worthy of the legacy that awaits him. The shadows seem to dance around him, a reflection of the tumultuous journey he has undergone to reach this very moment. He stands alone in the vast, desolate landscape, the horizon stretching out into an endless, barren void. The world around him begins to shift, the dungeon walls fading as he is transported to a place that feels like a dream. He looks around in confusion, his heart racing as he tries to get his bearings in this strange new environment. A lone figure stands in the distance, a silhouette against the setting sun that commands an immediate sense of reverence. He takes a step forward, his curiosity piqued as he realizes that the legendary founder is standing just a few paces away. He realizes the truth, his breath hitching as he comes to terms with the reality of the trial he is now forced to face. The figure moves with blinding speed, a blur of motion that forces him into a desperate struggle for survival, as seen in collage_10.jpg. He dodges, his body reacting on instinct as the entity unleashes a barrage of attacks that are clearly not those of a mere human. He lands on the ground, his body aching, yet he doesn't stop, his determination to survive burning brighter than his fear. He parries a strike, the clash of weapons ringing out with deafening force, the sheer power of the opponent pushing him to his limit. He is struck, the force sending him backward, his face twisted in pain as he struggles to maintain his footing under the pressure. A blue light begins to glow around his sword, the energy surging as he taps into a power that he never knew he possessed. He stands in awe, watching as the energy flows through his blade, the realization hitting him that he has just unlocked a hidden, forbidden technique. The air ripples with the power of the mana method, the realization of what he has achieved leaving him stunned as he prepares to fight back with everything he has. The realization hits hard. This is the path to power. He watches, desperate to understand how to truly manipulate mana. Every movement of his ancestor is etched into his memory, a lesson burned into his mind. It's an overwhelming, raw display of pure energy. He focuses on his own chest, trying to force his body to respond. The pressure is immense, a constant reminder of how much he still needs to learn. The training is ruthless, demanding perfection in the middle of a life-or-death struggle. He mimics the motion, channeling everything he has into the blade. He's not just copying, he's trying to internalize the very core of this technique. With a steady hand, he prepares to replicate the flow of power. He knows the risks. His ancestor is pushing him far beyond his limits. Thrown into live combat without even the basics, the survival rate feels slim to none. But this is a challenge only someone who has lived a second life could possibly navigate. He clutches his hand, feeling the sting of the strain. He needs to be stronger, faster, and more capable than ever before. The memory of what is to come keeps him grounded in the harsh reality. The Empire's shadow looms, a threat that will eventually swallow his homeland. He stares down his opponent, his resolve hardening like steel. This time, there will be no mercy and no failure. He refuses to let the same tragedy unfold a second time. The past is a heavy weight, but he is determined to reshape the future. He lunges forward, meeting the challenge head-on. The clash of weapons rings out, a testament to his growing desperation. Every swing is a battle against his own limitations. The impact is brutal, a visceral reminder that he has so far to go. He pushes back, refusing to be crushed by the pressure of the fight. Even in the intensity of the struggle, his mind wanders to another battlefield. He wonders if he's finally stepping into the legendary test. The environment feels heavy with history and silent warning. The training ground stands as a stark monument to his own weaknesses. He finds himself pulled into a different, unsettling confrontation. The atmosphere is suffocating, thick with the weight of someone else's expectation. He feels the gaze of his opponent, piercing and cold. He stays alert, his senses heightened to the smallest movement. Every step forward is a calculated risk in this strange testing space. His focus narrows, zeroing in on the threat standing right in front of him. He keeps his guard up, refusing to show a single opening. The silence is broken by the sharp, threatening sound of steel being drawn. The question hangs in the air, mocking his past and his choices. He is forced to confront the life he once tried to secure for himself. He wonders if he really was nothing more than a coward chasing comfort over conviction. The warning is clear: stay away or lose everything. The taunt echoes, challenging the very core of his identity. He considers the past, and for a fleeting moment he understands the hesitation. But that version of him is gone, replaced by a man who knows the cost of inaction. He scoffs at the simplicity of the test, seeing it as nothing more than a staged performance. He realizes just how much his opponent underestimates him, taking his surface level for his true potential. He readies his stance, his eyes burning with newfound intensity. A single, decisive moment is all it will take to change the course of this exchange. He knows that once the blade is in motion, there is no turning back. He watches his opponent, analyzing the arrogance behind every calculated movement. The distance closes, the air crackling with the weight of the coming strike. He makes his move, a burst of speed that defies expectation. The clash resonates, a violent collision of philosophies and strength. He grits his teeth, feeling the sheer force vibrating through his own blade. The strike is simple, yet it carries the crushing weight of experience. He focuses on the blade, the mana surging through it like a wild storm. He maneuvers with precision, countering the defense with raw, unbridled aggression. Every instinct screams at him to avoid the risk, but he pushes forward anyway. The old him would have been content to play it safe, but not anymore. He finds the previous strategy entirely predictable and utterly boring. He leaps, forcing the pace of the battle to break the stalemate. He strikes with intent, looking to dismantle his opponent's rhythm. The effort leaves him breathless, his body screaming under the strain. Even as he lands, his focus never wavers from his target. He barely manages to regain his footing as the pressure continues to mount. He sees the opening, the flaw in the perfect defensive posture. The mana erupts, a blinding display of power that fills the chamber. He drives his attack home, feeling the impact rattle through his bones. It is an exhausting, desperate dance of survival and skill. He watches the opponent, waiting for the crack in the facade. He knows the strike is inevitable, a simple truth in a complex world. He parries, the ringing sound of metal echoing through the hall. The exchange is brutal, forcing him to adapt every single second. He feels the weight of his own history, pushing him to abandon his past habits. He leaps away, creating distance to reassess the situation. The frustration is palpable, a fire burning in his gut. He prepares for the next phase, knowing there can be no mistakes. He lunges, his movements a blur of calculated aggression. He is done being the boring, cautious man he once was. The victory is hard-won, a fleeting sense of relief in a world of danger. He catches his breath, the exhaustion starting to take hold. He watches the transformation, a gruesome sight that chills him to the bone. He wonders if he is looking at the true face of his enemy. The earth shudders as the environment itself begins to warp and shift. He realizes that the real test is only just beginning. The creature looms, a nightmare made flesh, reminding him that the stakes are higher than ever. His heart races, thinking of the prince caught in his own desperate struggle. He calls out silently, a plea for strength to survive the coming storm. The exhaustion finally pulls him to the ground, but he forces himself to look ahead. He rises, a singular figure against the backdrop of an unforgiving, desolate landscape. With a final burst of resolve, he gathers the last of his energy. The air ignites and he charges forward one last time. The intense training session pushed him to his absolute limit, leaving him gasping for air as the lethal strikes narrowly missed his vitals. It was a brush with death that nearly cost him everything, but the danger served as the ultimate teacher. Every strike in this grueling spar wasn't just physical movement, it was a lesson forged in pain. With every clash, he began to master the flow of mana, feeling it course through him like a living thing. The precision of his sword movements sharpened, refining his technique far beyond anything he had achieved before. The sheer power of his new technique erupted, shattering the stillness of the training grounds with a brilliant display of force. He stood amidst the remnants of his effort, his breath steadying as the adrenaline of the fight began to fade. He realized that this, at last, was the true fruit of his labor. He had finally unlocked the secret to the mana method. Reflecting on the near miss, he acknowledged how close he had come to a permanent end, yet he felt no fear, only gratitude. With the fundamental movements now ingrained in his muscle memory, he knew his growth would only accelerate from here. As he adjusted his grip, he could feel the weight of his sword becoming an extension of his own body. Sweat beaded on his forehead, a small testament to the relentless focus he poured into every single swing. Before him, the training dummy began to lose its form, the spiritual imprint of his opponent signaling the conclusion of their time together. The connection to the phantom mentor was fraying, his physical form beginning to fracture under the weight of the departing energy. The training tool crumbled into nothingness, shattered remnants of his hard-won progress drifting away like dust in the wind. The realization hit him. The trial had come to an end, and the remnants of the ancient spirit were fading from his reach. Energy swirled around him, an ethereal glow illuminating the void as the final traces of his teacher dissipated into the air. Even as the figure vanished, a look of calm acceptance washed over his features, his heart heavy with the weight of the passing. He watched as the last sparks of the encounter flickered out, leaving him with a final, lingering sense of gratitude. The space around him felt colder now, empty of the presence that had forced him to transcend his limit. The ethereal light finally extinguished, leaving only the quiet echoes of a lesson well learned. Stardust shimmered in the darkness, a beautiful, haunting reminder of the power he had just touched. His eyes snapped open, reality rushing back in to replace the phantom world he had inhabited for so long. He returned to his own body, the weight of the world settling back onto his shoulders as the dream world collapsed behind him. Back in the cavern, the silence was broken by the soft inquiries of his companions. checking if he had finally returned from the depths of his mind. The dream had felt so real, and yet, sitting amidst the crystals, he was told it was only a vision of a time long gone. He looked upon the surroundings with new understanding, recognizing the legacy of Eric Briol laid out before him. This hidden sanctuary, once lost to history, had been specifically preserved for a descendant who possessed the potential to claim it. He knew that in his past life the Imperial forces had razed the Sword Mountain, erasing this legacy before anyone could reach it. The tragedy of his past meant the Briol family never stood a chance to claim what was rightfully theirs, a regret that now fueled his resolve. He stood firm, confronting the Death Knight who guarded this forgotten inheritance, demanding answers about the past. The knight explained that this legacy was the culmination of everything the founder had learned during his long wandering years in the East. He was the first to ever truly inherit this, a heavy responsibility that felt both daunting and exhilarating. He questioned why such a powerful method had been hidden away, kept out of the hands of the royal family for so long. The knight remained cold and unyielding, a silent protector of a secret that only revealed itself when the timing was absolute. The fact that the dungeon had finally opened its gates meant the world was shifting and the time to wield this power had finally arrived. When he pushed for more answers, the knight brushed him off, declaring that some burdens must be understood through personal discovery. He took a breath, letting the mystery settle before pressing for the one thing he needed to know, the name of this lost art. The knight uttered the name, a chilling declaration that hung in the air, Soul Severance. The weight of those two words struck him, a name that promised both terrible destruction and absolute precision. He stared at his blade, the realization dawning that he was now the carrier of an ancient, dangerous legacy. The knight commanded him to lower himself, to accept the final transfer of power in a gesture of absolute fealty. He knelt on the cold stone, placing his blade before him, ready to receive the heavy burden of his ancestors' will. A hand descended upon his head, a gesture of both inheritance and immense pressure that seemed to anchor him to the ground. The instruction was simple yet profound: never show fear, no matter the strength of the enemy standing in his path. He remained bowed, absorbing the gravity of the oath he was about to swear in the presence of his forebear. He closed his eyes, centering himself as he prepared to accept the destiny laid out for the Briol line. The air in the chamber grew heavy with the weight of the ancestors as the ritual of inheritance began to take root within him. He was told to act only on his deepest convictions, a directive that would guide his choices in the life he was building. The duty to the Briol family was now his alone to carry, a mandate he would have to uphold to the very end of his journey. He felt the crushing weight of the legacy as he reaffirmed his commitment, his resolve hardening like steel. The knight's voice echoed with an icy finality, reminding him that honor was the bedrock of their house, even unto death. He finally understood the true weight of the name he bore, a burden that necessitated sacrifice at every turn. The dawn broke over the castle, the first light of morning cutting through the darkness of his restless sleep. His maid pulled back the curtains, the sudden intrusion of sunlight forcing him to finally stir from his exhausted slumber. He groaned as the day began, the memories of his long, harrowing night still fresh in his mind. He tried to pull the covers back over his head, hoping for just a few more moments of peace before facing reality. He stretched his tired body, the physical toll of his nocturnal activities leaving him stiff and aching as he rose from bed. He stood in the quiet room, his thoughts drifting back to the secret research he had conducted under the cover of darkness. He had spent the night in the royal archives, poring over ancient records that had been gathering dust for generations. Within those forgotten pages, he uncovered a truth hidden from the history books. The founder, Eric, had a brother. This was a man who had been erased from the annals of the kingdom, a soul who cast aside his honor to vanish into the shadows. He stared into the distance, his mind piecing together the connection between that disgraced brother and the Death Knight. It was a realization that changed everything. That guardian in the dungeon was likely the original owner of the sword he now carried. His maid interrupted his thoughts, reminding him that the king had summoned him, and he had no time to spare. The news brought him instant clarity, his exhaustion pushed aside by the pressing urgency of the situation. He couldn't shake the name from his mind, Hernando, the man who had watched him and clearly reported his movement. He walked through the corridor, the torches flickering on the walls as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation with his father. He knew exactly who was behind the reports, a realization that made his blood boil with frustration. He kept his expression neutral, forcing himself to mask his true feelings as he approached the royal chambers. He couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to stop the information from reaching the throne. His hand instinctively went to his head, the headache throbbing as he realized just how much he had already been exposed. He entered the grand hall, the sheer scale of the palace making him feel small as he approached the royal seat. The king sat upon his throne, his gaze piercing as he waited for his son to speak and explain his recent actions. He knelt before his father, the weight of his recent secrets feeling like a physical barrier between them. The king wasted no time confronting him directly about the unauthorized journey to the Sword Mountain and the treasure he had recovered. He listened to the accusations, his heart hammering against his ribs as he stood his ground before the ruler of the realm. The king questioned the sudden drastic change in his character, noting that even his closest confidants seemed to be falling into line. He was trapped, his father's eyes locked onto his, demanding an explanation that he couldn't easily give. The king sat in the silence, the atmosphere in the hall growing heavy with unspoken questions and mounting suspicion. He heard the steady thud of footsteps approaching, the tension in the room becoming suffocating. His father stared at him, his expression unreadable, a man who had built an empire and expected nothing less than absolute loyalty. The silence stretched, the king waiting for a slip of the tongue that would betray the secrets he had been harboring. He could see the vein in his father's hand pulsing as he gripped the armrest, his anger barely held in check. He tried to keep his composure, even as the walls seemed to be closing in around him. His movements were careful, measured, as he navigated the dangerous social landscape of the royal court. The king's eyes narrowed, a silent demand for the truth echoing in the expansive hall. He felt the pressure rising, the weight of the crown looming over him as he prepared to speak. His grip tightened on the hilt of his weapon, a physical manifestation of his internal resolve to hold his own. His fingers brushed the metal, the cold touch grounding him in the face of his father's intimidating presence. He finally spoke, the words coming out steady as he recounted the strange path he had been forced to take. He looked into his father's eyes, refusing to flinch, even as he revealed that his transformation had been sparked by something beyond ordinary reason. The king's expression remained fixed, a mask of iron that hid the depths of his thoughts. He stood in the center of the hall, a lone figure facing the apex of authority in the entire kingdom. He admitted that it began with a dream, a vision that had shaken him to his core and forced him to confront his failures. The king questioned the nature of that vision, demanding to know what kind of crime could lead to such a dramatic change. He stood silent for a moment, the weight of the confession hanging between them like a blade. He looked his father in the eyes, prepared to share the darkest secret of all, the truth about the life he was trying to leave behind. The weight of a haunting question hangs in the air, forcing a confession about the sins committed in a dark, twisted dream. He speaks of a failure that feels all too real, a desperate, hopeless attempt to protect Brial until the very end. In those fractured visions, the land was torn apart by a great war, leaving countless souls to be mercilessly massacred. He tried everything in his power to turn the tide of the conflict, but every effort was ultimately in vain. As the kingdom crumbled into ruin, he could do nothing but flee in disgrace, losing his honor before finally perishing in the chaos. The memory cuts deep, and with the dream's end came the agonizing realization that his mother's precious necklace had vanished. He is left searching for answers, clutching at his chest, haunted by the lingering absence of what was once held dear. He questions if the dream was merely a nightmare or a cryptic warning from beyond. The memory of his mother's gift remains a painful symbol of a loss he is still struggling to comprehend. He stands amidst the silence of the present, still feeling the phantom weight of a past that refuses to stay buried. He confronts the reality of his situation, wondering if these dark visions are a message from his mother. He meets his father's gaze, the tension between them thick with unspoken burdens and shared history. Caught in the crossfire of his own guilt, he tries to articulate the fear that still grips his heart. He knows the risks of the future, aware that the Empire's inevitable path might still be looming. He calculates the fragility of time, hoping that his actions might somehow rewrite the tragic fate of the kingdom. His father observes him, eyes searching for the truth behind the boy's sudden transformation. The weight of his past life feels like a leaden cloak, driving him to seek redemption for sins he hasn't even committed yet. He confesses to the desperate need to make amends, a quiet plea for penance in a world that feels increasingly fragile. He finds himself standing on the precipice of a decision, feeling the crushing pressure of a destiny he can't escape. His father makes a demand that shatters the moment, telling him to bring his sword for what comes next. The tension spirals as he finds himself forced into a situation he isn't sure he is ready to face. He is left reeling, the demand to pick up his blade echoing like a summons he cannot ignore. His father remains stoic and imposing, his presence filling the room as he commands total compliance. The title of the journey looms, a reminder that the path to reclaiming a lost kingdom is paved with blades and blood. The weight of expectation is overwhelming, as the name Fiore Brial carries the burden of a legendary history. He is spoken of in hushed, reverent tones as a prodigy who understood the language of the sword before he could even walk. He has carved his name into the annals of the continent's history, leaving an impression that few can ever hope to match. Even the shadows seem to bow to the reputation of the man who mastered the blade, while others were still finding their footing. His strength is spoken of as an absolute truth, a legend that defined an era of martial prowess. At the height of his power, he was unchallenged, the strongest, most formidable swordmaster the continent had ever seen. In that moment, he stood at the peak of the world, a titan of skill and unrelenting force. He surveys the training hall, taking in the cold, vast space where he must now prove himself worthy. He realizes with a sudden clarity that none of his brothers ever possessed the raw talent required for this brutal path. He looks at his father, seeing not just a man, but the embodiment of the power he is now expected to wield. He wonders if he is truly prepared to step into the shadow of such a monumental legacy. The atmosphere in the room changes, shifting from instruction to a test of his very essence. He grips his blade, the cold steel feeling like a stranger in his hand as he prepares for the trial. His father steps forward, ready to strip away the pretenses and see what lies at the core of the boy's resolve. He asks a pointed question, challenging his son to look deeper into the nature of true strength. He questions the definition of talent, pushing the boundaries of what it means to be a warrior. He probes further, asking if skill is enough or if something more fundamental is missing. He pushes, asking if the possession of mere aptitude is truly the mark of a master. He demands to know what differentiates a common fighter from a true legendary swordsman. He offers a cold, sharp answer. The qualities they prize are not enough to forge a true master. The air turns frigid as he lays out the harsh truth, cutting through the illusions of greatness. He leaves his son reeling, the question of what truly makes a swordmaster hanging between them. He watches as the reality of his father's challenge settles in, his mind racing to understand the lesson. His father's eyes narrow, his gaze piercing enough to see through every doubt and hesitation. He stands his ground, feeling the weight of the steel in his hand and the uncertainty in his heart. He watches as the aura around his father begins to warp, pulsating with a dark, suffocating intensity. A sudden, overwhelming sensation washes over him, causing him to instinctively recoil at the shift in energy. He struggles to find his breath, the air around him crackling with the sheer pressure of his father's intent. His father's aura transforms into something raw and predatory, marking the true start of their confrontation. He calls it a calling, a force that transcends simple skill and reaches into the depths of the soul. His father stands ready, the embodiment of a power that few have ever dared to witness. He observes his father's shift with a mixture of awe and growing dread. He tries to steel himself, knowing that the path ahead is no longer just about swordplay. He is left with a daunting reality, a test of spirit that he isn't sure he can survive. His father's presence is like an anchor, pulling him into the gravity of the battlefield. He stares at his father, trying to process the overwhelming reality of the challenge that lies before him. He reflects on his past, acknowledging that he never truly found the path of the sword in his family life. He wonders if things will be different this time, or if the same fate of failure awaits him once again. He questions the nature of his existence, searching for a sign that he belongs on this lethal path. He hears his father's footsteps approaching, each one hitting the floor like a drumbeat of impending doom. He feels the scrutiny of his father's gaze, a weight that demands an honest answer he is afraid to give. The question of fate lingers, a ghost that haunts every swing of his blade. He is asked to look into the abyss of his own future and decide if he has the resolve to hold on. He stands in the center of the hall, a lone figure wrestling with the heavy burden of a potential destiny. He admits his own confusion, his heart struggling to accept the path his father has laid out for him. He searches his own feelings for a spark, but all he finds is the cold, hollow sting of uncertainty. A darkness begins to bleed into his vision, as if the shadows themselves are reacting to his internal turmoil. He feels a sudden shift in the atmosphere, as if he is being pulled back into the nightmare he desperately tried to leave behind. He stumbles back, his grip on his sword faltering as the reality of his fear begins to take hold. The world around him begins to warp, with glowing, malicious eyes appearing from the depths of his own mind. He is thrust into the center of a nightmare, the weight of the sword in his hand feeling heavier than ever. The terror consumes him, the faces of his past failure flashing before his eyes with agonizing clarity. He hears the screams of his dying people, the sounds of destruction echoing in his ears as if it were happening all over again. The desperation reaches a breaking point as he watches his kingdom burn, his own name being called out by those he couldn't save. He finds himself back in the heart of the inferno, the sky painted in the blood-red glow of a crumbling home. He feels the crushing weight of a fallen comrade underfoot, a gruesome reminder of his own helplessness. The carnage intensifies, his sword swinging wildly as he fights a battle he has already lost 1,000 times over. Explosions rock the ground, tearing through the defenses he desperately tried to maintain against the onslaught. The chaos reaches its zenith, turning the landscape into a hellish portrait of war. He is paralyzed by the horror of the realization, his mind unable to reconcile the present with the hellish past. He finds himself standing once more amidst the flames, trapped in a cycle of destruction that refuses to end. The voices of his soldiers rise above the roar of the fire, desperate pleas for the prince who was meant to save them. The truth hits him with the force of a blade. He is the last survivor, the sole witness to the kingdom's annihilation. He watches as his own men fall, their sacrifice a silent accusation of his failure to prevent this tragedy. He is confronted by the terrifying might of the Empire, an army that spells the inevitable doom of everyone he loves. He stares at his own hands, trembling, wondering if he is truly destined to relive this cycle of ruin forever. The darkness closes in, the flames licking at the edges of his world as he realizes the nightmare has returned with a vengeance. He is forced to witness the burning of his legacy, his eyes reflecting the relentless destruction of his home. He turns his back on the ashes, the weight of a ruined future settling onto his shoulders as the cycle begins again. The roaring flames consumed everything in their path, painting the night sky in a horrific shade of crimson. The once proud kingdom of Betrayal was crumbling into ash and ruin as the invasion mercilessly tore through its defenses. He stood amidst the destruction, his mind struggling to process the sheer scale of the slaughter unfolding around him. Suddenly, an enemy soldier lunged from the inferno with a blood-soaked blade aimed right at his neck. "Die, Prince of Betrayal!" the attacker roared, stepping into the chaotic glow of the fire. He barely raised his weapon in time, the violent force of the strike sending a bone-rattling shockwave through his arms. Every muscle in his battered body screamed in agony as he gritted his teeth and pushed back with all his remaining strength. The fierce clash of steel rang out as he deflected another heavy, desperate blow. A loyal knight immediately intercepted the attacker, cutting the enemy down in a brutal spray of blood to protect his lord. "Your Highness, we will block them. Please, run away while we hold them off," his men pleaded over the deafening roar of the battle. But he couldn't move, forced to watch as the massacre continued to consume the very people he was sworn to protect. His soldiers were throwing their lives away, desperately trying to buy him even a single second to escape the slaughter. It was a futile effort against the overwhelming tide of enemies that flooded into the courtyard. With every step, the enemy forces callously trampled over the fallen heroes of Betrayal. Covered in ash and blood, he realized with crushing despair that his reality had devolved into an inescapable nightmare. His hope shattered into a million pieces, snapping like fragile glass under the weight of the invasion. He stared down at his trembling blade, wondering if his beloved kingdom was simply destined to fall helplessly in the end. The overwhelming truth washed over him in a sickening wave. He couldn't stop this massacre. A profound sense of helplessness anchored him to the blood-stained earth as the shadows of his enemies closed in. Yet amidst the blazing inferno and the stench of death, a stubborn flicker of defiance ignited within his heart. He tightened his grip on his hilt, stepping over the burning debris of his fallen home. The enemy forces charged forward in a tight formation, their spears aimed directly at his chest. Instead of retreating to safety, he launched himself straight into the deadly wall of steel. He had already made a silent, unbreakable oath to himself long before this night began. He swore never to fear the enemies that threatened his people, no matter how terrifying they appeared. He resolved to act strictly according to his own unyielding beliefs. He would carry on the heavy duty of the Betrayal bloodline, regardless of the horrific cost. Suddenly, a hulking figure from the dreaded Black Army loomed over him, radiating pure, suffocating malice from behind a skull mask. The monstrous soldier swung a massive weapon down, fully intent on ending the prince's life right then and there, but he refused to back down, fiercely prepared to fight for his kingdom until his very last breath. With a ferocious battle cry, he unleashed a desperate, glowing strike, infused with the last of his mana. The sheer force of his swing tore completely through the enemy's heavy guard. His blade sliced through armor and flesh alike, cutting down anyone foolish enough to stand in his path. The massive impact sent shockwaves rippling through the burning courtyard, briefly stalling the enemy advance. Another soldier fell beneath his blade, their blood vaporizing instantly in the intense heat of the blazing castle. He didn't pause for even a fraction of a second, his sword dancing in a deadly, relentless blue arc. His body was severely battered, his lungs burning with inhaled smoke, but pure adrenaline forced him to keep pushing forward. A rogue spear suddenly darted out from the flames, aiming for a fatal blind spot in his stance. He deflected the lethal thrust with a heavy clang, sparks exploding violently upon impact. The enemy stumbled back, completely overwhelmed by the bleeding prince's terrifying will to survive. But his stamina was rapidly failing, his grip slipping dangerously on the blood-soaked hilt of his weapon. A sickening squelch echoed through the chaos of the battlefield. A blade pierced right through his exhausted defenses, digging deep into his side. He coughed up blood, his vision instantly blurring as he staggered backwards from the fatal blow. His breath came in ragged, painful gasps, his body finally reaching its absolute limit. He gazed one last time at the burning remnants of the kingdom he had failed to save. The agonizing screams of his people echoed in his ears, violently tormenting his failing conscience. "Do not discard their honor," he commanded himself, forcing his trembling, bloodied arms to raise his sword one last time. Even while staring death right in the face, he fiercely refused to die on his knees like a coward. He threw himself into the inferno one final time, fully committed to carrying out his duty until the bitter end. But the overwhelming forces were simply too much, and his broken body finally plummeted toward the scorched earth. The blistering heat of the flames slowly faded into a cold, endless, disorienting darkness. His final vow to protect his kingdom echoed softly into the empty void of death. The deafening sounds of war vanished entirely, replaced by an eerie, sudden silence. He blinked, the dark void abruptly shifting into the grand, peaceful, and highly familiar ceiling of a castle hall. He stood there, completely frozen, his breathing ragged as the horrifying visions of blood and fire violently faded from his mind. Suddenly, a heavy, grounding hand clamped down firmly onto his small shoulder. He flinched violently, his wide, panicked eyes snapping up as his heart hammered against his ribs. Father?" he stammered, completely bewildered to see his father standing alive and well before him. His father stared down at him, deeply concerned by the young boy's sudden, unexplainable terror. "Yuri, do you hear my voice?" his father asked, his deep, commanding tone cutting right through the boy's lingering panic. Yuri frantically scanned the room, fully expecting to see the terrifying black army bursting through the intact doors. But the hall was completely peaceful. There was no fire, no blood, and no signs of an invasion. "Calm down, Yuri. What you saw was just an illusion," his father urged, trying to pull his son back to reality. His small hands trembled violently as he realized he was gripping a heavy wooden training sword, not a bloodied steel blade. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to accept that the horrifying massacre was just a vision, or perhaps a memory of a life long gone. His father let out a heavy sigh, releasing the immense tension that had built up in his broad shoulders. "It seems I was wrong," his father admitted softly, clearly regretting pushing the young prince into such a traumatic trial. "Yuri, his father began, a complex mix of deep sorrow and quiet resignation swimming in his eyes. The heavy weight of his supposedly failed destiny hung in the air as his father prepared to excuse him from the harsh path of the sword forever. "I will wield the sword," Yuri suddenly interrupted, his voice surprisingly steady and clear. His father's eyes widened in genuine, undisguised surprise at the boy's sudden shift in demeanor. "Yes, I've made that decision," the young boy declared, staring right back with a hardened, unwavering resolve that didn't belong to a child. He quickly reached out, lightly smacking his father's armored arm to break the heavy, suffocating tension in the room. "Someone might think I'm going to die right away or something," he joked with a bright, overly exaggerated laugh, desperately masking his lingering trauma. He struck a confident, arrogant pose, pointing proudly at himself to lighten the mood. "Hey, you don't have to worry so much. I'm a genius after all," he proclaimed loudly, flashing a brilliant smile. The sheer audacity of the ridiculous claim finally brought a small, relieved smirk to his father's stern face. Internally, Yuri winced, wondering why he was suddenly making such an embarrassing childish face just to play the part. The heavy shadows of the past finally began to lift, seamlessly replaced by the clear, bright morning sky of a new day. Sometime later, the tranquil peace of the Brial estate remained completely undisturbed by the horrors of the future. Out in the courtyard, a battered training dummy sat under the warm sunlight, waiting for its next victim. A distinguished man with a sharp, meticulously groomed mustache turned around, sensing someone approaching his location. Yuri strolled up to him confidently, his small wooden sword hanging casually at his side. It was Bernard, an elite master swordsman who had taken up a temporary residence within the grand estate. "Whose masterpiece is that today?" Bernard asked dryly, immediately noticing the large, comical bump on the young prince's head. Yuri rubbed the painful swelling, silently recalling his father's incredibly harsh, borderline abusive training methods from earlier. But his gaze quickly sharpened. He remembered exactly why this formidable man was currently staying in Briol. He knew Bernard had only remained in the kingdom because of a very specific, unfulfilled promise made to his father. "Bernard, you stayed in Briol on the condition of a duel with my father, right?" Yuri asked, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Yes, that's correct," Bernard replied simply, not bothering to hide his true motives from a mere child. The young prince crossed his arms, studying the older, experienced man carefully. "Then would you stay if I told you so, even if you can't have a duel with my father?" Yuri pressed, testing the knight's loyalty. "Nope," Bernard rejected the idea instantly, shooting down the young prince without a single shred of hesitation. Yuri cursed internally, heavily annoyed by the elite knight's blatantly heartless honesty. But Bernard's rigid stance softened slightly, a faint spark of amusement dancing in his eyes as he analyzed the boy's unusual confidence. He offered a near-impossible proposition. He would only stay if the young prince could somehow demonstrate the legendary swordsmanship of his legendary ancestor, Eric Briol. When Bernard asks if the prince will actually teach him the Founding King's legendary sword technique, the sword demon's eyes gleam with absolute, unfiltered fascination. But the prince instantly shuts him down, flatly refusing the ridiculous request. Bernard assumes it's simply because the young royal hasn't fully mastered the devastating art himself yet. Gripping his hilt, the prince admits that while true, his lack of mastery isn't the real issue here. He reveals a shocking truth. This specific technique is entirely intertwined with its own unique mana method. A brilliant, suffocating blue aura erupts from the prince's blade, radiating immense pressure. Bernard stares in disbelief, having never heard of such a flawless, permanent integration before. Usually, a mana method is just a temporary tool used to reinforce a standard sword strike. The prince explains that teaching the physical moves without the mana core would only give Bernard a broken, incomplete skill. The veteran warrior rubs his chin, carefully weighing this massive, seemingly insurmountable limitation. But instead of walking away disappointed, a wild grin spreads across his face. He boldly declares that he will stay in the kingdom of betrayal just for a mere taste of that power. Even half of a legendary technique is more than enough to spark his relentless battle hunger. The prince can't help but smile at the veteran swordsman's sheer, unbreakable arrogance. Knowing he has the upper hand, he officially accepts the dangerous deal. Stepping forward, the prince prepares to give Bernard exactly what he asked for. The sword demon immediately raises his own blade, his battle-hardened senses on high alert. Blinding blue energy floods the entire courtyard as the prince draws his weapon with lethal intent. With a fierce glare, he unleashes the devastating power of soul severance. As the terrifying display concludes, the prince stands perfectly calm amidst the fading aura. But then he drops a bombshell. The king had already commanded Bernard to stay in Briolle for 10 years anyway. The sudden realization that he just got completely played hits Bernard like a ton of bricks. Wasting no time, the sword demon lunges forward to claim his first lesson, by brute force. His blade cuts through the air with lethal, terrifying speed. The prince barely has a fraction of a second to ignite his blue aura to defend his life. He grits his teeth, his arms trembling violently under the sudden, overwhelming pressure of the strike. A massive shockwave shatters the very air around them as their swords violently collide. Frustrated, the young royal screams at Bernard for launching such a dirty surprise attack, but the veteran just swings again, forcing the prince into a desperate high-speed spar. The next morning, the golden sun rises peacefully over the quiet royal palace. Lying in his massive bed, the prince stares blankly at the ceiling, letting the reality of his situation sink in. His eyes widen as he pieces together the massive rippling shifts in the timeline. He still remembers the horrifying alternate future where his entire kingdom was mercilessly reduced to ash. The agonizing memories of Brielle burning to the ground will never ever leave his mind, but having a powerhouse like Bernard stationed here changes the survival odds entirely. Even without making drastic moves, the tragic fate of his home is already rewriting itself. He admits that carrying the solo burden of saving everyone had been completely suffocating. Yet these tiny victories finally give him a real, tangible reason to hope. A fiery determination fills his gaze as he swears to crush the Empire's invasion this time around. He vows to protect his people no matter the bloody cost, but his dramatic internal monologue is suddenly and violently interrupted. His frantic maid, Ina, bursts into his chambers looking absolutely terrified out of her mind. She practically begs him on her knees to just behave himself for one single day. Startled, the prince sits up, completely clueless as to why she's panicking so early in the morning. Ina exasperatedly reminds him that he has a terrible, undeniable habit of causing chaos everywhere he goes. Still half asleep, he asks what exactly he's supposed to be doing today that has her so on edge. She drops the terrifying news. The king has ordered his mandatory attendance at the Grand Senate meeting. The prince curses under his breath, realizing he completely forgot about the political viper's nest awaiting him. Ina immediately drags him out of bed to get him dressed for the upcoming battlefield. Holding his hands tightly, she gives him one last desperately earnest warning. The senators are ruthless, stubborn old men who will use any excuse to tear him down. She begs him to keep his fists to himself and just nod along like a good royal. The prince laughs softly, assuring her that his days of throwing blind tantrums are long over. Ina glares at him suspiciously, refusing to let go until he swears on his life. Shortly after, he arrives at the grand, imposing architecture of the central political palace. Inside the grand, shadowed hall, the most powerful and corrupt men in the kingdom are already gathered. And almost immediately, a heavy fist violently slams against the wooden table. The prince sits silently, realizing Ina's warnings were entirely and unfortunately justified. Duke Jatari wastes no time launching a furious, loud verbal assault against the young royal. The Duke loudly proclaims that it is wildly inappropriate for a prince to practice an unsanctioned rogue mana method. The surrounding nobles murmur in heavy agreement, feeding into the deeply hostile atmosphere. They complain that their highly valuable time shouldn't be wasted on a boy's martial arts hobby. Watching them bicker, the prince finally understands why his father despised these draining meetings so much. Jatari pompously suggests the prince stick to the traditional, much safer betrayal techniques. Another senator aggressively questions the very existence of the founding king's supposedly lost legacy. They demand hard, undeniable proof that the prince isn't just making up fairy tales for attention. Playing the victim, Jatari claims his harsh words only come from a place of deep, fatherly concern for the prince's safety. The prince flashes a dark, knowing smirk at the absolutely pathetic lie. He knows exactly who Jatari really is, a spineless traitor who instantly bowed to the empire the moment Briol fell in his past life. Trying to build their case, the nobles turn to Captain Sanade for his professional martial backing. The seasoned royal guard sits stiffly under the crushing, expectant gaze of the politicians, his hands clenched nervously, fully aware of the dangerous political landmine he just stepped on. Jatari angrily demands that the captain admit the prince's new technique is a deadly mistake. Twisting Sanade's silence, the duke triumphantly declares that even the royal guard finds it too risky to support. Jatari shakes his head in mock pity, pushing hard to ban the technique entirely from the castle grounds. The council acts like a perfect echo chamber, agreeing that the risk to the royal bloodline is far too great. One by one, the corrupt nobles rally together to strip the prince of his newly acquired power. A silver-haired senator watches the boy closely, silently waiting to see how he handles the pressure. The prince glares daggers at the table, realizing they are expertly manipulating the truth to keep him weak and controllable. He knows he's losing control of the room, and the narrative is rapidly turning against him. The senators unanimously agree that he must abandon the founding king's path immediately before it's too late. Normally, they would be right. Switching a mana method early on is entirely possible for a standard beginner. An average aura user could easily flush out their system and start completely over without issue. The council smugly assures him that adapting to a new sanctioned style will be a simple, painless fix, but they have absolutely no idea what he actually endured inside that ancient, time-bending illusion. The brutal life-or-death clash with the legendary king had permanently and violently scarred his soul. Soul severance isn't just a technique anymore, it has fused completely and permanently with his very core. Cold sweat drips down his face as he desperately tries to think of an excuse that won't expose his impossible regression. But just as the suffocating pressure reaches a breaking point, a cocky smirk flashes from the shadows. A lone hand raises casually from the far end of the grand tense table. A confident voice cuts through the noble's arrogant chatter, asking a dangerously simple question. Baron Calcio Arancha leans in with a feral grin, asking how many of these soft politicians have ever actually fought an orc to the death. The air in the Grand Senate room grew incredibly tense. High-ranking nobles exchanged disgusted glances. A pompous lord scoffed, completely outraged by the newcomer's presence. Standing tall among the elite was Calcio Arancha, a man carrying himself with an unapologetic smirk. He casually introduced himself, fully aware of the stir he was causing. The very idea of a lowly free baron attending their exclusive meeting was considered an absolute insult. But Calcio wasn't intimidated, openly admitting he had zero desire to be there anyway. The third prince sat quietly, observing the chaotic exchange with sharp eyes. Calcio revealed he was sent on behalf of Count Sidar. The mere mention of the legendary frontier lord commanded instant respect. Count Sidar was widely known as a true soldier, a man forged entirely on the battlefield. Calcio locked eyes with the young royal. The surrounding nobles were baffled by this sudden representative. Watching them bicker over trivial matters made Calcio realize exactly why he had been sent. These sheltered politicians had no idea what real combat looked like. He boldly addressed the prince directly. The young boy listened carefully to the battle-hardened man. Calcio declared that out on the brutal front lines, the type of mana method someone used meant absolutely nothing. He swept his piercing gaze across the room, his voice dripping with absolute authority. The sheer audacity of his words left the aristocrats completely speechless. One of the lords finally snapped, calling his behavior completely reckless. Calcio just smiled, entirely unfazed by their fragile egos. The massive Senate hall echoed with his blunt truths. Whispers of discontent spread like wildfire among the out-of-touch politicians. They couldn't stand being lectured by someone they deemed far beneath them. Yet the prince remained completely unmoved by the nobles' complaints. His sharp gaze showed he understood the heavy weight of Calcio's words perfectly. Calcio leaned forward, challenging every single person in the room. The overwhelming presence of the veteran warrior quickly silenced the dissenters. A faint, confident smile crossed the prince's face. Unable to handle the humiliation, a blonde noble furiously slammed his fists down. He arrogantly demanded to know why the frontier forces needed so much funding if they were so capable. Instantly, Calcio's expression darkened, a chilling intensity taking over his demeanor. He spoke of the harsh reality of the border, where soldiers bled out in the mud every single day. Just that morning, he had covered a fallen comrade's face with a shroud. The crushing grief of losing a friend he had just shared breakfast with weighed heavily on his voice. The stark contrast between their lavish lives and the brutal reality of war hung heavy in the air. A suffocating silence fell over the Grand Senate room. Not a single noble dared to utter another word. The terrifying threat of the orcs had finally been brought to the table. Hearing this, the prince immediately began to connect the dots. He recalled the ongoing border disputes between Briol and the Klein Duchy. The monstrous creatures were taking advantage of the chaos, leaving a trail of fire and death. Scorched earth and endless devastation marked their brutal advance. The prince calmly asked about the sudden shift in the monsters' movements. Calcio was visibly taken aback by the boy's incredibly sharp intuition. The young royal pressed further, questioning why Klein's stationed army hadn't intervened. Calcio solemnly confirmed that the border forces had inexplicably retreated. Without protection, the surrounding villages were left completely defenseless against the slaughter. He described the horrifying aftermath of the sudden invasion. Innocent people were being violently dragged away into a living nightmare. The prince closed his eyes, piecing together the grim puzzle. The timing of the retreat was far too perfect to be a mere coincidence. Petty political maneuvering was creating a devastating and bloody blind spot. The nobles exchanged nervous glances, finally realizing the true severity of the situation. The prince deduced that this was likely the work of the duke's troublesome third son once again. The foolish political games had to end right now. With absolute authority, the young boy abruptly ended the meeting. The blonde lord stuttered, desperately trying to protest the sudden dismissal. But the prince was already walking out, leaving the useless politicians behind. He refused to waste another second debating his mana method when real lives were at stake. He firmly shut the heavy doors, cutting off the noise of the useless Senate. His priority was the impending war, not aristocratic gossip. Later that evening, the sun set over the bustling capital city. Through a magical connection, the legendary frontier lord finally revealed his face. The worn-down quarters served as a temporary and highly secure base of operations. The commander noted the incredible rumors surrounding the once foolish royal. Calcio smiled, recalling the boy's impressive performance in the Senate Hall. The veteran warrior delivered his first-hand report of the day's events. His new orders were clear: uncover exactly what had changed within the young royal. The magical connection hummed softly in the quiet room. Calcio readily agreed to the mission, his curiosity already piqued. With a quick motion, the secure communication was completely severed. Outside, the peaceful townspeople went about their evening, completely unaware of the looming war. Calcio glanced out the window, observing the quiet streets below. Down in the shadows, a familiar young boy casually strolled past. Calcio's eyes widened in sheer disbelief at the unexpected sight. It was the very target of his investigation, sneaking through the dark alleys with his companion. Hernando anxiously whispered about their flawless escape from the palace guards. His heart was racing, absolutely terrified of getting caught on this illicit night out. He nervously asked if they were about to do something terrible. Despite his anxiety, a small part of him was secretly disappointed they weren't breaking more rules. Still, he desperately needed to know their final destination. The prince turned back, a mischievous and highly confident grin spreading across his face. Hernando braced himself for the answer. He was completely dumbfounded when the boy revealed their true target. The young royal strode forward, carrying the fate of the nation on his shoulders. Hernando realized with dread that the prince had meticulously planned this all along. Towering before them was the capital's largest, most extravagant illegal casino. With a pocket full of gold and a dangerous plan, the prince was ready to shake the corrupt establishment to its very core. He remembers his past life perfectly, recalling the true monsters who ruled the city of Briol from the shadows. There was a ruthless moneylender who controlled the entire underworld with an iron fist. His wealth and power were absolute, built on the broken lives of countless victims. Then there was a business titan, a woman who single-handedly built the most successful merchant guild on the continent. But the most terrifying of them all was the final figure, an infamous, legendary assassin who bathed the streets in blood. This absolute nightmare of a killer beheaded the underworld boss, seized his entire operation, and ruled through pure violence. The fear this assassin instilled echoed to every dark corner of the kingdom. Whoever crossed their path was guaranteed a brutal, merciless end, and Yuri knows exactly who the assassin's first major victim was. Stepping into the lavish, bustling casino, Yuri does not go unnoticed. The current top loan shark of the underworld, Goryo, immediately steps forward with a sickeningly polite smile. Hidden beneath dark cloaks, Yuri and his royal mage companions stand their ground. Goryo flatters them, acting honored that the third prince would grace his establishment. But Yuri cuts right through the fake pleasantries, his voice cold and commanding. He makes it clear he isn't here to casually throw away coins at a gambling table. The heavy golden lights of the casino seem to dim as the tension rises. Sensing a much larger opportunity, Goryo gestures toward the back rooms. He leads the royal guests away from the prying eyes of the public. Taking their seats in a secluded area, Yuri's companion panics, frantically whispering about the immense danger they are in. Goryo sits across from them, his eyes gleaming with dangerous curiosity. His armed enforcers stand by, silently watching the young prince. Goryo smirks, assuming the prince is desperate enough to borrow a fortune for a private fund. Yuri doesn't flinch, his gaze piercing right through the criminal's arrogant facade. The loan shark probes for details, trying to figure out what grand scheme requires such dirty money. The royal mage begins to sweat bullets, terrified of what Yuri might say next. Without a shred of hesitation, Yuri reveals his master plan. He intends to pour an astronomical amount of gold into a single investment. He is going to purchase mugranja, an obscure specialty spice from a distant region. His companion gasps in horror, while Goryo is left completely baffled by the seemingly foolish decision. Goryo strokes his chin, his mind racing to find the hidden trap. Yuri sits in complete silence, letting the criminal overthink the situation. The spice has always been a luxury, but investing a fortune into it seems like utter madness. The royal mage shrinks into his seat, convinced they are about to be slaughtered for wasting the boss's time, but Yuri leans back comfortably, projecting an aura of absolute control. Goryo stares deeply into the boy's eyes, realizing the rumors of the incompetent prince were completely wrong. This boy is hiding a terrifying amount of knowledge behind his calm demeanor. The room falls into a deafening silence. The heavy atmosphere hangs over the hidden casino room. With a quiet tap of his fingers, Goryo agrees to the massive loan. The criminal smirks, convinced he just locked a desperate royal into an inescapable debt. But Yuri smiles right back, knowing he just secured his first major pawn. Stepping out into the cold night, Yuri holds the finalized contract in his hands. His companion completely loses his mind, screaming about the astronomical amount of money they just borrowed from a monster. He trails behind the prince, desperately demanding an explanation for this suicide mission. He points out that borrowing from Goryo is a guaranteed death sentence if things go wrong. Yuri simply smiles, entirely unbothered by the sheer panic radiating from his friend. He leads the way through the winding cobblestone streets, his mind already on the next phase. He knows something nobody else does. The only alchemist capable of producing the spice is already dead, slaughtered in a brutal civil war, leaving the market entirely vulnerable. With no substitute available, the price of the spice is guaranteed to skyrocket beyond imagination. A decaying wooden sign sways violently in the wind. They arrive at a crumbling, miserable shack that looks ready to collapse at any second. Yuri stares up at the pathetic establishment with intense purpose. His companion's jaw drops, completely unable to process the situation. He screams in disbelief, asking how a prince could possibly entrust a massive fortune to a rundown dump like this. Ignoring the frantic protests, Yuri firmly knocks on the rotting door. He loudly calls out a specific name, demanding the owner reveal herself. The royal mage grips his head in absolute despair. Slowly, the heavy wooden door begins to creak open. A pair of worn-out shoes step into the dim moonlight. A quiet, hesitant voice asks who is looking for her. Elaine Wood steps out, completely unaware of the destiny standing on her doorstep. She looks at the two cloaked figures standing in the dirt street. Shock registers on her face as she realizes a royal prince is standing outside her failing shop. The royal mage freezes, staring at the struggling merchant in pure disbelief. He grips his face, convinced the prince has finally lost his mind. But Yuri secures her loyalty and turns to walk away, his master plan falling perfectly into place. He smirks, knowing she won't be a struggling nobody for long. Soon, her name will echo across the entire continent as an unstoppable force. She will sit on a throne of endless gold, commanding the most powerful merchant guild in the world. Unlike the loan shark who relies on bloodshed and terror to maintain control, Goryo is nothing more than a violent thug hiding behind a facade of trust. Elaine, however, treats every single promise to her clients as sacred. Yuri smiles wickedly at his horrified companion, his ambition burning brighter than ever. The mage exhales deeply, completely drained of all his energy. He weakly points out that they are finally done for the night, but Yuri turns toward an even darker, more dangerous alleyway. His expression hardens as he reveals there is still one more person to find. He has secured the underworld's money and the future merchant queen. Now he needs the ultimate weapon to protect it all. His companion drags his feet, begging for the madness to end. They descend into the absolute worst part of the slums, where desperation and violence rule the streets. Yuri scans the miserable alleyways, searching for a very specific shadow. Deep in the freezing darkness, past the starving beggars, he finally spots a tiny, trembling figure huddled against the cold stone wall. The small frame shivers violently, fighting just to survive another night. Yuri steps forward, bringing light into the pitch-black corner. He looks down at the pathetic sight and introduces himself as the third prince. The small figure slowly lifts her head in utter confusion. Yuri knows exactly who he is looking at, the monster who will eventually slaughter Goryo in cold blood. The one who will stand over the loan shark's severed body, the sole surviving member of the deadliest assassin order in history, a force of pure unstoppable terror. But right now she is just a scared, freezing girl, completely unaware of the legend she is about to become. Stepping into the dimly lit alleyway, the young prince finally tracks down the person he has been searching for. He approaches calmly, his dark cloak allowing him to blend perfectly into the shadows of the dangerous slums. But the young woman before him immediately bristles with defensive suspicion, her sharp eyes completely locked on the mysterious boy. Realizing her intense fear, he gently raises a hand and tells her there is absolutely no need to be so wary around him. His companion watches quietly from behind, completely baffled by the prince's sudden interest in a random street beggar. Without a second of hesitation, the prince holds out a heavy jingling pouch filled with enough gold to instantly change a life. The staggering weight of the coins is offered freely to someone who currently has absolutely nothing. The prince stares intently at her, remembering a horrific and tragic future that he is now desperately trying to prevent. Peeking nervously from behind the woman is a sick, frail little girl, the exact reason for the woman's sheer desperation. Utter shock washes over the young woman's face as she stares blankly at the massive fortune handed to her. In his past life, the prince knows she was forced into crippling debt just to pay for that sick child's temple treatment. She had blindly borrowed from a ruthless loan shark named Goryo, a monster who destroyed the lives of everyone in his grasp. That impossible debt had completely crushed her soul, leaving her utterly broken and desperate for survival. It violently forced her down a dark path, transforming her from a caring guardian into a cold-blooded killer. She eventually became recognized as one of the continent's most terrifyingly skilled assassins, a fate drenched in tragedy and blood. Clutching the heavy bag of coins, the woman remains completely speechless, unaware that her dark future has just been erased. Still trembling, she cautiously asks what he could possibly want in return for such a massive, life-saving fortune. The prince simply smiles, asking for only one single thing in exchange. With a warm, radiant expression, he officially introduces himself as the third prince, Yuri Briol, commanding her to remember his name. Leaving her completely stunned, Yuri turns his back and walks away into the night, his critical mission accomplished. As they walk away through the slums, his companion Hernando finally blurts out the question burning in his mind. He demands to know why Yuri just handed a royal fortune to a random filthy street beggar. Yuri simply smiles, seeing the girl not as a beggar but as a crucial pawn for his upcoming survival. He confidently explains that it was merely an investment, securing the loyal connections he will desperately need in the future. But quickly pivoting the conversation, Yuri suddenly locks eyes with Hernando, trapping him on the spot. The prince's tone shifts, becoming deadly serious as he corners his companion in the empty alley. He demands to know exactly what Hernando witnessed while gambling his life away inside the founding king's tomb. Hernando completely freezes, caught off guard by the sudden piercing interrogation. Trying to play it cool, he awkwardly whistles, desperately attempting to deflect the prince's intense, knowing gaze. But the sweat heavily dripping down his face makes it painfully obvious that he is hiding a massive secret. Deciding not to push it for now, Yuri simply commands him to keep tonight's little outing a complete secret. The very next day, the brilliant sun shines over the massive, imposing royal palace of the empire. Inside the grand throne room, the tension in the air is suffocatingly thick. Hernando kneels respectfully on the red carpet, forced to answer to the absolute highest authority in the realm. The emperor glares down from his golden throne, demanding a full report on his son's mysterious activities outside the walls. The ruler's sharp, commanding eyes pierce right through Hernando, expecting nothing but the absolute truth. The massive windows cast long shadows across the floor as the emperor demands to know exactly what happened yesterday. Hernando keeps his expression completely neutral, carefully executing the flawless cover story they had prepared. He reports that the third prince convinced him to visit the most notorious and lively spot in the capital. He lies smoothly, claiming they spent the entire night wasting away at the biggest casino in the empire. The emperor leans back, his eyes narrowing in suspicion as he processes the scandalous news of his son's behavior. He listens silently as Hernando continues painting the perfect picture of a reckless gambling prince. Intrigued, the emperor asks if the young boy actually gambled all of his money away at the tables. Hernando confidently confirms it, stating that despite being good at cards, the prince performed terribly and lost absolutely everything. He ruthlessly adds that Yuri had to borrow heavily from a dangerous loan shark named Goryo just to keep playing. A noble woman gasps in pure shock at the horrifying idea of a royal prince dealing with common street thugs. The room murmurs in absolute disbelief as Hernando explains how the prince threw away a fortune to some old merchant guild. He twists the truth perfectly, completely hiding the fact that the money actually went to saving a desperate assassin's life. Hernando concludes by saying they merely walked around the slums so the sheltered prince could see how commoners live. He maintains a polite, convincing smile, securing Yuri's massive secret flawlessly from the emperor's grasp. The emperor asks one final time if the prince safely returned to the palace after his bizarre adventure. Hernando gently closes his eyes, keeping his composure perfectly intact. He bows respectfully and confirms that the prince is back, finishing his carefully crafted report. The emperor rests his chin on his hand, completely lost in deep, calculating thought. The ruler's stern face betrays no emotion, making it impossible to tell if he actually bought the elaborate lie. Hernando steals a quick glance, feeling the immense, crushing pressure of lying directly to the sovereign. Later, standing in a grand sunlit hallway, the heavy atmosphere shifts completely. Hernando approaches Yuri, changing the topic to the upcoming grand ball and wondering if the prince will finally attend. Yuri confidently states that people's minds can change, heavily hinting at his own evolving, dangerous plans. With a charming, relaxed smile, he casually mentions that it has been quite a while since he last danced. Out in the training courtyard, the blazing sun beats down on the pristine white stone walls. The sharp clash of wooden swords echoes aggressively through the air as Yuri pushes his body to the absolute limit. His instructor, Bernard, stands firm, easily deflecting the young prince's fierce and relentless strikes. Yuri pants heavily, sweat dripping down his face as he struggles to keep up with the seasoned knight's overwhelming power. Bernard smoothly dodges another attack, openly teasing Yuri about his unexpected popularity around the royal grounds. He points out that the passing castle maids can't seem to take their eyes off the young, handsome prince's training sessions. Bernard sighs deeply, reminding Yuri that with so many eyes on him, skipping the upcoming ball is no longer an option. The knight calmly shifts his stance, effortlessly analyzing every single one of Yuri's movements. He admits that the prince was entirely right about his unique sword technique severely lacking a decisive form. A violently shattered wooden training sword lies on the ground, hard proof of the intense power behind their sparring. Bernard advises him to simply move naturally with the flow of the battle instead of forcing rigid, predictable movements. The seasoned warrior casually rests his blade on his shoulder, completely unfazed by the grueling workout. Yuri readies his wooden sword once again, incredibly determined to master his new fluid combat style. He swings with incredible precision, his body perfectly adjusting to the powerful mana flowing through his veins. But deep down, Yuri feels a pang of guilt, knowing his rapid progress is just him erasing his past life's terrible habits. Bernard looks deeply concerned, strictly warning the young prince not to rush his physical growth so recklessly. Yuri stares ahead, his eyes filled with an unshakable, burning determination to become stronger no matter the cost. He quickly flashes a reassuring smile, promising his worried instructor that he will definitely maintain a healthy balance. But instantly, his playful demeanor drops as he tightly grips his weapon and turns to the rack. He fiercely grabs a real heavy steel sword, instantly escalating the deadly danger of their training session. Holding the gleaming metal blade, Yuri boldly challenges his master to spar with live weapons. He steps perfectly into a flawless combat stance, proving that he is absolutely serious about this fight. Bernard smirks, willingly drawing his own steel blade to entertain his fiery, stubborn student. Yuri confidently raises a hand, proposing a high-stakes bet. If he lands a single hit, Bernard must attend the ball. Bernard instantly gets annoyed by the cheeky challenge, refusing to let a kid order him around and demanding to nullify the bet if Yuri loses. But the fierce competitive spark in Yuri's eyes proves he isn't backing down from the challenge anytime soon. Suddenly, explosive blue mana violently erupts from Yuri's blade, tearing intensely through the courtyard air. With terrifying, blinding speed, the young prince launches himself forward, cracking the stone beneath his feet. He dashes forward like a lightning bolt, aiming a devastating strike straight for the seasoned knight. Bernard aggressively parries at the last possible second, his eyes widening in shock as sparks fly violently between their clashing steel. Several days later, the rhythmic clatter of heavy horse hooves echoes loudly through the bustling capital streets. The highly anticipated night has finally arrived, and the royal palace is brilliantly illuminated for the grand ball. Luxurious gold-trimmed carriages line up perfectly at the entrance, delivering the most elite nobles of the entire empire. Inside one of the grandest carriages, a highly influential figure sits bathed in the pale moonlight. Sitting elegantly across from him is a young woman, quietly staring out the window at the approaching castle walls. The second prince of the empire, George Ivarna Grandzion, smiles darkly as he casually addresses his royal companion. He teasingly notes that Princess Yekaterina hasn't taken her eyes off the window for the entire ride, clearly excited for the event. Glowing magical flowers illuminate their path as they prepare to step into the dangerous viper's nest of royal politics. Yekaterina smiles with terrifyingly bright enthusiasm, admitting there is someone at this ball she is absolutely dying to meet. Night falls over the grand royal palace, signaling the start of a major celebration. Inside his chambers, the prince is asked how his formal attire feels. He stands tall, adorned in an elegant blue and gold suit tailored specifically for the event. However, he finds the heavy accessories and bright decorations a bit too flashy for his taste. His loyal maid Anna gently adjusts his collar, reminding him that he used to love such extravagance. The prince simply dismisses the thought, preferring a more refined look this time around. With his outfit settled, he turns to Ina with an unexpected request. He announces that he needs to practice his ballroom dancing before the banquet begins. Anna points to herself in sheer disbelief. Flustered, she asks if she really has to be his dance partner. The prince extends his hand, leaving absolutely no room for refusal. Startled, Ina's braids bounce as she hesitantly accepts his grasp. He pulls her in close, their faces mere inches apart. Ina's cheeks flush bright red as he calmly tells her to just follow his lead. She awkwardly tries to match his rhythm, clearly inexperienced with formal ballroom dancing. He confidently remarks that he's actually a fairly good dancer. Standing by the moonlit window, they slowly sway back and forth in the quiet room. The prince teases her, noting he's never danced with someone quite so short before. The peaceful moment is immediately ruined as Enna clumsily stomps right onto his foot. Meanwhile, down in the banquet hall, the musicians begin to play, signaling that the real event is about to start. Inside the grand hall, nobles twirl across the brightly lit dance floor. Glasses of expensive red wine are raised in celebration. The gentle melody of classical music fills the vibrant room. Seated upon his extravagant throne, the king silently overlooks the festivities. Below him, the elite of the kingdom mingle and gossip in their finest attire. The prince quietly observes the massive crowd from the sidelines. His brother approaches, standing beside him amidst the bustling hall. The brother points out the arrival of Count Sitter. The battle-hardened old knight stands out heavily amongst the fragile nobles. The prince's eyes narrow as he takes in the sight of the legendary warrior. His brother notices the prince squinting and asks if his eyesight is getting worse. The prince brushes it off, adjusting the glasses hanging from his coat. Suddenly, the loud, booming sound of ceremonial horns echoes through the hall. A royal guard raises his instrument to the ceiling, demanding everyone's attention. The massive double doors at the entrance slowly begin to creak open. A hush falls over the crowd as a highly anticipated guest arrives. A tall, imposing figure confidently steps onto the red carpet. Wearing a striking red cape, the man exudes an aura of absolute authority. The king himself steps forward to greet the newcomer with a warm handshake. The prince stares at the man, a dark shadow crossing his face. While the guest is welcomed with the utmost respect, the prince's attention is suddenly drawn elsewhere. He spots a familiar figure standing nearby. Stepping into the light is a beautiful young woman with flowing blonde hair. Yekaterina offers a graceful, picture-perfect bow. Just hearing her name sends a violent jolt through the prince's mind. In his past life, she had been a source of unbearable pain and misery. Memories of shattered glass and a completely broken relationship flash before his eyes. A bitter apology echoes in his memories, reminding him of his past foolishness. He closes his eyes tightly, forcing the haunting images away. This time he vows never to make the same mistake with her again. Yekaterina catches the prince's eye from across the busy room. She offers him a warm, inviting smile, completely unaware of his deep inner turmoil. The prince quickly turns his head, refusing to even acknowledge her. Around them, the nobles begin to murmur and whisper about the distinguished guests. The prince's brother praises Cedric's character, noting his incredibly benevolent nature. The prince listens silently, taking a slow sip of his drink. He watches Cedric effortlessly charm the crowd with his bright personality. It's the perfect image of a benevolent lord, loved and respected by all. The prince can't help but compare his own dark, bloody past to that shining reputation. Deep down, he feels entirely out of place in this glittering world. He finally turns his back on Yekaterina, completely ending their silent exchange. She watches him walk away, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. The prince sighs heavily, utterly exhausted by the mere presence of his past demons. He mutters under his breath, wondering why he should care about someone who brought him such misery. Just then, a cheerful voice breaks through his gloomy thoughts. Ina appears, holding a silver tray with a warm, comforting smile. She offers him a fresh plate of sweet cookies. Looking at his loyal maid, the prince realizes how much he appreciates her simple, honest kindness. Taking a cookie, he tells her to let him know if she needs anything else. He steps away from the buffet table, finally feeling a tiny bit of relief, but his brief moment of peace is instantly shattered. A terrifying shadow falls directly over him. The man in the red cape, George Ivarna Grandzion, stands right in front of him. The mere sight of George triggers a horrific memory of a blood-soaked battlefield. George was the ruthless commander who had driven the Brile Kingdom into utter ruin. The prince remembers the crushing defeat his people suffered at this very man's hands. Despite the raging hatred in his heart, the prince forces himself to stay perfectly calm. He knows he cannot show open hostility to an honored guest of the king. George looks down at the young prince with piercing, unnatural green eyes. A chilling smirk slowly creeps across the commander's face. Suddenly, a suffocating wave of pure bloodlust erupts from George. The intense aura crashes down onto the prince like an invisible physical weight. The prince grits his teeth, his body trembling under the overwhelming pressure. George leans in, actively testing the young boy's resolve with his monstrous strength. The commander is genuinely surprised that a 13-year-old hasn't collapsed from fear. The prince clenches his fists, refusing to back down or show any weakness. He realizes this man is dangerously strong, far beyond a simple test of character. Just as the tension reaches its breaking point, a loud crash shatters the silence. A glass goblet drops to the floor, exploding into sharp fragments. Red wine spills across the polished marble, perfectly resembling a pool of fresh blood. Ina gasps in pure terror, falling to her hands and knees. She trembles uncontrollably, realizing the massive mistake she just made in front of a deadly guest. George slowly turns his head, his terrifying gaze shifting from the prince to the kneeling maid. He coldly remarks on how disrespectful it is to ruin the kingdom's symbol. Aina cowers on the floor, surrounded by the shattered glass and the ruined wine. The prince's eyes widen in horror as he realizes exactly what George is about to do. George casually grips the hilt of his massive sword. With a chilling calmness, he begins to draw the gleaming blade from its sheath. He completely ignores the crying maid, viewing her life as entirely worthless. Standing over the helpless girl, George declares that the only fitting punishment is death. The prince watches in absolute fury, realizing he must step in right now before his loyal maid is slaughtered. The grand ballroom was supposed to be a place of celebration, but a single misstep shattered the fragile peace. A terrified maid named Aina trembled on the floor, her life hanging by a thread over a simple mistake. The arrogant prince of the empire didn't hesitate, declaring that a swift beheading would be the only acceptable punishment. Aina froze in absolute horror, realizing her death was only seconds away. But before the cruel blade could fall, a furious glare cut through the tension. Heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor, forcing the execution to a sudden halt. The king of Brioel stepped forward, his booming voice demanding to know if the empire had come just to spill blood on his lands. The imperial prince narrowed his eyes, his condescending smile momentarily vanishing. He offered a shallow apology, claiming he only acted to protect the honor of both nations. Reluctantly, he lowered his weapon, though the malice in his posture never faded. The king wasn't foolish enough to buy the excuse, reminding the prince of the fragile respect that held their nations together. The air grew suffocating as the king brought up a dark chapter from the past. He demanded to know if the prince remembered Getensha, a name that carried a heavy history of spilled blood. An oppressive blood-red aura began to radiate from the king. He reminded the imperial royals of the time their own emperor slaughtered a Brial knight without facing any consequences. The suffocating pressure of a king's wrath threatened to tear the ballroom apart. Yet, the imperial prince simply smirked, thoroughly enjoying the political tightrope he was forcing them to walk. Deep in the shadows, Yuri watched the disaster unfold, realizing that the kingdom's honor was being dragged through the mud. The king gritted his teeth, knowing that stopping the execution by force would be a direct declaration of war against the empire. The imperial prince reveled in his untouchable status, fully aware that Brial's hands were tied. Aina was left completely defenseless, a pawn about to be sacrificed for the sake of political necessity. But Yuri had seen enough innocent lives tossed aside for the sake of empty ideals. The weight of his past life clawed at his mind, reminding him of the suffocating grip of absolute power. A dangerous, fiery resolve ignited within his gaze. He refused to let history repeat itself right in front of his eyes. A surge of pure energy erupted around him, shattering the heavy silence. Breaking the strict royal protocol, Yuri emerged from the darkness. His eyes locked onto the imperial prince with absolute defiance. He stepped squarely between the executioner and the trembling maid, pulling the attention of the entire room. With steady, calculated steps, he walked right into the center of the deadly conflict. The king stared in shock as his youngest prince placed himself directly in the line of fire. Yuri formally addressed the imperial prince, demanding he take back the execution order. The nobles watched with bated breath, unable to believe a mere child was challenging the empire. The tension reached a boiling point. Without a hint of fear, Yuri proposed a completely different solution. To settle the matter of honor, he demanded a formal duel. The sheer audacity of the challenge echoed through the grand hall. Yuri bowed respectfully, but his tone left no room for negotiation. A moment of stunned silence passed before the imperial prince burst into a condescending laugh. He looked down at Yuri, amused by the fiery spirit of the young royal. With a sickeningly sweet smile, he asked for Yuri's name. Feigning respect, he declared that since the third prince had made such a bold offer, he would gladly accept it. Panicked whispers broke out among the guests, fully aware of the lethal consequences of this agreement. The king clenched his jaw, unable to overrule the accepted challenge without humiliating Brial further. The imperial prince smoothly sheathed his weapon, his sadistic plan already taking shape. The king exhaled a heavy sigh, the burden of the upcoming bloodshed weighing on his shoulders. To add insult to injury, the imperial prince stated he wouldn't even fight Yuri himself. Claiming it was for the sake of dignity, he rested his hand on his sword. Yuri accepted the terms without a flinch, silently playing right into the trap. The imperial prince promised to select the youngest of his royal guards, ensuring it would be a seemingly fair match. As the imperials retreated, Anna sobbed uncontrollably, clutching her chest in sheer terror. Yuri immediately dropped to his knees, checking on the traumatized maid. He gently patted her back, grounding her after her near-death experience. With a soft, reassuring grip, he helped her to her feet. He ordered the other servants to take Anna away and let her rest, promising he would handle the rest. Leaving the frantic whispers of the ballroom behind, Yuri strode out into the quiet corridors. He glanced over his shoulder, knowing the political storm had only just begun. Among the crowd, a young noble girl watched his departure in stunned silence. She was utterly mesmerized by the quiet strength of the third prince. Back at the banquet tables, the celebration was completely ruined, replaced by dread. Away from prying eyes, Yuri finally let his exhaustion show, sweat dotting his forehead. The adrenaline of the confrontation slowly faded as he navigated the empty halls. Elsewhere, the imperial prince casually sipped his wine, celebrating his guaranteed victory. Yuri continued through the moonlit corridors, his mind racing with strategies. He finally met up with Captain Saned, the one person he could truly trust. The older knight immediately scolded him, demanding to know what he was thinking, risking his life. Yuri simply smiled, admitting he couldn't just stand by and watch Aina die. They stood by the large windows, the cool night air doing little to calm the situation. Saned's stern expression softened, touched by the young prince's unwavering morality. He reached out, offering a comforting presence to the boy who had just challenged an empire. A gentle hand ruffled Yuri's hair, a rare moment of warmth amidst the chaos. Yuri looked up, surprised by the sudden show of affection. Saned admitted it had been a long time since he'd seen someone act with such genuine bravery. Pulling his hand back, the captain quickly shifted into a tactical mindset. He asked Yuri if he needed help, fully aware of the deadly opponent he was about to face. The Imperial Guard chosen for the duel was far more dangerous than he appeared. Saned warned that the prince's promise of a fair proxy was a blatant lie. The guard's lethal skills meant an accidental death in the arena was highly likely. Yuri kept his gaze lowered, already fully aware of the execution masquerading as a duel. Despite the grim reality, Saned couldn't help but smile at the boy's calm demeanor. The captain knew Yuri wasn't just throwing his life away recklessly. He offered a fist bump, proudly declaring his absolute trust in Yuri Bryal. Yuri promised he would handle the mess he started, refusing to back down. With the battle lines drawn, Yuri headed off to rest, leaving the political fallout to the adults. Saned watched his retreating back, feeling a surge of hope for the kingdom's future. In his past life, Yuri had never been able to see what kind of ruler Bryal truly needed. But now, armed with a second chance, his determination was unbreakable. The night passed, and a bright, unyielding sun rose over the kingdom. The day of the duel arrived, the clear skies a sharp contrast to the bloody event about to take place. In the center of the grand arena, the imperial proxy drew his massive blade, ready to kill. The stands were packed with anxious nobles, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The king sat rigidly beside the imperial prince, forced to watch the impending slaughter. Down in the arena, the opponent warmed up, his blade leaving sharp red trails in the air. Every practice swing was filled with lethal intent, proving he was no ordinary guard. He wore a cocky smirk, confident that crushing a child would take less than a minute. Up in the stands, the king anxiously asked Saned if Yuri would actually survive this. The captain didn't show a hint of fear, confidently noting that while the opponent was skilled, there was nothing to worry about. Down below, Yuri casually stretched his arms, completely unbothered by the deadly aura of his foe. Resting his sword over his shoulder with a confident smirk, the third prince was more than ready to show the empire what a true monster looked like. The title of Grand Wizard is considered nothing but a myth to most. It is a supreme rank granted only to those standing at the absolute pinnacle of the magic tower. To achieve it, one must master origin magic, a divine power capable of peeking into the very fate of the world. Throughout all of history, countless mages have driven themselves mad trying to grasp it. But only Hernando has ever reached that divine level, yet right now the greatest mage in the world is losing his mind over a simple game of cards. He watches in disbelief as the young prince confidently cleans him out of every last coin. At first, Hernando wonders if it's just a bizarre stroke of bad luck, but he quickly realizes the horrifying truth. Despite his absolute ability to read the flow of fortune, he cannot see a single trace of destiny surrounding this arrogant boy. Looking at the third prince, Hernando is suddenly struck by a brutal vision of the future. He sees a boy bearing the royal symbols of Briol, fighting a hopeless battle with a completely shattered body. The tragic vision ends in absolute despair, with the boy collapsing after swinging his sword to his final breath. But the reality sitting in front of him has completely shattered that timeline. Hernando realizes the boy is actively manipulating the threads of fate itself. Every erratic, unpredictable action the prince has taken since his awakening wasn't madness. It was a deliberate defiance of the heavens. The Grand Wizard finally understands that Prince Yuri is an anomaly, a being bound by no destiny at all. And today, that anomaly is stepping into the arena to prove it to the entire kingdom. The trial by combat is set, the tension in the royal courtyard thick enough to cut with a blade. Standing across from his seasoned opponent, Yuri remains completely relaxed. From the grandstands, the first prince scoffs, mocking Yuri for delaying his inevitable humiliation. But Yuri simply smiles, utterly unfazed by the taunts. His opponent tightens his grip, ready to strike down the kingdom's greatest disappointment. From his high throne, the king raises his hand to silence the whispering crowd. With a booming voice, he officially commences the trial. Instantly, the knight explodes forward, closing the distance in a heartbeat. His eyes lock onto the young prince, overflowing with intense killing intent. He brings his heavy blade down in a vicious, crushing arc. Instead of being crushed, Yuri effortlessly parries the lethal blow. The deafening sound of grinding steel rings out across the silent courtyard. The two warriors immediately lock into a blindingly fast exchange of strikes. Fierce crimson sparks violently erupt with every single collision. To everyone's absolute shock, it's the seasoned knight who is forced onto his back foot. Yuri seamlessly transitions from defense to a fierce aggressive lunge. The knight barely raises his guard in time to block the incoming thrust. Up in the VIP stands, the first prince's smug grin completely vanishes. Hernando simply watches the spectacle with calm, calculating eyes. The king leans forward, quietly asking the Grand Wizard who he thinks will survive this clash. Hernando's golden eyes flawlessly track every single movement below. Desperate to regain control, the knight unleashes a terrifying blood-red slash aimed right at Yuri's chest. But the young prince dances around the deadly aura with impossible grace. He counters immediately, his blade carving right through the knight's heavy defenses. Bleeding and furious, the knight swings back with a reckless heavy counterattack. A faint, knowing smile creeps across Hernando's face. He turns to the king, answering that the outcome has already been decided. The king reminds Hernando of his original prophecy, that he was guided to this kingdom by the heavens themselves. The surrounding nobles listen in tight-lipped silence, sweating as they witness the intense battle. Hernando admits he actually thought his purpose here was already finished. The king shoots him a sharp, questioning glare. The Grand Wizard continues explaining his heavenly revelation. Down below, the knight draws out every ounce of his aura, desperate to completely crush the boy. He unleashes a devastating wide wave of crimson energy. But Yuri's eyes only burn brighter, relentlessly locked onto his prey. The king watches the ferocious assault, waiting for the boy to finally break under the pressure. Hernando admits that when he first arrived in Betrayal, he was purely following the signs given to him by the heavens. The stars had promised him that the one capable of shifting the world's fate was standing in this very kingdom. He truly believed he had come to witness the birth of the continent's absolute strongest warrior. But until recently, that fated hero had never even drawn his sword. Hernando confesses that he was ready to pack up and leave this kingdom entirely behind. A massive shockwave violently rocks the arena floor. The knight delivers a bone-shattering downward strike. Yuri is sent skidding backward, his armor battered and bruised from the heavy impact. His boots violently scrape against the stone tiles as he fights to stabilize his momentum. But as the dust clears, a wicked, thrilling smirk spreads across his face. A blinding blue aura suddenly ignites from the hilt of his weapon. Deciding he's tested the waters enough, Yuri tightens his grip for the finale. His blade completely erupts into a roaring pillar of azure light. With explosive speed, Yuri launches himself high into the air. The knight looks up in pure terror, unable to comprehend the boy's sudden, terrifying burst of power. Yuri descends like a falling star, trailing brilliant, crackling blue lightning. The knight desperately raises his sword, pouring all his remaining energy into a final block. But the sheer, overwhelming weight of Yuri's aura begins to crush him instantly. The man's eyes tremble violently as the realization of his own weakness sets in. In that split second, he knows with absolute certainty that he is going to die. A catastrophic explosion of blue energy completely consumes the arena floor. The first prince and the nobles leap out of their seats, gasping in absolute shock. Even the stoic king is left utterly paralyzed by the overwhelming display of raw power. The royal guards stare wide-eyed, completely forgetting how to breathe. But Hernando just smiles softly, his prophecy finally making perfect sense. As the blinding light fades, Yuri stands victorious, the tip of his sword resting gently at the defeated knight's throat. Trembling on the ground, the broken man weakly stammers out his absolute surrender. The deafening silence is shattered by the official declaration of Yuri's victory. The entire arena instantly erupts into a roaring, uncontrollable frenzy of cheers. Hernando watches the celebration, realizing his heavenly signs were completely wrong. He came chasing a predestined fate dictated by the stars, but instead he found a monster who effortlessly defies it. The third prince had taken a destiny of absolute death and violently twisted it into a triumphant life. Wiping a streak of dirt from his cheek, Yuri soaks in the roaring applause, a true anomaly who transcends destiny itself. Hernando can't help but laugh in pure amazement at the boy's incredible feat. He claps along with the ecstatic crowd, his heart pounding with excitement for the future. Because he knows this is only the beginning, this young prince is going to completely rewrite the fate of the entire world. To follow fate is to accept the world's natural order. A cycle where life turns into death only to bloom once again. But there is one person who completely shattered this ordained destiny. With a single swing of his sword, he rewrote the tragic end meant for him and his loyal attendant, Yuri Brial, the man who stands completely apart from the fate of the world. the transcender of destiny itself. And now, the heavens can only watch in absolute anticipation to see how he reshapes the future. 5 peaceful years pass in the blink of an eye. Deep within the royal palace, hurried footsteps echo down the grand halls. A completely panicked new maid realizes she has wandered into the wrong section of the castle. Terrified of being caught, her heart pounds heavily in her chest. But her worst nightmare comes true when a commanding figure blocks her path. The unmistakable black hair, the absolute symbol of Brial's royalty. Cold sweat drips down her face as she remembers the strict warnings from the senior staff. She desperately tries to calm her shaking hands, reciting the royal etiquette manual in her head. But the man towering over her exudes nothing but sheer malice. With sinister eyes and crooked steps, he glares down at the trembling girl. She realizes instantly that this isn't the gentle crown prince they told her about. He violently demands to know why she's avoiding his gaze. As her terrified silence drags on, his irritation rapidly boils over. Annoyed by her fear, he angrily declares he's going to teach her a painful lesson in manners. The poor maid freezes, completely helpless before the tyrannical royal. But before he can strike, calm footsteps echo through the tense hallway. A gleaming sword rests confidently at the newcomer's hip. Yuri strolls in casually, asking if his older brother is busy harassing the servants again. His relaxed posture completely shifts the heavy atmosphere in the room. Taking a casual bite of a sweet cookie, he doesn't seem intimidated in the slightest. He confidently strolls through the sunlit corridor, completely unbothered by his brother's dark glare. The heavy tension in the air instantly dissolves into nothingness. Yuri simply smiles, enjoying the delicious treat the grateful maid had given him. While the arrogant royal fumes in utter embarrassment, the distraction works perfectly. The young maid uses the chance to completely vanish from the hallway. Leaving the two brothers alone in the quiet, echoing corridor, Yuri wipes the crumbs from his mouth, his mind shifting to more important matters. He dusts off his hands, feeling a strange, powerful sensation coursing through his veins. He looks down, analyzing the subtle flow of magical energy within his body. A glowing aura wraps around his skin as he finally reaches the legendary unarmed realm. A state of absolute mastery where the heavy pressure of a sword is entirely negated by pure mana. But his thoughts quickly darken as a painful memory flashes through his mind. 5 years have passed since his tragic regression, since Laurent's blade mercilessly pierced his heart. He remembers waking up in a cold sweat, reborn into the past with a second chance at life. A heavy darkness lingers in his soul from that horrific day. Tightening his leather gloves, he knows he can't afford to waste any more time. Under the bright, peaceful sky, a deadly storm is quietly brewing. He gazes out at the magnificent palace, realizing his quiet days are officially over. Reaching the grand doors of the royal conference room, he gives a polite knock. But the chaotic shouting from inside completely drowns out his presence. Realizing they are ignoring him, Yuri's fist tightly clenches, surging with an intense blue mana. With a devastating strike, he completely blasts the heavy doors off their hinges. Wood and debris explode into the room, instantly silencing the entire council. The noblemen flinch in absolute terror as the dust begins to settle. Yuri casually steps through the ruined entrance, brushing off the destruction like it was nothing. Sitting at the head of the table, his father, the king, glares at the unexpected intrusion. The ruined door is completely ignored as the heavy political debate resumes. A blonde noble stubbornly insists they cannot spare a single soldier to help the allied forces. The room erupts into a furious argument over resources and borders. Fists slam against the table as the nobles violently clash over their own selfish interests. Everyone in the room is completely blinded by their own potential gains and losses. Yuri stares down at the official imperial request resting on the grand table. The Empire has officially called upon every nation to join a massive raid against the orcs. Their plan is to launch a massive combined strike force straight toward the dangerous eastern borders. But Yuri already knows exactly how this bloody campaign ends. In his previous life, this exact mission turned into a catastrophic massacre. He grips the parchment tightly, remembering the horrifying truth behind the raid. Outstanding knights, men of true honor and unmatched skill, were sent to the slaughter. Men like the legendary Lien Flandre, whose life was needlessly thrown away. Yuri's eyes narrow with fierce determination, refusing to let history repeat itself. The devastating loss of those knights had weakened their nation beyond repair. Without a second of hesitation, Yuri forcefully declares that he will personally join the allied forces. The entire room gasps in absolute shock, unable to believe a royal prince would volunteer for a death sentence. He stands tall, silencing the cowardly nobles with his unwavering resolve. He demands that the kingdom show its sincerity and fulfill its true noble duty. A slow, knowing smirk spreads across the king's battle-hardened face. The imposing ruler leans forward, genuinely impressed by his son's absolute fearlessness. He officially accepts Yuri's bold move, sealing his dangerous fate. Later that day, Yuri steps into the sunlit courtyard, fully prepared to depart. His sword securely fastened, he walks with the confidence of a man ready for war. But his obnoxious older brother suddenly intercepts him, dripping with fake concern. He mockingly praises Yuri's bravery, dramatically promising to safely guard the palace in his absence. Yuri just smiles, completely unfazed by the pathetic attempt at intimidation. The arrogant prince laughs, reveling in the fact that Yuri is walking straight into a meat grinder. He mockingly places a hand over his heart, acting like a deeply concerned sibling, before sprinting away like an absolute coward, relieved to be rid of his rival. Leon Flandre approaches Yuri, watching the pathetic display with a heavy sigh. The seasoned knight stands shoulder to shoulder with the young prince. His tone drops, warning Yuri that the orcs are far more despicable than anyone realizes. His sharp eyes narrow, stressing the absolute importance of extreme caution. Yuri listens closely, fully aware of the horrifying monsters waiting for him in the east. Lian warns him of a specific, nightmarish breed of orc that haunts the battlefield. Monsters who carry a blood-soaked flag proudly on their backs. The legendary orcavals, towering creatures of pure, unadulterated slaughter. Just the mention of their name sends a chilling tension through the air. Lian asks if the young prince actually has a plan to survive this suicidal mission. Yuri doesn't flinch, his eyes burning with an unshakable quiet confidence. Suddenly, a completely exhausted maid bursts into the courtyard, gasping for air. Lian turns in surprise as the girl struggles to catch her breath. Under the radiant, hopeful sky, she announces that Yuri's special delivery has finally arrived. A wicked, knowing grin spreads across Yuri's face as the true game finally begins. The quiet morning inside the grand estate was suddenly interrupted by urgent news. A loyal aide approached the young royal, announcing that a highly anticipated guest had finally arrived. A confident, knowing smile crept across his face, as this meeting was the first step in a very special plan. Down in the luxurious parlor, an elegant gentleman quietly sipped his tea, patiently waiting to be received. The lavish room felt perfectly still, bathed in sunlight, entirely unaware of the powerful forces about to meet. The heavy doors swung open, instantly breaking the silence. Guillermo, the vice president of the renowned Elaine Merchant Guild, greeted the royal with a warm, polite smile. Taking a seat, he explained that he was serving as a substitute for the guildmaster, who was currently traveling on business. The prince couldn't help but picture the fiercely independent Elaine out on the dangerous open road. Even with her vast wealth and power, she always preferred the absolute thrill of handling critical matters herself. Getting straight to business, Guillermo carefully placed a heavy, ornate wooden box onto the table. As he opened the lid, the merchant proudly announced that he had successfully secured the requested item. Inside lay the Elementarian, a set of beautiful ancient daggers that practically hummed with latent magic. Without a second of hesitation, the young royal raised his hand toward the legendary artifacts. To Guillermo's absolute shock, a brilliant blue aura flared to life, effortlessly lifting the heavy blade straight into the air. The merchant's jaw nearly hit the floor, unable to believe a mere weapon was moving completely on its own. Sweat formed on his brow as he witnessed raw, untamed mana bending so casually to the prince's will. The royal toyed with the floating blade, sharply asking if they really thought he spent his days doing absolutely nothing. A piercing, calculating gleam flashed in his eye, silently establishing his absolute dominance in the room. With the terrifying demonstration over, he calmly ordered the nervous merchant to report back on their guild expansion. Knowing exactly when to take his leave, Guillermo hastily stood up from the comfortable couch. He offered a deep, respectful bow before quickly exiting the grand parlor, leaving the royal alone. But the moment the door clicked shut, the shadows on the floor began to unnaturally twist and writhe. A deadly assassin named Asana seamlessly rose from the darkness, awaiting her master's next command. Relaxing back into his seat, he didn't even flinch at her sudden ghost-like appearance. He casually asked for an update on Goryo, a foolish noble who had been greedily targeting the guild's funds. Asana confidently confirmed that she had delivered a very clear, very terrifying warning to the greedy lord. In the dead of night, she had left a blood-stained dagger buried right next to the terrified noble's head while he slept. Pleased with her ruthless efficiency, the prince praised her flawless execution. She stood silently behind his couch, a loyal shadow ready to eliminate any obstacle in his path, but beneath her cold exterior, genuine concern bled into her voice as she warned him about joining the Union army. She looked away, hesitant, unsure of why he was willingly walking into a brutal bloodbath. Basking in the warm sunlight, he simply smiled and told her she was coming with him to the front lines. A rare look of absolute surprise crossed the seasoned killer's face at the unexpected invitation. Realizing that fighting by his side was far better than returning to the darkness, she immediately accepted. With a final nod, her form dissolved back into the shadows, leaving the room perfectly empty once more. Days quickly passed, and the morning of the grand deployment finally arrived. Standing tall in gleaming silver armor, the prince prepared to march toward the brutal war zone. His loyal retainer fussed over him, barely able to hide his overwhelming anxiety and fear. The royal offered a bright, reassuring grin, confidently declaring that he was completely invincible. He playfully reminded the young scholar to take breaks and rest his eyes while studying behind the thick castle walls. Pulling his anxious friend into a tight, brotherly embrace, he promised to return safely from the slaughter. It was a gentle, quiet moment of humanity before stepping into the unforgiving jaws of war. Suddenly, a deep, echoing horn shattered the peace, signaling the official start of the ceremony. The imposing commander stood at the grand podium, his booming voice demanding absolute silence. With heavy, deliberate steps, the young royal ascended the red-carpeted stairs. He stood face to face with the towering veteran, feeling the crushing weight of the moment settle over him. The commander leaned in, asking the young man if the sheer scale of the deadly conflict terrified him. Instead of mocking him, the older knight instructed him to look out at the massive sea of soldiers. Below them stood thousands of heavily armored men, completely ready to lay down their lives. He stared out over the vast courtyard, taking in the countless banners fluttering wildly in the wind. The grim reality of leadership settled over him like a suffocating heavy blanket. He knew better than anyone that many of these brave souls would never see their families again. But clenching his jaw, he swore to himself that he wouldn't let them face a pitiful death like in his past life. Suddenly, a terrifying chill ran down his spine, freezing the blood in his veins. A suffocating, overwhelming wave of pure murderous intent erupted directly in front of him. A shadow-drenched figure lunged from the void, aiming a lethal lightning-fast strike right at his throat. His survival instincts screamed at him to dodge, but his body suddenly felt impossibly heavy. He realized with absolute horror that his muscles refused to move a single inch. The lethal blade was mere centimeters away, promising nothing but instant death. The dark figure's monstrous aura threatened to swallow him entirely. His mind raced, calculating that trying to evade would only guarantee a brutal execution. If he couldn't run, his only option was to meet the devastating force head-on. In a split second, brilliant blue mana exploded from his core, brightly illuminating the entire podium. He ripped his sword from its scabbard, pouring every ounce of his dormant power into the heavy steel. His eyes burned with fierce determination, absolutely refusing to die before his new journey had even begun. The dense, raging aura wrapped around his blade, turning it into a blinding beacon of pure energy. The two weapons collided with an earth-shattering shockwave that violently rattled the air itself. As the dark smoke cleared, the prince realized he was locking blades directly with the commander. The older knight held his heavy sword steady, a wild, testing glint shining in his eye. A booming laugh erupted from the veteran's chest as he praised the young royal's flawless reflexes. The prince stood frozen, his heart still hammering against his ribs from the sudden ambush. Lowering his glowing sword, he finally exhaled, realizing this lethal strike was nothing but a brutal final test. The commander turned his back, replacing a formal farewell with a gruff, sincere order to survive the coming slaughter. A wave of genuine relief and newfound absolute confidence washed over the young warrior's face. Stepping to the edge of the podium, he thrust his gleaming sword high into the clear blue sky. The response was utterly deafening as thousands of soldiers erupted into a frenzied, roaring cheer. They chanted his name with fanatical devotion, their spirits entirely ignited by his incredible display of power. The unified roar of the massive army violently shook the very foundations of the castle walls. Smiling down at his loyal troops, he knew he was finally ready to rewrite history in blood. With the blood-red banners flying high, the thunderous command to march echoed across the stronghold. The army surged forward, ready to drown their enemies in an unstoppable tide of steel. But far away, deep within a damp, lightless dungeon, a completely different battle was brewing. A massive, grotesque hand clamped onto thick iron bars, bending the heavy metal with terrifying ease. A nightmarish beast snarled in the darkness, its glowing red eyes thirsting for absolute carnage. Watching from the shadows, a battle-scarred man smirked, eagerly waiting to finally reunite with the third prince on the battlefield. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in deep, ominous shades of red, the journey continues through the dense, unforgiving woods. The long travel has taken its toll, and the exhaustion in their eyes is clear, though they push forward toward their distant goal. Stopping to rest for only a moment, the weary travelers find a brief reprieve beneath the canopy, sharing supplies as they wait for the light to fade. Raymond, caught in the quiet intensity of the moment, stares ahead, his thoughts clearly preoccupied with the heavy path that lies before them. The map is laid out, its worn edges tracing a route that seems both daunting and inevitable as they question how much longer this march must continue. Their destination of Sidor hangs over them like a promise, a place they intend to reach before pushing even further toward the borders of Balshad. The intricate lines on the map dictate their fate, marking every dangerous step they are destined to take in this treacherous territory. As the plan is laid bare, the weight of their mission settles in. leaving little room for doubt as they prepare for what awaits them in the days to come. The commander, known as the Knight of Brial Raymond, stands firm, his resolve unshaken despite the mounting pressures of their long and arduous trek. With the path ahead confirmed, the pace is set. They know they must keep moving if they hope to arrive at their destination on time. There is a flicker of uncertainty as they confirm their speed, a final check before they commit fully to the relentless journey that demands everything from them. The shadows grow long, and as they prepare to move out, the weight of their previous lives and past mistakes feels heavier than ever. Haunted by the memory of his own death, his gaze narrows, identifying the very man responsible for ending his past life, Laurent Flandre. He stands in the presence of his killer, a man who unknowingly beams at him, completely oblivious to the vengeance simmering just beneath the surface. The past is a phantom that refuses to stay buried, and the confrontation, however disguised by civility, is finally here. Count Flandre's eldest son, Laurent, approaches with an air of misplaced admiration, a stark contrast to the dark reality of what he once did. He kneels, offering a gesture of profound respect that feels like a slap in the face to a man who remembers how this person destroyed him. Everything that has transpired, all the suffering and the struggle, leads back to the single treacherous individual. It is difficult to maintain composure when face to face with the one who took everything away, yet the facade must hold. The realization of the past sinks deeper, a chilling reminder of the cold brutality that Laurent Flandre is truly capable of. Laurent pours out his heart, speaking of his long-held admiration, unaware that his words are carving wounds into the man he intends to honor. He speaks of a story from 5 years ago, unaware that for his listener, that story is a haunting, personal nightmare he can never escape. Laurent's adoration is relentless, painting the prince as an unreachable idol, completely ignorant of the man standing right in front of him. The prince is forced to listen, his expression tight as he navigates the suffocating pretense of this twisted reunion. The memory of that day the prince standing his ground is retold with such misplaced reverence that it feels like an insult. Laurent waxes poetic about the code of a knight, a concept he clearly doesn't understand in the slightest, despite his flowery language. He continues his fervent praise, completely lost in his own delusions, while the object of his obsession can barely hide his disgust. The sheer irony of the moment is overwhelming. The man who deserves death is instead treated to a display of genuine, heartfelt loyalty. Even through the awkward, shining display of affection, there is a clear, underlying tension that threatens to snap at any moment. The horses stir, restless and anxious, as if they too can sense the brewing storm that is about to erupt from this interaction. The interaction finally concludes, leaving a lingering bitter taste in the air, a precursor to the darkness that will soon unfold. A deep, brooding silence descends, the kind that follows a moment of forced peace, signaling that a much grimmer reality is on the horizon. The night sky stretches out, vast and indifferent, watching over the castle as the party finally reaches the doorstep of the Margrave. A banner unfurls in the dark, marking their arrival, but there is no warmth in the greeting that awaits them within these walls. The air grows heavy and ominous, the atmosphere shifting into something colder and more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. The arrival is met with rigid discipline, a line of soldiers standing perfectly still, watching the newcomers with unblinking eyes. The prince, mounted and ready, stares ahead as he is received with a cold, formal welcome that is anything but inviting. Sidor Margrave, Jaime Sidor, watches them with a calculated gaze, his presence commanding and deeply intimidating. The exchange of pleasantries is hollow, a thin veil over the true intentions lurking behind the Margrave's stoic face. The prince acknowledges the greeting, but his eyes remain sharp, searching for whatever secrets this man is hiding in his stronghold. The questioning begins, probing for weaknesses or hidden knowledge, as the tension between the two leaders slowly begins to ratchet up. He keeps his composure, refusing to give anything away, while the Margrave continues his line of inquiry with unnerving focus. The conversation turns to the harsh realities of their impending war, and the talk of battle strategies makes the air feel heavy with death. He is asked about his experience with the enemy, a test of his resolve that he meets with the calm determination of a veteran. The reply is measured and humble, claiming he has studied, knowing that admitting to his lack of true field experience is a dangerous gamble. He admits that his men are equally green, a confession that could either buy him respect or make him a target in this dangerous game. The Margrave's expression doesn't change, but his eyes suggest he is already judging the prince's fitness for the coming slaughter. The conversation shifts again, and the Margrave offers a gift, a gesture that feels far more like a threat than an act of kindness. The invitation is extended to enter deeper into the bowels of the fortress, where the light of the torches struggles to penetrate the gloom. The prince is led further into the shadows, his senses heightened as he begins to realize that this gift is something truly disturbing. The Margrave gestures with a chilling calmness, his confidence suggesting that he is perfectly comfortable with the horrors contained within these walls. The massive, iron-reinforced doors begin to groan open, revealing a path that leads down into the heart of the dungeon. The sound of heavy locks being manipulated echoes through the narrow corridor, a final, ominous warning of what lies behind the threshold. The torchlight flickers, casting long, dancing shadows that seem to stretch and reach out as they step into the darkness of the cell block. They walk in a tight formation, their armor clanking in the oppressive silence, each of them bracing for whatever nightmare the Margrave has prepared. The heavy door swings wide, the metal shrieking in protest as it reveals the darkness that has been waiting for them all along. The Margrave stops, his face illuminated by the flickering torchlight, a twisted, knowing smirk playing on his lips as he prepares to show them the truth. The prince remains alert, his hand instinctively hovering near his blade as he demands an explanation for this bizarre and unsettling display. The Margrave speaks with a disturbing lack of concern, his words aimed at dismissing the prince's growing unease. The darkness ahead is profound, hiding things that should have remained unseen, and the air is thick with the scent of stagnant misery. The realization hits with the force of a physical blow. The prisoner held in the shadows is not human. The creature within the cage stirs, its massive form shifting in the dark, a silent threat that feels almost tangible. The Margrave dismisses their shock, calmly referring to the beast as a captive, as if it were nothing more than a common prisoner of war. He justifies the cruelty, explaining their need to study the enemy's darkest instincts and habits to ensure their own survival. The explanation is chilling in its pragmatism, a cold-blooded look at how far one must go to win a war that knows no mercy. The prince is horrified, yet he listens, realizing that this man views torture as nothing more than a necessary laboratory experiment. He questions the necessity of such depravity, trying to understand how a man could justify such blatant, unnecessary cruelty. The Margrave's defense is absolute, his conviction that this knowledge is a gift leaving no room for moral debate or hesitation. The prince looks at the suffering creature, his internal assessment of the Margrave plummeting to an all-time low. The absolute insanity of the situation is clear. The Margrave is even more unhinged and dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The interrogation begins, and the Margrave demands the identity of the next victim in this macabre private theater of war. The soldier identifies himself, his voice trembling as he realizes he is merely another pawn in the Margrave's twisted game. The terror is palpable, a desperate, choking fear as the realization of what is expected of him begins to set in. The prince watches, his jaw set in a hard line, knowing that he is powerless to stop the madness unfolding before his eyes. The Margrave orders the cage to be opened, his voice cold and devoid of anything resembling empathy for the lives he is about to throw away. The soldier bows his head in compliance, his resignation a tragic testament to the absolute power the Margrave holds over his men. The prince is forced to watch, the weight of the moral compromise burning in his chest. As the game of life and death is set into motion, the creature explodes from the darkness, a primal rage-filled force that makes the very ground beneath them shudder. The soldier stands before the beast, his sword drawn, a small, fragile figure against the monstrous nightmare bearing down upon him. The orc roars a terrifying sound that echoes through the dungeon, shattering the silence and signaling the start of the slaughter. The impact is devastating, the force of the creature's rage leaving the soldier reeling as the reality of combat sets in with brutal speed. It is an impossible fight, a desperate struggle against a monster that knows only pain, fury, and the urge to kill. The soldier stumbles, his spirit breaking as he realizes the sheer, overwhelming power of the adversary he has been forced to face. He screams in defiance and despair, a futile cry as the beast closes in, ready to tear everything apart in a frenzy of blood and violence. The violence is swift and merciless, the soldier barely managing to defend himself before being overwhelmed by the sheer size of the creature. The final chilling revelation is that the beast has been crippled, its tendons sliced to ensure it can be butchered in a controlled, systematic slaughter. The tension is thick enough to cut with a blade as the group confronts the brutal reality of their situation. They realize quickly that these creatures don't play by the rules of honor, and giving them an inch is a deadly mistake. Panic sets in among the ranks, a knight's life hangs in the balance, his tendons at the mercy of a savage captor. The enemy is mocking them, clearly relishing the chaos and fear they've managed to sow. It's a heart-pounding standoff, and every second spent in hesitation brings the night closer to a gruesome end. A mysterious figure emerges, their voice cutting through the noise with a chilling warning: if the weapons aren't dropped, the bones will be broken one by one. The shadows seem to hide more than just enemies, and a name Corey is whispered into the dark. There's a sense of dread as the unknown individual steps forward, already anticipating the gravity of what is about to be revealed. The air feels heavy, and the weight of the upcoming ultimatum presses down on everyone present. With cold finality, the captor makes their demands clear, leaving the knights with an impossible choice. The orc holds the knight in a suffocating grip, the threat of violence practically radiating from them. But then, an opportunity flickers into existence, the chance to turn the tables. If only they are fast enough. Energy crackles through the air as the protagonist prepares to strike, his focus narrowing down to a single, precise moment. It happens in a heartbeat, a blur of motion that defies the orc's expectations. The strike lands, and the sickening sound of impact echoes through the room, signaling the turn of the tide. The rhythm of the fight is frantic, but he knows exactly when to commit. He lunges forward, determined to end this display of brutality right here and now. The force of the attack is overwhelming, catching the orc completely off guard. Gravity and momentum collide as the orc is pinned, the tide of the skirmish shifting in an instant. The knight is finally freed from that crushing hold, though the shock of the event still lingers in the air. Even in the aftermath, the tension hasn't dissipated. The room is still echoing with the remnants of the struggle. The beast lets out a primal, guttural roar that seems to shake the very foundation of the dungeon. It's clear to everyone watching that this isn't just some random encounter. This creature is a seasoned killer. The history of this monster is written in blood, with a reputation for unspeakable acts that leaves the soldiers reeling. The brutality of the orc's past is laid bare, a stark reminder of the nightmare they are truly facing. Fury boils over in the eyes of the soldiers, a desperate, irrational need for vengeance clouding their judgment. The command to stay calm is ignored, the rage of the men drowning out all reason. But the seasoned commander remains steady, his eyes cold as he forces his men to look at the harsh truth. He points to the darkness, forcing them to acknowledge the deeper, more terrifying reality that hides just out of sight. The fields of war are crawling with even worse abominations, and this battle is merely a drop in the ocean of their suffering. The lesson is harsh, but necessary. Training isn't about pride, it's about survival. He reminds them that the path forward is paved with blood, and they have to be ready for what comes next. The fight resumes with a flash of cold steel, as the men realize their only hope lies in absolute discipline. They move in perfect unison, their strikes aimed with clinical, lethal efficiency. Flames erupt, dancing around the target, as the soldiers push their advantage. A defensive barrier blazes to life, shielding them from the counterattack in a display of raw power. Standing together, the men hold their ground, their resolve hardened by the lesson they were just taught. The maneuver is executed perfectly, a tactical masterclass delivered amidst the heat of battle. The final strike is delivered, and the threat is silenced as the blade finds its mark. The weapon tears through the air, claiming victory and silencing the savage roar. Blood stains the stone as the enemy collapses, the immediate danger finally passing. Exhaustion begins to set in, but there is no time to rest, when the true depth of the horror is yet to be seen. The clash ends with a final, decisive blow, the aftermath leaving a silence more haunting than the screams. He stands amidst the carnage, his breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to center himself. The burden of what they have to do weighs heavily on him, but he knows they cannot stop now. A dark crimson splatter marks the ground, a testament to the brutal reality of their training. The creature slumps, the life draining away as the realization of their victory sinks in. Victory doesn't bring peace, it only serves as a grim marker of the path they've chosen to walk. A small, weary smile forms a fleeting moment of humanity in a place where it usually dies. They look at one another, the weight of the experience unspoken but shared. The blood on the floor is a chilling reminder that mercy is a luxury they cannot afford. A hand rests on a weapon, the metal cold and biting, ready for the next command. They move forward as one, the path before them lined with the ghosts of the past. The commander leads the way, his gaze fixed on the horrors waiting in the deep. They arrive at the entrance of a dark, forgotten place, the air thick with the scent of decay. The command to keep moving is given, and they descend further into the abyss. The shadows pull back, revealing the twisted consequences of their enemy's cruelty. He can sense it, a dark, sickening presence that makes his skin crawl. The shock is visible on their faces, the reality of what they are seeing too much to process. The prisoners, broken and twisted, reach out from the darkness in a desperate, wordless plea. The commander watches, his expression unreadable, as the horror of the scene is fully realized. The disgust is overwhelming, a physical reaction to the depths of this atrocity. There is a silent, tragic understanding between them, a shared recognition of the scars these survivors carry. He stands in the silence, his heart hardening against the tragedy he is witnessing. The vow is made, cold and absolute. This hatred will burn until the day he dies. His shadow looms large, mirroring the darkness that has taken root in his own soul. He remains detached, a cold observer to the cruelty, having seen far worse in his time. The rain falls outside, washing over the world, but it cannot wash away the sins of the orcs. He stands alone, a silent guardian trapped in a cycle of endless conflict. The weight of his past presses down, an inescapable shadow that haunts every step he takes. Memories of a lost home and a fallen kingdom flash by, fueling the fire of his resolve. The castle stands tall against the horizon, a symbol of everything he has lost and everything he intends to reclaim. He turns his back on the darkness, looking toward a future that is still uncertain. The commander approaches him, a weary respect in his eyes for the journey ahead. They stand together in the courtyard, two warriors bound by duty and the weight of their respective burdens. A face-to-face meeting, the gravity of their alliance hanging in the quiet air. He offers a knowing look, understanding more than the other man realizes, a familiar gesture, a connection made through the silence. He claims knowledge of the secret burden, his voice calm and steady. The truth is laid out, and the confusion on the other's face begins to clear. He presents a token, a bridge between two worlds that have known nothing but war. Hesitation lingers, but the gift is accepted, a silent pledge of what is to come. A turn of the page, a new chapter begins for both of them in the light of the morning. They share a moment of quiet understanding, the beginning of a dangerous, necessary partnership. Confidence radiates from him, a man who knows exactly what price he must pay for victory. The journey out begins, the open road beckoning toward the next battlefield. It's the end of a chapter, but the war for their future has only just begun. A fierce wind blew across the marching army, their crimson banners fluttering high into the sky. The heavy thud of armored cavalry echoed through the forest as they advanced toward their next objective. The third prince glanced back at his men, fully aware of the unease spreading among the ranks. He casually dismissed the lingering concerns about leaving his newly acquired half-orc retainer behind. Confident in Hernando's ability to manage the situation, the prince decided it was time to focus on the immediate threat ahead. Pulling out a detailed map, he analyzed the rugged terrain of the borderlands. He turned to Jared, singling the young knight out for a crucial reconnaissance mission. Jared nervously pulled back on his reins, completely caught off guard by the sudden order. He couldn't believe he was being sent to scout out a notorious bandit camp with zero backup. Stuttering, Jared tried to argue that the mercenaries would simply scatter the moment they realized they were being tracked. But the prince merely smirked, his eyes filled with a predatory glint as he promised they would hunt every last one of them down. He challenged Jared's confidence, reminding him that the rest of the soldiers were far too terrified to take on such a dangerous task. Without waiting for further protests, the prince spurred his horse forward, leaving his men behind. As the prince rode ahead, Jared found himself riding alongside the seasoned veteran, Sir Raymond. The prince's unusual leadership style always kept his retainers on their toes, balancing dangerous demands with a strange, unspoken trust. Exhausted by the constant pressure, Jared let out a heavy sigh, wondering how much longer he could keep up this pace. Sir Raymond rode in silence for a moment, before turning his steady gaze toward the younger knight. The older man's voice cut through the ambient noise of the forest as he asked Jared a deeply personal question. What was he truly fighting for? Ahead of them, the prince's figure remained unbothered, leading the march with unwavering certainty. For a moment, the chaotic reality of their mission faded, leaving only the quiet determination of a leader who knew exactly what he wanted. Hearing Jared's earnest response, Raymond offered a faint approving smile, acknowledging the weight of his resolve. Having given the knights enough time to rest, the prince ordered them to maintain their speed, while he went ahead to check on the scouting progress. He kicked his horse into a full gallop, disappearing into the dense foliage. Deep in the wilderness, nestled between thick trees, a hidden encampment buzzed with activity. It was a fully established base, swarming with ruthless mercenaries who preyed on passing merchants. Suddenly, a startled gasp echoed from the perimeter as a scout was yanked violently into the bushes. Before he could even draw his weapon, the bandit found himself thrown to the dirt, tightly bound in thick ropes. A heavy armored boot slammed down next to his face, trapping him in place. Jared loomed over the struggling captive, coldly warning him to value his own life if he knew what was good for him. But it was the prince who stepped forward, unsheathing a glinting dagger and pressing it dangerously close to the man's throat. Lowering his binoculars, Jared confirmed the intel they had just brutally gathered. They had successfully located the main hub of the bandit operation. He pointed toward the hidden valley, mapping out the enemy's defensive lines. The prince praised Jared for his flawless tracking, his mind already formulating a deadly plan of attack. The captured bandit writhed on the ground, sweating profusely as the two knights interrogated him. The prince narrowed his eyes, finding it highly suspicious that a lone scout was patrolling such a vast area without a partner. Trembling, the bandit stammered out an excuse, claiming he was just a rookie who didn't know the proper protocol. He shrieked in absolute terror as the prince forcefully patted him down, holding up a glowing magical artifact. The prince's expression darkened as he demanded an explanation. Terrified for his life, the bandit confessed that his boss had forced him to carry the strange item during his patrol. The prince slowly drew his magnificent sword, the steel singing softly as it cleared the scabbard. Realizing the scout knew nothing of value, he decided there was only one way to get the answers he needed. With a cold smile, he declared his intention to rip the bandit boss from his stronghold and interrogate him personally. As the sun dipped below the jagged mountain peaks, casting a blood-red glow over the forest, the trap was officially set. Jared remained hidden in the underbrush, keeping a close eye on the enemy camp, while the rest of the forces maneuvered into position. Sir Raymond reported that their troops had successfully blocked off every single escape route. The prince's smile widened. The bandits were now cornered rats, trapped in their own maze. Not wanting to waste another second, he ordered an immediate assault, fully intending to claim the best loot for himself. Jared panicked, screaming at the prince that charging in alone was absolute madness. But the prince was already gone, forcing his frantic retainers to desperately spur their horses to catch up. Hooves tore through the dirt as the warhorse accelerated to a breakneck speed. The prince ducked under low-hanging branches, his eyes locked dead ahead on the unsuspecting camp. Without a hint of hesitation, he shattered the quiet night with a deafening roar to charge. The bandits at the edge of the camp froze, confused by the sudden commotion echoing from the dark woods. One of them barely had time to lower his meal before the earth began to tremble beneath his feet. Screams erupted as the tree line violently exploded outward. The prince burst into the clearing like a force of nature, his blade glowing with an overwhelming aura that sent men flying. Chaos instantly consumed the camp as tents were trampled, and the mercenaries scrambled in blind panic. The alarm was finally raised, but it was far too late to organize any meaningful defense. Cutting through the enemy ranks with effortless grace, the prince reveled in the adrenaline of the slaughter. By the time Jared finally broke through the trees, he was breathless, screaming for his liege. He and Raymond pulled their horses to a sudden halt, their eyes widening at the unbelievable scene before them. The entire camp had been decimated, bodies littered the ground, and in the center of the carnage sat the prince, calmly warming himself by a roaring fire. Frustrated and terrified, Jared scolded him for taking such a reckless, suicidal risk. Raymond could only sigh, silently agreeing with the younger knight's exasperation. Unfazed, the prince happily munched on a skewer of field-style roasted meat, thoroughly enjoying his post-battle meal. The fire crackled softly, cooking the remaining supplies he had looted from the bandits' stash. He offered a skewer to the stunned Jared, brushing off their complaints with a lighthearted joke about their sluggish speed. The captured bandit boss lay bound in the shadows, groaning in defeat as he watched his empire crumble over dinner. With the immediate threat handled, Raymond shifted the conversation back to their primary objective, the impending rendezvous at Gid. He recalled the sheer brutality of the skirmish, acknowledging the prince's terrifying combat prowess. Even the toughest mercenaries had been broken in mere seconds under the prince's relentless assault, but their next encounter wouldn't be against disorganized thugs. They were scheduled to overlap with the forces of the Holy Kingdom. The prince's interest was instantly piqued at the mention of the legendary nation of holy magic. Sir Raymond's expression grew grim as he detailed the political landmines they were about to step on. The commander of the allied forces was none other than the princess of the Holy Kingdom herself. Surrounded by elite holy knights, she commanded immense respect and fear on the battlefield. And entangled in a vicious power struggle for the throne, rumors warned that she was ruthlessly obsessed with securing results, no matter the cost. Hearing that the princess of the Holy Kingdom is nearby, Yuri contemplates his next move. His vassal suggests investigating her forces beforehand, but Yuri dismisses the idea entirely. He prefers a direct approach, deciding it's best to meet his new ally face-to-face. The allied forces have set up their temporary camp at Gid, a vital midpoint for their supply lines. Because Gid is an independent city, the military must strictly adhere to local laws, with any violations met with harsh punishment. Understanding the delicate politics, Yuri orders his commander to keep a tight leash on their soldiers. With the troops stationed safely outside the walls, discipline remains absolute. Inside the city, Yuri secures an audience with the local lord, receiving a warm and extravagant welcome. Yuri officially expresses his kingdom's deep gratitude for the city's crucial cooperation in the upcoming war. The lord humbly waves off the praise, promising to fully support the allied forces however he can. Suddenly, a servant leans in, whispering urgent news into the lord's ear. The lord announces that the princess of the Holy Kingdom has just arrived at the estate. He asks Yuri if he's willing to meet her immediately, and the prince casually agrees. Heavy, armored footsteps begin to echo through the grand halls. A pristine, imposing figure steps into the room, radiating unyielding authority. Clad in gleaming white armor, the second princess of the Holy Kingdom, Sibylla Arsaint, makes her grand entrance. She introduces herself with the utmost grace, acknowledging the honor of meeting in such a desolate land. However, her gaze shifts past the lord and lands squarely on Yuri, who is lounging casually on the sofa. Misjudging his plain, rugged clothes, she assumes he is merely one of the lord's lowly vassals. With a stern expression, she asks him to leave the room so the nobles can discuss important matters in private. Yuri stares back in silence, completely unbothered by her dismissive tone. The lord panics, trying to intervene before a diplomatic disaster unfolds, but one of Sibylla's hot-headed knights beats him to it, roaring in absolute outrage. The knight demands to know how a filthy commoner dares to remain seated before royalty. The other paladins flinch as the tension in the room skyrockets. The furious knight orders Yuri to stand up and show proper respect immediately. Sighing at the misunderstanding, Yuri casually drops the bomb that he is, in fact, the third prince of Brial. He smoothly adds that despite his shabby appearance, he is the supreme commander of his troops. The color instantly drains from the knight's face as the gravity of his massive mistake sets in. Humiliated and terrified, the paladins immediately bow their heads in a frantic, desperate apology. Yuri finds the situation amusing, taking a sip of his tea while sarcastically asking if his outfit really makes him look that pathetic. The flustered knights desperately try to backtrack, realizing they've just insulted allied royalty. Yuri leans forward, his playful demeanor throwing the rigid paladins completely off balance. Seeking to ease the tension, he formally introduces himself, extending an olive branch. Sibylla steps forward, offering a formal handshake to cement their newly formed alliance. Curious about his young appearance, Yuri casually asks the princess her age. She replies with total seriousness that she is only 18 years old. Yuri chuckles, playfully noting that she's a couple of years younger than his 20. The informal banter leaves the strict paladins utterly bewildered, but Sibylla remains composed, absorbing his relaxed demeanor without a single complaint. Yuri smiles, satisfied that they can build a solid foundation of trust before facing the brutal orc hordes. He then brings up a concerning tactical point, noting the strange absence of her main troops. Sibylla assures him that her main forces will arrive safely by tomorrow. Yuri's eyes narrow slightly, hoping that no unforeseen disasters strike before then. Sibylla bristles, defending the absolute discipline of her kingdom's military. She sharply asks if he is doubting their capability or predicting an internal conflict. Yuri quickly clarifies that his concern isn't about her men, but the external threat lurking beyond the walls. He warns her that the orcs in this region are notoriously cunning, known for launching devastating ambushes. Sibylla absorbs his warning, realizing the prince is far more perceptive than he looks. Later, Yuri hits the bustling city streets to investigate the local markets on his own. Walking through the crowds, Yuri's attendant asks for his honest impression of the famed paladins. Yuri bluntly states that they are far too rigid to adapt to real, chaotic warfare. He pities the young princess, knowing her strict knights will only make her survival harder. Looking for an edge in the coming battle, Yuri zeroes in on a specific merchant's stall. He asks his attendant to confirm that this is the exact shop the bandits mentioned during his previous interrogation. The attendant confirms that it is the only place dealing in rare, questionable artifacts. Yuri is searching for a mysterious red necklace rumored to drive orcs into a bloodthirsty frenzy. According to the intel, the artifact acts like a terrifying beacon, drawing enraged orcs directly to its wearer. It is essentially a highly dangerous, uncontrollable drug for war. But when they ask the merchant for it, he furiously kicks them out of his shop, screaming that he has nothing for them. Standing outside, Yuri's attendant notes that such a crude item probably wouldn't have worked anyway. He suggests that the bandits must have already bought the entire stock to use against them. Yuri smirks, realizing their little shopping trip has turned into a dead end. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, the strict paladins are conducting a rigid patrol. Vice Commander Fennec walks beside Princess Sibylla, reporting on the city's status. He casually brings up the rampant rumors surrounding Briol's supposedly incompetent prince. Fennec openly mocks Yuri, calling his reputation an absolute joke among true warriors. He scoffs at how the so-called prince dresses and acts more like a filthy mercenary than royalty. Fennec arrogantly predicts that Yuri won't even survive the upcoming orc raid. Sibylla's eyes flash with anger as she sternly commands her subordinate to watch his tongue. Fennec brushes off her warning, overly confident in his own superiority. He assures the princess that he has their own troops perfectly under control. With a smug smile, he leads his men deeper into the city to enforce their strict laws. As Fennec pushes open the doors to a noisy tavern, he is hit with the stench of cheap ale. Inside, he spots a group of soldiers loudly cheering over a card game. He quickly realizes they are soldiers from Briol, blatantly gambling in broad daylight. Disgusted by their lack of discipline, Fennec decides to take matters into his own hands. He angrily storms over to the table, ready to dish out a brutal punishment. He furiously demands to know if they think this holy war is some kind of joke. Grabbing one of the soldiers roughly by the shoulder, Fennec prepares to make a violent example out of him. But before Fennec can issue his punishment, a chillingly calm voice cuts through the tension from behind. Yuri steps into the light, his dark eyes locked dead onto the arrogant vice commander. With a dangerous smirk, Yuri demands to know exactly who Fennec thinks he is dealing with. The young prince doesn't let the blatant disrespect slide, immediately demanding the arrogant knight's name. He steps forward, his overwhelming presence alone shifting the atmosphere in the rowdy tavern. The arrogant soldier halts his card game, confused by the sudden confrontation. He and his squad of armor-clad lackeys turn around, completely missing the sheer danger standing right in front of them. With a cocky grin, the knight brushes off the warning, entirely too confident for his own good. But the prince's gaze hardens, his voice dropping an octave as he firmly repeats the question. He reminds the foolish soldier that his terrible attitude doesn't just ruin his own reputation, it puts the lives of every single soldier around him at severe risk on the battlefield. The prince's eyes glow with an intimidating intensity, demanding to know if military discipline means absolutely nothing here. He delivers a chilling reality check, reminding the man that a true warrior grips a sword, not a deck of playing cards. The knight flinches, a cold sweat breaking out as he finally realizes he might have crossed a line he can't uncross. Just as the tension reaches a breaking point, heavy footsteps echo near the entrance. A high-ranking female commander steps inside, her sharp eyes instantly assessing the chaotic situation. Without hesitation, she marches straight up to the unruly knight. She demands to know why he's slacking off when he was strictly ordered to be on patrol. The arrogant knight instantly bows his head in shame, stammering out a pathetic apology. Furious at the public display of incompetence, she orders him outside immediately. The disgraced soldiers shuffle out of the tavern, their tails tucked firmly between their legs. The commander then turns to the young prince, letting out a heavy sigh of sheer exhaustion. She offers a sincere apology on behalf of her foolish subordinate, desperately trying to mend the fractured alliance. The prince's loyal retainer steps up, whispering that the commander is currently losing a bitter power struggle back home. Because her position is so fragile, she is incredibly sensitive about maintaining her reputation. The prince smirks, finally understanding why the commander was so quick to shut down the insubordination. With the drama settled, he decides he's had enough of the tense atmosphere and heads for the exit. Leaving the noisy building behind, he steps out into the bustling evening streets. His retainer follows closely, relieved that a full-blown brawl was narrowly avoided. Meanwhile, the female commander watches them leave, visibly frustrated by her own men's embarrassing behavior. She clicks her tongue, fully aware of how close they just came to a diplomatic disaster. But before she can dwell on it, the sound of frantic galloping echoes through the town square. A heavily armored messenger desperately rides toward the command post, his horse foaming at the mouth from sheer exhaustion. The messenger hurls himself off the saddle, collapsing to his knees before he can even catch his breath. Seeing the blood and dirt smeared across his armor, the commander instantly knows something terrible has happened. She demands an immediate report, bracing herself for the worst possible outcome. The messenger delivers the horrifying news: the main force has been ambushed by a massive horde of orcs. The arrogant knight from earlier overhears the report, his face draining of all color in an instant. Panic violently grips the station troops as they realize the sheer scale of the disaster unfolding. The commander knows they have to act immediately, or the entire main force will be completely wiped out. Under the pale moonlight, she swiftly mounts her horse, ready to ride straight into the jaws of death. But standing in her way is a smug, overweight superior who clearly has no intention of risking his own neck. She begs him to request backup from the allied Briel forces to minimize their casualties. The arrogant superior stubbornly refuses, prioritizing his fragile pride over the lives of his men. He foolishly declares that the Holy Kingdom will handle its own mess without begging for outside help. The commander glares at him, absolutely disgusted by his bloated ego and cowardice. Realizing that reasoning with a fool is useless, she tightens her grip on the reins. She firmly commands her loyal troops to prepare for an immediate and deadly departure. With a fierce battle cry, she spurs her horse forward into the perilous night. Her dedicated squad follows right behind her, leaving the cowardly superior choking on their dust. The overweight commander scoffs at their bravery, convinced they are riding straight into a massacre. Meanwhile, back at the Briel camp, the prince's tent is illuminated by a flickering lantern. He carefully reads over a freshly delivered intelligence report, his eyes scanning the grim details. His retainer stands by, visibly disturbed by the bloody contents of the message. The prince lowers the paper, confirming that the Holy Kingdom's main force has walked right into a slaughter. Knowing the sheer stubbornness of the Holy Kingdom's leadership, he realizes they won't ask for help until it's entirely too late. But he isn't about to sit back and let allied soldiers die for nothing. His eyes sharpen with deadly determination as he decides to take matters into his own hands. He immediately orders Sir Raymond to prepare the troops for an emergency night march. Raymond bows respectfully, pledging to execute the command without a single moment of hesitation. The prince then turns his attention to a young, eager knight standing nervously nearby. He asks for the boy's name, preparing to hand him a crucial, time-sensitive task. The young knight, Roy, drops to one knee, deeply honored to be directly addressed by royalty. The prince orders Roy to sprint to the local tavern and gather the off-duty Briel knights. He tells Roy to announce that the prince is strictly accepting only the first 10 men to join the raid. It's a brilliant psychological trick. Knowing the knights' fierce competitive nature, they will rush to the front lines just to prove themselves. Roy eagerly nods, completely pumped up by the clever and daring strategy. Without wasting a second, the boy sprints into the darkness to deliver the urgent call to arms. Moments later, the prince steps out of his tent, fully armored and ready for bloodshed. He confidently pulls on his gloves, checking his combat gear one last time before the slaughter begins. The moon hangs high above as he leads his elite strike force out of the safe zone. With a fearless smirk, he jokes to his men that it's a beautiful night for a stroll. His troops rally behind him, their anxiety instantly replaced by their commander's overwhelming confidence. Riding alongside the prince, Laurent's eyes absolutely sparkle with deep admiration. He praises the prince for his boundless mercy, amazed that he forgave the disrespectful paladins earlier in the tavern. He firmly believes the prince spared those men solely so they could fight and survive another day. The prince nervously chuckles, realizing Laurent is giving him way too much credit for a simple scolding. He thinks to himself that Laurent's bright personality is completely different from the grim man he knew in his past life. Then again, the prince admits that his own regression has altered the fate of everyone around him. Suddenly, a loud, violent clash of steel echoes from just over the ridge. The prince's expression instantly turns serious as they close in on the chaotic battlefield. Through the thick darkness, they spot the desperate paladins fighting a brutally losing battle against the massive orc horde. Knowing this is his men's first real monster subjugation, the prince turns to deliver a final command. His horse rears up, radiating a terrifying, crackling blue aura that completely lights up the pitch-black night. With unwavering authority, he vows to be the first to strike and the last to retreat, commanding his soldiers to charge straight into the massacre. Under the dead of night, the battlefield lay deceptively still. Before the commander of the Holy Kingdom's paladins, peace was nothing but a fragile illusion. The third prince's warning echoed in her mind. He had told her orcs could easily breach the boundaries. He had known exactly what was coming. She gritted her teeth, cursing her own foolishness for not listening sooner. Because of her mistake, her main force had walked straight into a brutal ambush. Massive, bloodthirsty orcs now towered over her men, ready to slaughter them all. Yet, seeing her flag still standing strong amidst the chaos, she refused to give up hope. Kicking her steed into a desperate sprint, she led a fearless charge. Her objective was crystal clear: strike down the enemy commander and end this bloodbath. Hearing her orders, her loyal subordinates roared their battle cries. Together, the holy knights surged forward like an unstoppable silver wave. Clutching her holy pendant, she prayed for the divine strength to push through the enemy lines. The thunderous sound of hooves violently shook the fractured earth. She pushed her horse to its absolute limits, her blade gleaming under the moonlight. But without warning, a sinister purple aura erupted directly in their path. A colossal, terrifying magical skull manifested from the shadows. Dark magic violently tore through the battlefield, instantly halting their momentum. The knights scrambled to pull back, their horses neighing in sheer panic. They had blindly charged right into a massive, deadly magical trap. Before anyone could react, the very earth began to shatter beneath their feet. She gasped in pure horror as the devastating reality set in. Massive boulders rained down from above, mercilessly crushing her men. The ground completely gave way, swallowing the proud knights into an endless abyss. A desperate hand reached out from the rubble, grasping for a salvation that would never come. Thrown into the dirt, battered and broken, she stared blankly as her world collapsed. In her fading consciousness, painful memories flooded back the day she first awakened holy magic as a child. She remembered the warm, gentle praises of the adults, the fleeting feeling of being cherished. Desperate to live up to their overwhelming expectations, she had dedicated her entire life to the sword. But the fateful day she struck down her brother's blade, she realized she had made a grave, irreversible mistake. Her extraordinary talent had only painted a massive, deadly target on her back. Her own brother, terrified she would steal his throne, began plotting her brutal demise. Under the deceptive guise of divine revelation, she was forcibly appointed head of the allied forces. He whispered poison into her ears, promising that dying for God would bring her eternal salvation. But as she lay bleeding in the ruins, she knew the bitter truth: he just wanted her dead. Coughing up blood, she violently forced her shattered body to move. Despite the agonizing betrayal, she screamed at her surviving men to pull themselves together. Using her chipped blade as a makeshift crutch, she stubbornly struggled to her feet. Her eyes burned with a fierce, desperate will to survive against all odds. But her heart plummeted as she looked up to see a horde of orcs lining the cliffside, torches in hand. They were completely surrounded, trapped like helpless rats in a pit. The reflection of roaring flames danced mockingly in her trembling eyes. With a guttural, sickening roar, the orcs hurled their torches down into the gorge. First a devastating ambush, and now a merciless, incendiary attack to burn them alive. Panic consumed her as the terrifying reality set in: there was no escape. A literal sea of hellfire quickly began to swallow the trapped knights. Standing before the raging inferno, her indomitable spirit finally began to break. Hot tears welled up as she questioned what she had sacrificed her entire life for. But just as she surrendered to death, a cool, soothing voice called her name. In a flash of blinding, impossible speed, an orc's head was cleanly severed from its shoulders. She snapped her head up, her tear-filled eyes widening in absolute disbelief. Standing before her, effortlessly holding back the flames with a brilliant blue aura, was the man she had once scorned. With a casual, almost cocky smile, the third prince of Betrayal asked if she was all right. He had fearlessly leaped right into the heart of the fiery death trap just to save her. Without missing a single beat, his rescue operation sprang into motion. A thick, sturdy rope cascaded down the jagged cliff face. Strong hands immediately grabbed hold, securing a desperate escape route for the surviving knights. She could only sit there, utterly paralyzed by the sheer miracle of his arrival. The prince gently pulled her to her feet, his calm demeanor entirely unfazed by the surrounding carnage. Overcome with intense gratitude, the vice commander of the Holy Kingdom immediately dropped to his knees. She watched in stunned silence as her most trusted subordinate bowed before the prince. He formally apologized for their previous disrespect, pledging a lifelong debt to the young royal. The prince graciously accepted the apology, asking only that the Holy Kingdom answer the call if betrayal ever faced ruin. All around them, the prince's elite forces ruthlessly carved through the remaining monster ranks. Realizing their imminent annihilation, the terrified orc commander frantically blew the retreat horn. The prince watched the fleeing beasts, his piercing gaze hardening with lethal intent. Since they had failed to wipe out the paladins, the cowardly monsters were scrambling for their lives. But the prince had absolutely no intention of letting them escape so easily. He commanded his knights to charge forward and hunt down every last one of the vile creatures. The crimson flags of betrayal waved proudly in the night wind as the fierce counterattack began. Suddenly, an overwhelming, ominous energy caught the prince's sharp attention. From the retreating horde, an enormous, heavily scarred orc stepped forward. It was the furious orc commander, roaring in pure, unadulterated rage. Infused with deadly dark magic, the monstrous leader drew back a massive, terrifying bow. She instinctively called out the prince's name, sensing the sheer, catastrophic power of the weapon. But the prince just stood there, completely unbothered, his hand casually resting on his hilt. With a deafening snap, the commander unleashed the devastating shot. The colossal arrow tore through the air, screaming with murderous dark intent. The orc's hand continued to pulse with residual, violent energy. The dark attack pierced the night sky, leaving a massive trail of pure destruction in its wake. The immense magical blast plummeted straight toward the prince like a falling meteor. His eyes suddenly glowed with an intense, chillingly calm blue light. In a fraction of a second, he drew his blade, unleashing his own terrifying, majestic aura. With a single, godlike swing, he intercepted the overwhelming dark magic. The deadly projectile was effortlessly shattered into a million harmless, glowing fragments. A swirling vortex of majestic blue energy enveloped him, entirely dispelling the lingering darkness. A confident, dangerously wicked smirk crept across his face. Realizing the monster was foolishly trying to taunt him, the prince fully prepared to show them why he was a true apex predator. A massive projectile shatters the earth, proving the orc commander is absolutely furious at the prince's meddling. Drawing his blade, the prince summons a brilliant blue aura, ready to answer the monster's brutal challenge. A confident, almost arrogant smirk crosses his face. High above, the relentless horde of massive orcs thunders down the rocky hillside. His sword hums with devastating power as he steps forward to meet the impending wave of death. Yuri rushes up from behind, panic lacing her voice as she realizes what he's about to do. He doesn't even look back, casually continuing his march toward the deadly vanguard. With a fearless grin, he tells her he'll just be a moment, and with an explosive burst of speed he launches himself directly into the enemy lines. Yuri is left staring in sheer disbelief, realizing he fully intends to face the brutal monsters entirely alone. Plunging straight into the fray, his sheer presence instantly draws the hostility of three massive elite orcs. He touches down with a heavy, deliberate thud, bracing his stance. Without a second of hesitation, the beasts swing their crude, bone-crushing weapons. They roar with bloodlust, fully intent on pulverizing the arrogant human. A giant halberd thrusts downward with terrifying momentum, but a surging wave of blue aura violently deflects the fatal blow. He smoothly slides backward across the dirt, rapidly analyzing their relentless assault. His eyes narrow as his mind begins to shift into a higher state of focus. His blade glows brighter, preparing to unleash a long-dormant power. A memory from 5 years ago suddenly surfaces, recalling his old master's teachings about the legendary soul severance. His master had warned him that the battlefield is a chaotic abyss filled with endless variables. As a young boy, he had listened intently to the harsh realities of surviving war. The foundation of survival lay in expanding his responsibilities through agonizing, repeated training. But his master had smiled, noting that the prince's unique soul severance was an entirely different beast. Back in the present, a brutal axe violently cleaves the air where he just stood. He gracefully weaves through the deadly strikes as if dancing with death itself. His master's voice echoes, explaining that this technique allows him to instantly grasp the entire battlefield, transforming pure intuition into a flawless, unstoppable sword path. He easily slips beneath the monster's clumsy guard, leaving the roaring brute to strike nothing but empty earth. The ground violently shatters as their intense auras finally collide in a deafening shockwave. Using the momentum of the blast, he spins effortlessly through the chaotic air. He lands softly right in the center of the enraged trio, exactly where he wants them. His grip tightens around the hilt of his glowing sword. The blade resonates with pure, concentrated mana. The twin orcs lunge forward, desperate to tear him apart before he can strike. But in a blinding blue flash, a terrifying geyser of blood erupts. He stands completely unfazed, his aura pulsing fiercely as the deadly monsters stagger backward. A heavy thud echoes across the dirt as the first strike connects. His master had promised that when the right moment came, his body would react entirely on its own. He skids to a halt, reassessing the rapidly changing flow of combat. Facing 3 elite warriors simultaneously is a guaranteed death sentence for any normal knight. A massive spiked club hurtles down toward his skull. It has been years since he last tasted the raw, intoxicating danger of true combat, but that familiar thrill quickly begins to awaken his dormant, lethal instincts. He tightens his grip, absolutely refusing to let this golden opportunity slip away. Suddenly, his vision violently shifts. Mesmerizing, glowing pathways physically map themselves across the monster's giant frame. He instantly perceives the most optimal, devastating sword path. A flawless web of fatal strikes illuminates brilliantly in his mind. With a single, explosive movement, he perfectly traces the glowing lines. He phases past the lumbering beast like an executioner's ghost. Deep gashes instantly rip open across the monster's impenetrable hardened skin. A torrent of blood paints the air as the brute howls in absolute agony. Before the first body even hits the floor, he has already vanished, moving to his next target. A terrifying crimson spray erupts as the final enemy is effortlessly carved to pieces. He stares down at the fallen corpses, quietly noting that his body is still struggling to keep pace with his rapid thoughts. The fierce adrenaline slowly begins to fade as he catches his breath in the icy wind. Standing victorious amidst the carnage, he decides this rusty level of skill will just have to suffice for now. The severed, useless weapons of his enemies lie discarded in the mud. Without wasting another second, he grabs a fallen spear and loudly calls out to the retreating Orc commander. The towering, terrifying leader stops and turns, his glowing eyes locking onto the lone human. Gathering all his remaining aura, the prince fiercely grips the stolen weapon. The air around him violently spirals, charging the spear with crackling energy. And with devastating force, he hurls the weapon entirely across the battlefield. The Orc commander rapidly crosses his twin axes to block the incoming projectile. A vicious, incredibly knowing smile spreads across the prince's bloody face. The spear whistles through the air like a crashing meteor. It detonates violently against the commander's axes in a blinding, explosive flash. The surrounding Orc warriors freeze in absolute horror at the sheer power of the strike. The massive commander growls, completely unharmed but deeply, personally insulted. Thick dust slowly settles over the incredibly tense battlefield, but instead of charging back into the fray, the beast turns his back in defeat. The shattered, burned remnants of the spear clatter uselessly to the ground. The commander violently grinds his fangs in sheer, helpless frustration. Following their leader's silent command, the remaining monstrous horde finally begins to retreat into the shadows. The prince had fully expected them to swarm him all at once in a blind, bloodthirsty rage. But he realizes they calculated that suffering any further losses simply wasn't worth the cost. He watches them run, hoping that parting strike was enough payback for the cheap arrow they shot at him earlier. A proud, highly satisfied grin graces his battle-worn face. Yuri frantically sprints up the hill, desperately shouting to check if he's severely injured. He lazily brushes the dirt off his armor, smiling and assuring her he's perfectly fine. She arrives completely out of breath, staring at him in sheer awe. The massive, mutilated bodies of the elite Orc squad litter the bloody ground behind him. He casually turns, asking how it feels to finally wrap things up and secure the area. Yuri is left momentarily speechless by his casual demeanor after such a bloodbath, but a deeply relieved, grateful smile quickly replaces her initial shock. She knows this massive, impossible victory for the Allied forces is entirely thanks to him. The prince simply shrugs off the high praise, keeping his cool composure. A heavy, peaceful silence finally falls over the fallen monsters. Deep within the dark forest, an enraged fist violently obliterates a massive tree trunk. The Orc commander stands hidden in the shadows, his warrior's pride completely shattered by a single human. A terrifying, suffocating bloodlust radiates from his massive, trembling frame. His glowing red eye promises absolute, merciless slaughter the very next time their paths cross. The night air is thick with whispers as rumors about Prince Yuri spread through the tavern like wildfire. Many expected him to be nothing more than a degenerate gambler, wasting his royal status on reckless games. But those who truly witness his actions know that such tall tales are nothing but baseless lies. It is time to set the record straight and finally reveal the truth behind his hidden achievements. Even surrounded by the haze of alcohol, his presence demands a different kind of attention. Observers can't help but wonder if there is more to this royal than what meets the eye, as his behavior remains deeply mysterious. He possesses an unsettling insight, one that cuts right through even the most carefully guarded secrets of a seasoned assassin. With a fearlessness that defies logic, he walks right into the heart of a battlefield completely on his own. He navigates every challenge with an eerie precision, always appearing several steps ahead of his enemies. It is as if he is playing a game where he already knows every move that will be made in the future. Inside the quiet walls of the inn, a search for a mysterious individual begins. Details are scarce, but the target is a skilled swordsman with distinct dark brown hair. The description is vague, leaving those listening to rack their brains for anyone who might fit the bill. It is noted that this person struggled with the local language, a detail that might just be the key to identifying him. Everything clicks into place when an awkward foreign accent is remembered. The person in question had a very specific order, leaving a subtle trail for anyone sharp enough to track it. He had even inquired about the route to Balshad, revealing his ultimate destination. With the final piece of the puzzle secured, gratitude is offered for the unexpected breakthrough. Information like this isn't free, even when it's given without the explicit expectation of a reward. Balshad is a dangerous place, serving as the massive assembly point for the Allied forces. The path ahead is clear, and the pursuit is now set on an intercept course. There is no time to waste. The race to find this mysterious swordsman has officially begun. One of the 10 strongest on the continent is out there, and he must be reached before it is too late. The aftermath of the battle in Gid leaves no time for rest, as the group pushes forward toward their next objective. Having learned harsh lessons from the tragedy at the Holy Kingdom, they refuse to be caught off guard again. The nights are spent in rigorous preparation, ensuring that every camp is secure against any threat. The troops are finally beginning to adapt to the grueling pace, their instincts sharpening with every passing day. Even the most basic tasks are handled with a new level of efficiency, born from the fear of repeating past mistakes. Success on the road is often built on the quiet, steady work of those leading the way. Stepping away to survey the perimeter, he leaves the men to handle the final touches of their camp, but the peace is shattered by the sound of a harsh confrontation brewing in the shadows. He demands to know why they are wandering outside his sight, his patience wearing thin. Hostility boils over as insults are hurled at a vulnerable target, fueled by prejudice and paranoia. Accusations of being a spy fly fast, painting a target on someone who has nowhere to run. Desperation fills the air as the accused struggles to defend his innocence against baseless claims. The situation spirals out of control, with threats turning ugly and physical. The belongings of the innocent are callously targeted, as the attackers seek to strip him of everything he holds dear. He is left defenseless, watching as they try to destroy what little he has left. The confrontation is interrupted by a sharp, commanding presence that silences the chaos instantly. The air turns cold as he demands an explanation for their behavior, while everyone else is working tirelessly. The excuse falls flat, met with a chilling display of authority that leaves no room for debate. He makes it clear that he will not tolerate their petty grievances any longer. The message is delivered with absolute finality, and the offenders are left with no choice but to retreat. Tension lingers even after they leave, replaced by the weight of the reality they face. A quiet moment of gratitude passes between them, but the path ahead remains heavy. He offers a chance to intervene, a small gesture of mercy in a brutal world. He speaks of the harsh reality of human nature, where people are judged by their appearance rather than their worth. It is a brutal cycle, one he is intimately familiar with, and he knows how to survive it. The offer of help is tempting, yet he hesitates, knowing the price he might have to pay. If he takes the easy path, he risks losing the very thing he has fought so hard to build. Curiosity peaks as he finally asks the question that has been lingering in the air. The answer is simple, yet incredibly difficult to achieve. He just wants to be accepted for who he is. It is a dream that seems impossible, yet there is a flicker of hope in his eyes. A compromise is reached, allowing him to stay under a specific role to keep the peace. He knows that this current arrangement is only temporary, a fragile shield against the coming storm. The reality of the future looms, waiting for the mission to come to an end. He is entrusted to learn a new craft, one that could secure his place in a world that fears him. Magic is the tool that will bridge the gap, but the burden of learning it falls entirely on him. It is a heavy task, but he knows that it is the only way he will ever be truly free. The camp is prepared, but the threat is still very real, lurking just beyond the edge of their vision. Beneath the silver light of the moon, the camp looks peaceful, but the reality is far more tense. Detailed plans are laid out, every contingency accounted for, but there is still a sense of unease. They have been thorough, covering supplies and stationing lookouts at every turn. Yet, even with all their precautions, the feeling that they are being watched refuses to go away. The map holds no answers, and the silence of the night feels like the calm before a storm. The fear of a repeat attack haunts them, knowing that the enemy is capable of anything. He stares at the map, his mind racing through every possible scenario, preparing for the worst. The silence is shattered by a sudden, frantic cry that echoes through the camp. The nightmare has begun, and the enemies are already upon them. The initial shock is fleeting, replaced immediately by the cold necessity of survival. Chaos erupts as the first signs of battle light up the night sky. He moves with speed, his instincts kicking in as he rushes toward the source of the danger. The battlefield turns into an inferno, revealing that the situation is far more dire than anyone anticipated. The enemy is using more than just brute strength, they are wielding fire with devastating precision. He is stunned for a moment, realizing that the level of sophistication in this ambush is entirely unexpected. His mind races to figure out the source of their power, searching for a way to stop it before it consumes everything. The camp is burning, and the flames are rising higher with each passing second. The realization hits him hard. They have to prioritize stopping those who are fueling this fire. He calls out, his voice cutting through the panic, rallying the others to action. There is no time to dwell on how they manage this, only the immediate threat matters now. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, requiring immediate and decisive action. He takes command, directing his units to split up and neutralize the threat. With his sword glowing with an ominous, powerful aura, he prepares to enter the fray. The power surging through him is immense, a testament to the skill he has been honing. He is ready to face whoever is behind this, fully prepared to take the fight to them. Every movement he makes is precise, leaving nothing to chance as he carves his path through the chaos. The blue flames dance around him, a storm of energy that mirrors his own resolve. He stands as the center of the storm, unshakable and ready for whatever comes next. The intensity of his presence is overwhelming, enough to make even the boldest enemy falter. He moves forward, closing the distance between himself and his unknown opponent. The time for talk is over, now is the time for action. He is fully committed, his eyes locked on the target hidden in the shadows. The time has come to reveal the face behind this flashy stunt and end the battle once and for all. The battlefield was bathed in a chaotic purple glow as enemy magic rained down from the sky. Seeing the devastating sorcery tearing through their ranks, the prince immediately barked orders to Jared and Sir Raymond. He commanded his trusted subordinates to instantly disperse and take full control of their respective units. With the vanguard secured, the prince knew he had to cut the head off the snake to stop the bombardment. He ordered his men to push forward and uncover the face of the enemy commander behind this flashy stunt. But the prince had no intention of just sitting back and watching his soldiers do all the dirty work. A fierce, suffocating blue mana violently flared around his body as he prepared his own counterattack. He drew his heavy blade, the steel humming with immense, concentrated magical energy. With a single explosive step, he launched himself forward into the darkness. Leaving a blinding trail of blue light, he dashed straight toward the heart of the enemy lines. His piercing eyes quickly locked onto a massive, looming silhouette waiting in the shadows. A tattered red flag fluttered amidst the thick, suffocating smoke of the battlefield. The prince carved his way effortlessly through the lesser monsters, pushing toward the center of the chaos. Standing before him was a towering orc warrior, radiating an overwhelming and terrifying bloodlust. Orcful, the prince muttered under his breath, instantly recognizing the imposing presence of the beast. The monster slowly turned its head, locking eyes with the human who dared to approach it. Unfazed by the massive size difference, the prince pointed his glowing blade directly at the behemoth. He coolly demanded to know if this was the creature responsible for the magical assault on his camp. Instead of answering, the massive orc surged forward with terrifying, earth-shattering speed. The prince barely brought his sword up in time to block a devastating overhead strike. Blinding sparks flew as he deflected the heavy blow, sliding back across the dirt from the sheer force. The prince's eyes narrowed instantly. He realized right away that this was no ordinary mindless monster. Its movements were far too calculated, its footwork far too precise for a mere beast. The orc grinned menacingly, perfectly sensing the human's sudden realization. It was blatantly obvious that this creature possessed an immense, terrifying amount of actual battle experience. Without missing a beat, the monster swung its massive battle axe again, tearing through the air with lethal force. The prince knew that fighting in a stationary close-quarters brawl against such raw physical power was a death sentence. He quickly sidestepped the crushing blow, realizing he needed to secure a safe distance to analyze his opponent. But the orc refused to let up, unleashing a relentless flurry of wild, earth-shattering strikes. The prince parried the onslaught with gritted teeth, the brutal impacts rattling his very bones. The sheer weight of the monster's weapon sent violent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. He was forcefully pushed backward, his armored boots skidding deep into the mud. Catching his breath, the prince finally acknowledged the undeniable reality of the beast's terrifying strength. He openly admitted that this specific orc was on a completely different, horrifying level compared to the foot soldiers. But instead of fear, a confident, predatory smirk slowly crossed the prince's face. He tightened his grip on his hilt, his own blue mana flaring to life with twice the intensity. Taunting the giant beast, he boldly challenged it to show him absolutely everything it had. The prince surged forward like a missile, a massive wave of condensed blue energy trailing behind his blade. He leaped into the air, bringing his sword down with an incredibly crushing force. The orc instinctively raised its weapon, blocking the strike in a violent explosion of dark, twisted magic. The massive impact of their clash created a shockwave that completely cracked the solid ground beneath them. Dark purple lightning violently crackled from the orc's weapon, fighting against the prince's overwhelming blue aura. The prince gritted his teeth, instantly noticing the unnatural, suffocating weight behind the monster's defense. He cursed his own oversight, realizing he should have known better when he first heard reports of orcs using sorcery. A dark, venomous energy dripped endlessly from the heavy blade of the beast's axe. He had initially wondered if the monsters had somehow stolen and weaponized gunpowder, but feeling this twisted, heavy mana firsthand, the terrifying truth finally clicked into place. This wasn't cheap gunpowder creating those explosions, it was pure, corrupted magical sorcery. He remembered the towering flames that had nearly engulfed their entire encampment just moments ago. The twisted mana confirmed his worst fear. These savage orc warriors had somehow learned to use the intricate mana method. This massive revelation meant the enemy army was far more sophisticated and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. But instead of falling into despair, a cold, calculating smile spread across the prince's face. His piercing blue eyes glowed with intense, absolute focus as he stared down his target. He realized that the massive beast standing before him wasn't just a regular frontline soldier. He openly mocked the creature, accurately guessing that it was a member of their elite fighting unit. Without giving the monster a single chance to respond, the prince unleashed a devastating, blinding wave of mana. The blue energy coiled tightly around his blade, sharpening the edge to a molecular deadly point. The orc roared in absolute fury, swinging its massive axe in a desperate attempt to counter the sudden surge of power. But the prince was completely unbothered by the ferocious, desperate display of raw strength. He perfectly read the beast's attack trajectory. Slipping past its heavy guard with blinding, ghost-like speed, he closed the distance in an instant, his cold eyes locked entirely onto his target's most vulnerable spot. His sword flashed in the dark, aiming a lightning-fast, lethal strike directly at the monster's exposed throat. The razor-sharp blade dug deep into the thick flesh, a violent burst of blood erupting from the wound. But instead of a clean, decapitating slice, the prince's blade abruptly and forcefully stopped halfway through. The orc growled through the pain, dark purple mana flaring violently around its thick neck to harden its skin. The prince clicked his tongue, immediately realizing what the cunning beast had just done to survive. It had forcefully concentrated every ounce of its mana into its throat to block the fatal damage. Surviving by a hair, the monster spat out a guttural, furious roar, shouting curses in its native, demonic tongue. Enraged by the near-death experience, the beast swung its weapon blindly, forcing the prince to quickly pull back. He expertly deflected the frantic, wild counterattack, keeping his composure completely intact. The orc tightly gripped its massive weapon, its severed, bleeding veins spraying dark blood wildly into the air. But the prince absolutely refused to give the injured creature a single second to recover its breath. He dashed forward once more, his sword leaving a terrifying, beautiful arc of deadly blue light. With a brutal, sweeping strike, he slashed right through the monster's remaining physical defenses. The incredibly heavy impact sent the massive beast reeling backwards in pure, unadulterated agony. More blood sprayed violently across the ruined battlefield as the prince's blade found its mark yet again. Despite the thick, heavy armor protecting the orc, the sheer force of the royal's blow broke straight through it. The prince's eyes gleamed with cold, calculating, and ruthless precision. He channeled even more raw power into his weapon, the blue aura burning fiercely like a roaring, unstoppable fire. He lowered his stance, preparing to end this dragged-out fight once and for all. His glowing blade hummed loudly, with an overwhelming, terrifying energy that seemed to distort the air itself. He stepped forward, his suffocating presence overwhelming the heavily injured, bleeding monster. The desperate orc flared its dark purple mana for one final, suicidal stand against the human. It lunged forward with everything it had, pouring all its remaining strength into a massive, earth-shattering swing. But the prince didn't dodge. He confidently met the desperate attack head-on. The two opposing forces collided violently, creating a massive, blinding explosion of blue and purple light. The sheer overwhelming power of the prince's strike completely shattered the monster's twisted, corrupt sorcery. A massive shockwave violently tore through the air, completely blowing away all the surrounding rocks and debris. The beast's dark energy was instantly and effortlessly swallowed up by the prince's overwhelming blue light. The raging battlefield suddenly fell utterly silent as the thick dust slowly began to clear from the massive impact crater. A shattered piece of the monster's heavy armor clattered lifelessly against the scorched rocks. The prince stared coldly through the dissipating smoke, entirely unfazed by the massive explosion he had just caused. He calmly walked forward, his eyes fixed firmly on the massive silhouette of the defeated beast. The giant orc lay completely paralyzed on the ruined ground, its body entirely broken by the final devastating strike. Standing over his defeated foe, the prince raised his glowing sword high into the cold night air. With a fierce, dominant battle cry, he brought the heavy steel blade crashing straight down. The weapon pierced violently into the beast's chest, a massive spray of dark blood erupting upon impact. The colossal creature convulsed violently for a brief moment before finally going completely limp on the ruined earth. The prince stood victorious over the fallen elite, knowing the immediate threat to his camp had been neutralized. He stepped back from the corpse, his blood-stained boots sloshing slightly in the blood-soaked mud. Staring down at the bleeding, barely breathing monster, the prince made a crucial, split-second decision. Since this creature was clearly a high-ranking elite, it held incredibly valuable military intelligence. He knew it would be an absolute waste to let it bleed out and die right now. Suddenly, the sound of familiar, hurried footsteps approached from behind the lingering smoke. Jared and Sir Raymond rushed onto the scene, immediately asking if their commander was injured. The prince calmly nodded to reassure them, instantly shifting his sharp focus back to the overall battle situation. He efficiently asked his commanders for an immediate status report on the rest of the encampment. They quickly confirmed that the vast majority of the ambushing enemy forces had been completely wiped out. Satisfied with the swift victory, the prince ordered them to gather all the surviving monsters into one secure location. He gestured down to the broken elite at his feet, commanding his men to drag the heavy beast along with the rest. With a cold, calculating gaze, he announced that the real brutal interrogation of the orc army was finally about to begin. The flickering campfire barely holds back the chill of the night. After a fierce and chaotic skirmish, the camp finally takes a moment to breathe. The prince's loyal healing mage carefully tends to his battered shoulder. Warm restorative magic seeps deep into his strained muscles. The minor injuries from the sudden orc encounter fade away instantly. Feeling refreshed, the prince decides it's time to get down to business. He turns toward his men, ready to extract some much-needed answers. Suddenly, a heavy wooden leg slams onto the dirt path. The soldiers proudly present him with an over-the-top, majestic commander's throne. The prince blinks, completely caught off guard by the extravagant gift. A small, amused smirk tugs at the corner of his lips. Deciding to play along, he confidently steps up to the grand seat. He admits that having a bit of luxury in the battlefield isn't such a bad idea. Settling into the crimson cushions, he instantly looks the part of a ruthless ruler. He clears his throat, shifting his demeanor into something far more dangerous. Staring down at the bound captives, he announces the start of the interrogation. He raises a single hand, demanding utter silence from the monstrous prisoners. His cold gaze sweeps over them, promising that they will be questioned one by one. To set the tone, a heavy sword is violently slammed into the earth. Searing flames instantly erupt along the blade, lighting up the darkness. The roaring fire casts terrifying, dancing shadows across the campsite. The first prisoner is brutally kicked forward, falling hard to his knees. The massive beast glares up, his red eyes burning with unbroken defiance. The prince casually asks a simple question. Who ordered the night ambush? Instead of answering, the orc spits out a stream of guttural, furious curses. The trembling translator quickly clarifies that the beast is throwing wild insults. The prince's loyal knight steps forward without a single word. He ruthlessly seizes the cursing orc by the thick binds around his neck. With a fluid, merciless motion, his heavy blade arcs through the air. Searing fire trails behind the steel as it cleaves straight through flesh. The violent strike is instantaneous and completely unforgiving. The orc's severed head tumbles into the dirt, silenced forever. The remaining prisoners flinch, their previous bravado shattering instantly. The knight calmly steps back, his bloody duty fulfilled. The fiery warning fades, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. The smoldering remains serve as a grim reminder of the prince's impatience. Suddenly, a ring of swirling condensed water magic materializes out of thin air. The prince raises his hand, effortlessly commanding the aquatic blade himself. The razor-sharp current lashes out like an executioner's whip. It crashes down with crushing force onto the next prisoner in line. The high-pressure magic slices deeply and fatally into the beast. Even his own loyal men are startled by the sudden, ruthless execution. The dead orc collapses, its heavy body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The prince coldly orders the dripping corpse to be dragged away. He locks eyes with the third prisoner, his patience wearing dangerously thin. This orc frantically shouts out in his native tongue, desperate to survive. Sweat pours down his rugged face as he realizes death is mere inches away. A dark, satisfied smile crosses the prince's face. Finally, he has found a monster that is actually willing to talk. The lifeless bodies of his kin lie nearby, serving as the perfect incentive for honesty. The execution was flawless, sending a crystal-clear message to the sole survivor. The prince leans forward, listening intently to the ongoing translation. The name Okua drops from the translator's trembling lips, changing everything. Memories of a blood-soaked past life instantly flood the prince's mind. He vividly remembers the terrifying silhouette of the true king of orcs. The desperate prisoner glares up, knowing this information is his only bargaining chip. The translator stammers, revealing that the orc is demanding a sacred oath of honor. The old mage shakes in fear as he repeats the beast's audacious request. The creature refuses to speak further unless the prince swears not to kill him. The prince absorbs this bold demand, his expression completely unreadable. The heavy silence stretches on, thickening the tension throughout the camp. To everyone's absolute shock, the prince casually agrees to the terms. His loyal knight instantly protests, stunned by this sudden show of mercy. He urgently argues that sparing a monster of this caliber is a fatal mistake. But the prince merely raises a hand, silencing the objections of his men. Keeping his word, he demands to know exactly how Akua orchestrated the ambush. The orc explains that their king possesses an unnatural method of gathering intelligence. The knight grimaces, realizing they are dealing with a highly coordinated and deadly threat. The prince's gaze hardens, confirming his worst suspicions about the enemy's wide reach. He presses further, asking the most crucial question, just how strong is this orc king? A twisted, deeply prideful grin stretches across the captured monster's face. The captive boldly boasts that Okua is unmatched by any living creature in the world. The translator shrinks back, terrified by the raw reverence echoing in the beast's voice. A cold wind sweeps through the camp as the grim reality of their enemies sets in. The surrounding guards grip their sword hilts, deeply unnerved by the chilling declaration. One knight instinctively draws his blade, sensing a dangerous shift in the prisoner's energy. The orc's eyes suddenly glow with a feral, murderous light, but the prince simply chuckles, his amusement dark and completely mocking. He leans down, coldly whispering that humans are far more treacherous than any beast. Enraged by the insult, the massive orc violently snaps his thick restraints like fragile twigs. The knights shout in panic as the towering monster breaks completely free. Heavy, clawed feet stomp into the dirt, launching the beast forward with explosive speed. A deafening, blood-curdling roar tears from the creature's throat as it lunges for the throne. It throws a massive, bone-crushing punch aimed straight for the prince's head. Yet, the prince doesn't even flinch, his eyes locked dead onto the incoming attacker. A rapid blur of steel intercepts the fatal strike before it can land. The blonde knight stands completely firm, his glowing sword blocking the lethal blow. Dust violently kicks up from the sheer, earth-shattering force of the collision. The loyal guard holds his ground, protecting his liege without a single second of hesitation. But behind the struggling knight, a silent, deadly shadow suddenly shifts into motion. A blinding flash of silver magic cuts through the air faster than the eye can track. The prince casually walks past the frozen beast, his blade already returning to its scabbard. A massive spray of crimson erupts into the night sky, ending the interrogation once and for all.